Chapter 349. The secular world was like a sea of bitterness. But there were always a few lucky people. Even in the secular world where all living things were bitter, they were still the darling of fate. For Wang Yuetong, her life should not have the so-called sorrow and pressure. As the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai and a genius with wind vein, she might not be as dazzling as her brother Wang Xingxiao's wind and thunder veins, heavenly king heart and exquisite bone, but a wind vein was worth cultivating in any superpower. However, no one in the Wang family of Beihai had ever strictly supervised and sharpened her martial arts. Whether it was Wang Tianzong or Summer Solstice, they had never made any clear requirements for her from childhood to adulthood. Happiness had been running through her childhood and girlhood, sweet as a dream. This was a life where she didn't need to worry about anything or struggle for any fantasy. She also practiced martial arts, but she never paid attention to it. 3 years ago, she was at the peak of the ice-condensing realm, and now she still hadn't entered the fire-flaming realm. Wang Yuetong also had some contact with the operation of commercial investment capital. Her sister-in-law, who was internally determined to be the future hostess of the Wang family of Beihai since she was born, was a real genius in this regard. When some famous economists, professors, business tycoons and financial tycoons taught that sister-in-law, she listened in a lot. The Wang family of Beihai was unrivaled in the field of biological gene technology. There were all kinds of gene potions for different purposes. Wang Yuetong also studied them and used some extremely precious raw materials to make a batch of invaluable facial masks. In addition, Wang Yuetong also learned a little bit of bel canto, ballet, piano, guitar, guzheng, painting and calligraphy. She could be said to be a real all-rounder, knowing everything but proficient in none. From childhood to adulthood, she did whatever she wanted to do, and no one forced her to do it if she didn't want to do it. Because her life was destined not to have too many ups and downs. Her future was stable, happy and free. It was noble and elegant, calm and luxurious, dinner and champagne, sweet and leisurely. Her life would not have ups and downs and difficult setbacks, so it was good to be casual. Because of this, the entanglement between Wang Yuetong and Li Tianlan was regarded by the whole Wang family of Beihai as Wang Yuetong's self-abandonment. Abandoning oneself to degeneration. Wang Yuetong did not deny this statement, but she had never regretted it. She always felt that a woman's life was only complete when she met a man who made her have the courage to fly into the fire like a moth. He had fallen and fallen. Even if he really became an inseparable and chaotic relationship in the future and became a karmic obstacle entangled with gratitude and grudges, there was nothing to regret. At least Wang Yuetong didn't regret it. It was rainy on July 22nd in Huading. The rain continued to fall from dawn to dusk. The rain continued to fall without any signs of stopping. Wang Yuetong silently walked out of the study and gently closed the door. In the study, Li Tianlan sat in a chair, still sleeping quietly. Li Tianlan had slept for nearly 48 hours since he came back from Lin'an, but there was still no sign of him waking up. His breathing was steady and regular, as if he had fallen into the deepest sleep. Wang Yuetong hesitated several times and finally did not wake him up. This was the 5th time she had entered the study. Li Tianlan did not wake up, so she could only continue to wait. Waiting. From the moment she made up her mind to be with Li Tianlan, she knew that this was something she had to get used to in the future. The TV was on in the hall on the 1st floor. Wang Yuetong held the railing and looked down. On the wide sofa, Dongqing Rushi's body was curled up, looking lonely. Wang Yuetong frowned and looked a little hesitant. Li Tianlan had been back for 2 days. Dongqing Rushi naturally lived here. Neither of them woke Li Tianlan up, nor did they say a word to each other. Wang Yuetong stayed in her room most of the time. Dongqing Rushi was really free. She meditated, cooked, ran in the morning and watched TV. Nothing was delayed. It seemed that they could not stand the atmosphere here. Yu Donglai and Lin Yuxian were rarely at home. One went out to visit friends and the other went out to play. They left for nearly 2 days and did not come back until noon. At this time no one knew where they were. Wang Yuetong hesitated whether to talk to Dongqing Rushi or not. She didn't even know what to talk about. She just felt that it was very wrong. Dongqing Rushi might be able to deal with such an awkward atmosphere calmly, but she couldn't. Otherwise, she would not have locked herself in the room for 2 days in a row with an attitude close to concession. Wang Yuetong narrowed her eyes and quietly looked at Dongqing Rushi on the sofa downstairs. Dongqing Rushi on the sofa seemed to feel the hostile eyes, so she raised her head. One was up and the other was down, 6 floors high, but they were still clear in each other's eyes. Wang Yuetong took a deep breath, turned to the elevator and planned to go downstairs. The phone suddenly rang. Wang Yuatong looked at the caller ID, and her face suddenly changed. The phone was still ringing. On the screen, the word "Daddy" seemed to have suddenly become extremely sharp, easily piercing through all her defenses. Wang Yuetong's hand holding the phone trembled a little. She pressed the answer button and gently said hello. "Yuatong, where are you?" On the phone, Wang Tianzong's voice was clear and calm, without any extra emotion. "In Huading." Wang Yuatong bit her lip and whispered. During the 3 years when Li Tianlan left, the relationship between her and Wang Tianzong was extremely stiff. They didn't even talk on the phone a few times a year. Wang Tianzong had a headache about his daughter's degeneration, while Wang Yuatong continued to insist in silence. If Li Tianlan didn't appear, the relationship between father and daughter would always be stiff. "East Emperor Palace?" Wang Tianzong asked. Wang Yuetong's face was a little pale, but she didn't say a word. On the phone, Wang Tianzong seemed to sigh softly. "Don't you go back to Yuzhou? Your uncle Yi called me several times and said that you asked for 10 days leave, but you haven't gone back yet." "Dad, I want to resign." Wang Yuatong held the phone and said very carefully but firmly. "Resign?" Wang Tianzong thought for a while and said blandly, "If you resign, what can you do?" Wang Yuatong fell silent again. She knew what she was doing, but she didn't know how to say it. She believed that her father on the other end of the phone could understand what she meant. Wang Tianzong was also silent. On both ends of the phone, between father and daughter, all the emotions seemed to be completely frozen for a moment. "Go home." After a long time, Wang Tianzong said blandly, "I won't go back." Wang Yuatong suddenly laughed. Her voice was very clear, with the lightness and cleverness that Wang Tianzong was familiar with, but there was a trace of persistence in it. "Dad, I want to stay in East Emperor Palace and stay with him." "He's an enemy." Wang Tianzong's tone was simple and straightforward. "But he's not my enemy. For me, he's my man." Wang Yuatong said softly. "Have you really made up your mind?" Wang Tianzong said calmly, "Do you really want to go all the way?" "This is not a decision." Wang Yuatong said softly, "I just respect my own feelings. Dad, I'm not angry with you by saying this. I can be sure that I really love him. Maybe in your eyes, I haven't been with him for a long time. But since love at first sight can happen, it's not difficult to understand that I love him. I believe that he's a man worthy of all my feelings. It doesn't matter who he is to the Wang family of Beihai, an enemy, a friend, or a stranger. Dad, I'm just a little girl spoiled by you. I haven't done anything for the family, and I haven't thought about anything for the family. It's the same now. Whether he's an enemy or a friend of the family, I love him. I can't turn back and I don't want to turn back. Even if you put aside your standpoint, he may not be suitable for you." Wang Tianzong said calmly, "You can hand over your whole life, but Li Tianlan's life is destined to be more than love. Do you remember my evaluation of Li Tianlan when I first met him?" Wang Yuetong's eyes were a little dazed. She remembered the meeting between Li Tianlan and her father in Huading. At that time, she actually didn't know her father's evaluation of Li Tianlan. Wang Xingxiao conveyed the evaluation to her afterward. Only 8 words. "A wolf's ambition was never a good match." I probably know something about the Li family situation over the years, so I can guess Li Tianlan's psychology. Apart from potential, he had nothing else. That was why he wanted so much. Power, wealth, status, women, he wants everything. What kind of woman is Qin Weibai? It's no exaggeration to say that if I were 10 years younger, even I would be tempted. Of course, I would just be tempted and I wouldn't really do anything. No matter who gets such a woman, he should be satisfied. But Li Tianlan is not satisfied. He still wants you, wants Dongqing Rushi. I can be sure that he will have more than 3 or 5 women in the future. You may have a place in his heart, but you will never be the most important. You will always be just one of his many women. You love him, but does he love you? He may have real feelings for 1 or 2 women, but with Qin Weibai, you don't have a big chance. Let's make a bet. You take the phone to Li Tianlan now. As long as I hear Li Tianlan say sincerely that he loves my daughter, I will not oppose your relationship in the future. How about that?" Wang Tianzong was surprisingly talkative. In recent years, Zhongzhou Sword Emperor had become more and more reticent. It could be seen that he was really worried about Wang Yuatong. Wang Yuatong bit her lip and felt a little wronged, but she did not agree to bet with her father. She held the phone tightly and forced herself to calm down. "Dad, I've decided. I'm sorry." Wang Tianzong suddenly fell silent. After a long time, when Wang Yuatong was about to hang up the phone, 3 words came from the phone. "Go home." Wang Tianzong said and hung up the phone directly. Wang Yuatong burst into tears in an instant. "Go home." Wang Tianzong said these 3 words twice. But the meaning was completely different. Wang Yuetong wiped her tears and her eyes became firm again. She turned into the elevator and went downstairs. In the hall on the first floor, Dongqing Rushi was still sitting on the sofa watching Tom and Jerry, which was very childish for adults. She held the remote control in her hand and smiled quietly. Yu Donglai and Lin Yu were sitting in a remote corner of the hall playing chess. The moment Wang Yuetong came out, both of them focused on her at the same time. Wang Yuetong's eyes were slightly red, but she looked very calm. She didn't know until the moment Wang Tianzong hung up the phone. Just as she had just braced herself to answer her father's call. There were some things, no matter how reluctant she was, she had to face them. She took a deep breath, walked directly to Dongqing Rushi, reached out her hand and said blandly, "Give it to me." Chapter 350. The war between women could never be as brutal as the men's fists, but the forms that were displayed were more colorful. There were verbal battles on different occasions, open and covert attacks from every corner, sarcasm and ridicule without batting an eyelid, 2 extremely beautiful young women from extraordinary family backgrounds. Even if they were to pull each other's hair or ears, it would still be a rare sight to see. This was King lively. Otherwise, why would the ratings of some palace dramas in recent years far exceed those of war dramas? Those rising ratings were not all contributed by sisters, aunts and aunts. No, young men also loved it. Lin Yuxian was such a man. He liked lively scenes. At present, the battle between Dongqing Rushi and Wang Yuetong seemed to have just begun, but it was enough to make him excited. He sat in the corner of the hall with Yu Donglai and was too lazy to play chess for a while. He looked around and found that there were no snacks around, so he casually lit a cigarette and looked at Dongqing Rushi and Wang Yuetong, who were confronting each other. He gloated and muttered to himself, "No, no, no." Yu Donglai shook his head helplessly. The old man was old and had little interest in watching lively scenes. He had already wondered if he should go upstairs and take out Li Tianlan, who had slept for 2 days. The silent confrontation in front of the TV continued. Wang Yuetong kept reaching out and became calmer. "Give it to me." Dongqing Rushi looked up at Wang Yuetong. Her eyes were as clear as water, and her small hand subconsciously clenched the remote control in her hand. Wang Yuetong did not urge her. She just reached out and waited quietly. But no one doubted that she would be savage when she was impatient. She was now just a young expert who had not yet entered the fire-flaming realm. In the face of Dongqing Rushi of the thunder-shocking realm, there was a huge gap in their combat strength. But as 2 women who had the same man, the martial arts realm was actually nothing. Dongqing Rushi hesitated, pursed her lips, and handed the remote control to Wang Yuetong. Her expression was neither aggrieved nor angry. She just looked at her quietly. Wang Yuetong took the remote control with many buttons and aimed it at the TV. Although it was called a television, it was actually a giant screen that was almost beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Its specifications were almost equivalent to the sum of 2 giant screens in a movie theater. The screen occupied the entire front wall of the hall, and it was so domineering that it was almost exaggerated. It was installed here by Wang Yuetong herself 3 years ago. It was installed according to the specifications of the Beihai Province Police Department Command Center. All the functions were available, and the TV broadcast function was just the tip of the iceberg. Wang Yuetong pressed several buttons. The image of the cat and mouse that occupied the entire wall began to shrink. The huge screen might look very comfortable, but it was hard for the eyes to accept after a long time. Wang Yuetong adjusted the picture to a more comfortable size, handed the remote control back to Dongqing Rushi and asked, "Is it much better now?" Dongqing Rushi took the remote control in a daze and said obediently, "Thank you. Tianlan should wake up in the evening. I plan to cook dinner for him. Let's go grocery shopping together." Wang Yuetong continued to speak in a lukewarm tone, without kindness or malice. "Sure." Dongqing Rushi sat on the sofa and seemed to instinctively make a defensive posture, wrapping her hands around her slender and straight legs. "I want Tianlan to accompany me tonight." Wang Yuetong looked down at Dongqing Rushi. Silence. Either she broke out in silence or she would die in silence. Dongqing Rushi did not break out. She silently held her legs, looking like a doormat. She said, lowering her head. Wang Yuetong's eyes flickered, and her tone softened unconsciously. "I heard that you and Tianlan were born on the same day, the same month, and the same year?" For Dongqing Rushi this was something to be happy about. She looked a little happy and her face bloomed with a smile. But Wang Yuetong did not make her happy for long. "Then I'm older than you. You have to call me sister from now on." Dongqing Rushi's happy little face froze, and she looked at Wang Yuatong quietly. And I've slept with him. I'm the sister in every way. Wang Yuatong looked straight into Dongqing Rushi's eyes. Sister. After a long time, Dongqing Rushi whispered, then turned her head, and her mouth seemed to pout subconsciously. Wang Yuatong nodded. I'm going to change clothes. Let's go shopping together. She turned around and walked into the elevator. Was it over? Was it over? Lin Yuxian, who was still waiting to see a good show, was stunned. There was no quarrel, no abuse, and no fight. One was majestic and strong, and the other was pitiful and resigned. Sister and sister. Were they going to love each other? Lin Yuxian, who was watching, said that he could not accept it. It was absolutely unacceptable. Dongqing Rushi didn't look like the kind of person who would be killed in a second. What's going on? Lin Yuxian looked depressed and annoyed. Good thing. Yu Donglai smiled and fiddled with the chessboard. Boy, do you still want to play? You're going to lose this game. It's really a good thing. Lin Yuxian nodded. But I still have to ask. He hesitated, ignoring Yu Donglai's stare, and walked over with a low smile. Dongqing Rushi was still nestled on the sofa watching Tom and Jerry, which had shrunk down and was very comfortable. Her eyes were clear and she seemed to forget the grievances just now. The corners of her mouth were slightly bent as if she was smiling. Lin Yuxian came over and sat on the sofa on the other side. He looked at Dongqing Rushi and smiled bitterly. Well? He took the initiative to speak. Dongqing Rushi turned to look at him. I can't stand it. Lin Yuxian patted his thigh and felt bitter. She was indeed a bitch and she was playing with fire here. Why do you call her sister? He meant it. Dongqing Rushi was Li Tianlan's fiancée, which was fully recognized by both families. However, Qin Weibai beat her to it. She had to call her sister. No one would feel ashamed if she lost to Qin Weibai. Now there was Wang Yuatong and she was also a sister. How aggrieved she felt. She couldn't stand it. You don't like her? Dongqing Rushi looked at Lin Yuxian and asked. It's not about whether I like her or not. This is your family affair. Although the Lin clan and the Wang family of Beihai have a deep relationship, the Lin clan's position is clear now. I'm not familiar with Yuatong. I haven't even met her before, but I've met her brother once. So if you really want to say who is partial, I will definitely support you. She should call you sister. Lin Yuxian said helplessly. Whatever. Dongqing Rushi was indifferent, without the slightest anger. Don't you feel aggrieved? Lin Yuxian looked curious. Not really. Dongqing Rushi thought for a moment and said softly, Tianlan should be happy in this way. Lin Yuxian was stunned and didn't know what to say for a while. Wang Yuatong, who had always ignored Dongqing Rushi, took the initiative to speak. Dongqing Rushi obediently called her sister. There was no doubt that the two women wanted to make their men happy. Lin Yuxian suddenly lost interest in watching the fun. He suddenly felt a little envious. He envied Li Tianlan's luck. Dongqing Rushi sat cross-legged and straightened her body, holding a pillow. She stared at the screen in front of her seriously, but her eyes were not focused. She thought of a lot of things. She thought of Li Tianlan, whom she had heard since she was a child. Li Tianlan, who lived in the depths of her heart and could not be more perfect. Everyone was emphasizing the identity of the fiancé. Grandpa said that he was destined to be a great man in the future, like the current Wang Tianzong, or even like the amazing ancestor of the Wang family of Beihai. Her father said that the Dongqing clan owed him too much. In her memory, it seemed that only her mother had said something different. Her mother said that she would be Li Tianlan's wife in the future, so she owed him. She just hoped that when they were together in the future, she would not forget that the man who became her husband had borne a lot of things that she should have borne. Or responsibilities. Yuzhou. The building of the army headquarters. When Dongqing Wudi, the standing minister of the army headquarters, slammed the documents in his hand on his desk, Lieutenant General Bai Qingzhao, the Deputy Secretary General of the army headquarters, was sitting opposite him and drinking tea with a smile. Bai Qingzhao was one of the backbone generals of the giant group, the eldest son of Bai Zhanfeng, the patriarch of the Bai family, Bai Qingxian's biological brother and Dongqing Wudi's brother-in-law. He was originally the deputy commander of the Central Theater of Operations. 2 years ago, after Dongqing Wudi entered the army headquarters from the Border Control Corps, the giant group almost used all its resources to transfer Bai Qingzhao to the post of Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters. The Deputy Commander of the Theater of Operations and the Deputy Secretary General of the Army Headquarters seemed to be similar. It could only be regarded as a small promotion, but the actual meaning was very different. The President of Zhongzhou State was also the Minister of the Army Headquarters, but he rarely interfered with the daily work of the army headquarters. The daily work of the army headquarters was presided over by the standing minister. In the army headquarters, the role that could check and balance the standing minister was not the two deputy ministers, but the secretary general who did not have the rank of marshal. So 2 years ago, even though Chi Baitsong, the flag bearer of the Special Warfare Group, retired from the position of standing minister, the secretary general was still in office. The strength of the Special Warfare Group still did not suffer too much. Instead, it gained a lot of benefits out of thin air with Chi Baitsong's retirement. Dongqing Wudi controlled the army headquarters. After one term, he was bound to replace the secretary general with his own people. This was the beginning of Dongqing Wudi establishing his authority in the army. Bai Qingzhao was the only candidate for the secretary general. It could be said that he was one of Dongqing Wudi's most trustworthy people. What's wrong? Bai Qingzhao glanced at the documents that Dongqing Wudi threw on the table, picked them up casually and said with a smile, "See for yourself." Dongqing Wudi gritted his teeth, and with a gloomy and angry expression he shouted, "Shameless! A bunch of bastards!" Dongqing Wudi rarely completely lost his composure. Even in front of Bai Qingzhao, who could be absolutely trusted, it was a little out of line for him to behave like this. Bai Qingzhao raised his eyebrows and calmly glanced at the documents that Dongqing Wudi threw on the table. The documents were delivered by Dongqing Wudi's secretary a few minutes ago. At first, both sides didn't take it seriously. Who knew that Dongqing Wudi just glanced at them and directly exploded? Bai Qingzhao had no idea that something big would happen in the military that made Dongqing Wudi lose his composure like this. The document was very thin. Including the cover, there were only 4 or 5 pages. Bai Qingzhao glanced at the cover and subconsciously narrowed his eyes. On the cover was a pale golden city, built between 2 snow-capped peaks, majestic and heavy. This was the emblem of Kunlun City. In other words, this was a document from Kunlun City? Bai Qingzhao seemed to think of something and directly opened the document. He glanced at it in a hurry and his expression suddenly changed. The content of the document was not complicated, and it could even be said to be clear at a glance. It was about the maneuver of the Sky Academy and the Deep Sea Academy at the end of the month. Kunlun City officially approved the maneuver applications of the 2 academies. At the same time, it verified the maneuver rules of the 2 academies and the sequence of the maneuver. At the end of the document were the seals of Kunlun City, the President's office and the Cabinet. This showed that both the President and the Prime Minister had approved this document. "You've gone too far." Bai Qingzhao gritted his teeth and suppressed his anger in his tone. Dongqing Wudi calmed down instead. He took the document again and glanced at it carefully. Then he threw it on the table with cold eyes. "What do you think?" Bai Qingzhao was silent for a while and asked in a deep voice. Dongqing Wudi shook his head with a sneer. "Tianlan grows up too fast. The Li family's comeback also makes some people unable to sit still. So they can't help but be ruthless and make such a maneuver rules. Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai really have a tacit understanding." "Is there still room for maneuver?" Bai Qingzhao asked in a low voice. As soon as he spoke, he shook his head first and smiled bitterly. If there was really room for maneuver, how could Dongqing Wudi lose his composure like this? No matter what they plan in private, at least they do it in line with the rules. Dongqing Wudi said. "The President?" Bai Qingzhao hesitated. "He can't wait for Kunlun City to do this." Dongqing Wudi sneered and was a little unhappy. The academics can take advantage of this opportunity to get closer to them. What Kunlun City did was in line with the rules, but it broke them. In this situation, if I want to do something, I can only ignore the rules. The giant group is not powerful enough, so it must ask for help from the academics. This kind of thing can only be good for the academics. Besides, they didn't do it, so we don't hate them. The academics will push the boat with the current. Of course the President will agree. Bai Qingzhao was silent. "What are you going to do?" After a long time he asked slowly. "Do I have a choice?" Dongqing Wudi said calmly, "In this situation I can only take one step at a time. Kunlun City broke the rules, so I can only be lawless for once. Otherwise, what can I do?" He glanced at Bai Qingzhao and smiled bitterly. If he really did nothing this time, then the Bai family and the Dongqing clan might really break up completely. Fortunately, we're not completely unprepared. Wan Tian has gone to the Eastern Theater of Operations. Isn't this what we're guarding against Kunlun City? Dongqing Wudi said softly. In this case, the Border Control Corps really can't be saved. Bai Qingzhao frowned. There's always a deal. Dongqing Wudi took a deep breath and gritted his teeth. Then he calmly picked up his mobile phone and dialed a number. The phone was quickly connected, and a low voice sounded on the other end of the line. Ziyuan, this is Dongqing Wudi. How's the scenery in Tianan? Dongqing Wudi laughed. He didn't call Wang Wantian, the current commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations, but Ning Ziyuan, the former commander. The Dongqing clan had prepared for all of this long before the Yuzhou conference began. Ning Ziyuan was transferred to Tianan. Wang Wantian was transferred to the Eastern Theater of Operations. It was all part of the preparation. So now Dongqing Wudi was angry, but he didn't panic. The so-called game, no matter how complicated it was nothing more than dealing with every move. Chapter 351. Second update, the night rain was still falling. When Li Tianlan opened his eyes, the study was dark and quiet. The rain outside hit the glass messily, and the sound was particularly clear. He stood up and moved his body. He poured himself a glass of warm water and drank it. He suddenly became energetic. The phone on the desk seemed to have been touched. Li Tianlan opened the phone and looked at it. There were no text messages or missed calls. He shook his head hard, lit a cigarette and opened the window casually. The rain was getting heavier. The rain fell on the lake and the ripples on the lake continued to spread in the night. The treetops swayed gently in the wind. The light in the courtyard of East Emperor Palace was hazy, with dense water vapor. It was obviously a brilliant summer, but the scene was a little bleak and lonely. Li Tianlan looked at the rain outside the window quietly, and the light in his eyes became more and more calm. Today his martial arts had reached the basic level, and he stood at the peak that he had never reached under normal conditions. But the peak was not perfect. This imperfection was not because he advanced too fast, nor because his body was too fragile, but because his strength and will were out of balance. In 3 years he went all the way to the north through mountains, rivers, seas, polar glaciers, grasslands, deserts, wind, frost, rain and snow. He almost never stopped. His martial arts was like his road to the north, which was walked step by step in silence. It was extremely solid and stable, and the accumulated sword intent was absolutely pure. His body could bear such difficult training, but his will could not bear the wind, frost and loneliness of these 3 years. Now, even if he returned to Huading from the polar region, it was difficult for him to make up for his essence, qi and spirit in a short time. The imbalance between will and strength meant that he had strength but not enough concentration. Without a will as firm as steel, it was difficult for his sword intent to reach the real purity and peak. The only way Li Tianlan could think of now was to sleep. Only with sufficient and comfortable rest could he gradually adjust his spirit, qi and spirit back to normal. Li Tianlan looked out of the window and for a moment his mind was wandering. His essence, qi and spirit were damaged, but he did not need to worry about recovery because of his previous foundation. So at this moment he thought more of the year in the desert. That year he fell from a high place to a low valley. He abandoned his cultivation of the thunder-shocking realm and started over again. That year, he had crawled in the dark, narrow and silent labyrinth below the desert prison, where he could only hear his own heartbeat. He had experienced countless times of despair, depression, fear and madness. Only then did he develop an absolute will that was comparable to the heavenly king heart. Without the experiences of that year, with his original willpower, it would have been impossible for him to have survived those 3 years of destruction. Everything seemed like a coincidence, but it also seemed like an inevitability. He remembered the first words the 2 metaphysical grandmasters said to him when he first met Shen Xuanzi and Great Master Wu Wei. Trust in heaven's will? The mandate of heaven was right before their eyes. Even if they did not believe it, they could not disrespect it. The door of the study was gently pushed open from the outside. Wang Yuatong came in and looked at Li Tianlan, who was smoking silently. She said softly, "You're awake?" Li Tianlan nodded and said, "I am hungry. The food Rushi and I cooked may not be as good as Senior Yu's. Would you like to try it?" Wang Yuatong said with a smile. Her voice was soft and her eyes were enchanting. After turning from a girl to a woman, the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai was not stingy with her charm in front of Li Tianlan. She really wanted to quietly bloom beside Li Tianlan for a lifetime. "You and Rushi?" Li Tianlan threw the cigarette butt out of the window with a strange look in his eyes. "I've made a deal with her." Wang Yuatong nodded and said, "She will call me sister in the future." Li Tianlan suddenly had nothing to say. Even if he was an immortal, he could not figure out why Dongqing Rushi called Wang Yuatong sister in a short time. Of course, I'm destined not to be compared with Sister Little Bai. Even if Dongqing Rushi calls me sister, she won't like me in her heart and I won't like her either. But we will inevitably meet in the future. We will be by your side in the future. We can't pretend not to know each other for the rest of our lives. That would be too embarrassing. Wang Yuatong came over and hugged Li Tianlan, leaning in his arms and whispering. In the future? Li Tianlan said subconsciously and gently stroked her short hair with his palm. Yes, in the future. Wang Yuatong nodded and said in a firm tone, Tianlan, I'll resign. I'll stay by your side from now on. Li Tianlan paused for a while and then said, okay. Wang Yuatong laughed in his arms. She rubbed against Li Tianlan and whispered, when you were sleeping my dad called me. He wanted me to go home. What did you say? Li Tianlan was silent for a while and then asked slowly. I said I won't go back. Wang Yuatong was in a daze. Thinking about the phone call, she said in a complicated tone, so my dad asked me to go home. Li Tianlan held Wang Yuatong tightly and did not speak. Go home. Go home. It seemed to have similar meanings, but the meaning was completely different. The former meant that she would not come back after going home. The latter meant that she would not go back again after going home. At least she would not go back before there was a clear result between Li Tianlan and the Wang family of Beihai. Li Tianlan lowered his head and kissed Wang Yuetong's hair gently. The former little princess trembled slightly in his arms. Do you regret it? Li Tianlan whispered. As long as you don't abandon me in the future, I won't regret it. Wang Yuetong's voice was very soft, almost like a whisper. After all, she was a woman who was so extravagant that she would rather gamble with her life. She would be perturbed, uneasy, confused, and at a loss for such a gamble. As for whether she would regret it or not, it all depended on the man she chose in the end. This responsibility was so heavy that it was clearer than that of the Li family, which was close at hand but far at the same time. Don't worry. Li Tianlan paused and then said, thank you. Wang Yuatong smiled, raised her head and reached out to touch Li Tianlan's face. She whispered, when I come back, I will not be the little princess of the Wang family of Beihai, but your woman. Li Tianlan patted her on the back and whispered, when are you leaving? After dinner. Wang Yuatong whispered, take me to the airport. Li Tianlan nodded and said, okay. I want you to carry me downstairs. Wang Yuatong stepped back from Li Tianlan and opened her arms. Li Tianlan smiled, picked her up and went downstairs. Everyone downstairs was there. Lin Yuxian and Yu Donglai sat at the dinner table. Dongqing Rushi was serving rice. The meal was very sumptuous. But because of the relationship between Dongqing Rushi and Wang Yuatong, the dinner was neither salty nor plain. Li Tianlan had a good appetite. For him, as long as the two women did not fight on the spot, there would be a relatively harmonious day in the future. After dinner, Li Tianlan drove Wang Yuatong to the airport. Wang Yuatong booked a ticket on the way and changed her boarding pass at the airport. Li Tianlan watched Wang Yuatong pass the security check. Wang Yuatong did not say much from beginning to end. She just hugged Li Tianlan hard before leaving and whispered, wait for me to come back. Her figure passed the security check and gradually disappeared at the end of the passage. Li Tianlan pulled his collar and turned to leave the airport. When the black Audi left along the road, a group of dignified and calm Mercedes-Benz cars slowly entered the airport and passed by Li Tianlan. The night rain was getting heavier and heavier, and the thunder was looming high in the sky. In the airport near midnight, two middle-aged men walked out of the airport steadily with a beautiful girl. 6 Mercedes-Benz cars were parked on the road outside the airport. Nearly 20 burly men in uniform black suits stood silently in the rain at night. The moment the 2 men and a woman walked out of the airport in silence, everyone bowed at the same time. Welcome, Your Highness. The 2 middle-aged men got on the Mercedes-Benz at the front. The beautiful girl got on the other car. The motorcade slowly left the airport. In the Mercedes-Benz at the front, Gu Xingyun, who had arrived in Huading 1 day earlier, looked pale and weak. He lowered the window, lit a cigarette and coughed softly. Gu Qianchuan, who had been with him all the time, received a text message. He took out his mobile phone and looked at it. The corner of his mouth twitched slightly and he said calmly, the cabinet and the office of the president have agreed on the rules of the maneuver of the 2 academies. As expected. Gu Xingyun smiled. This is all within the scope of the rules. Rules and rules are often different things, but sometimes they are the same thing. In the special warfare system, no matter what, Kunlun City has the final say. This is both a rule and a rule. What about the giant group? Gu Qianchuan frowned and glanced at Gu Xingyun. Now he had confirmed Gu Xingyun's injury. Even Gu Xingyun was almost completely disabled by the blow of the murderous weapon, and his combat capability was greatly reduced. It was impossible for him to recover without a few years. Even if he had time, it would depend on his own luck. If the maneuver of the two academies had not been too important and related to the face of Kunlun City, Gu Xingyun would not have come in person. Now the power of Kunlun City was really in the hands of Gu Qianchuan, and the relationship between him and Gu Xingyun seemed to have eased a lot. The maneuver of the two academies is a big event. No one can destroy it. Otherwise, it is really breaking and trampling on the rules. What else can Dongqing Wudi do unless he wants to commit political suicide? Gu Xingyun coughed and said in a flat tone, "I'm afraid that there will be an accident." Gu Qianchuan said calmly, "How can the madman of the Dongqing clan be rational when he is crazy?" "That's true." Gu Xingyun nodded. "But the question is it worth it for Li Tianlan?" He glanced at Gu Qianchuan and continued, "And even if there is an accident, you are there. If an accident really happens, you will personally kill Li Tianlan in the maneuver." He paused and said gloomily, "At any cost." Gu Qianchuan narrowed his eyes, nodded, and said, "Where are we going?" "The Sky Academy?" "To Winter Mountain." Gu Xingyun shook his head. "I have an appointment with an expert. Maybe he can give us some advice about the future situation." Gu Qianchuan nodded with a smile, but he curled his lips calmly. "What kind of so-called expert are you thinking?" "Bullshit. Isn't it your cheap father-in-law, Xian Xuanzi?" Chapter 352. When it was almost dawn, it finally turned into heavy rain after a whole day. The rolling thunder roared wantonly in the sky. It was windy and hooting. The rain became heavier and heavier, and finally became a rainstorm that was extremely rare and hooting. The rainstorm engulfed the whole city. In the dim lights, the crazy rain seemed to be the only sound in the whole city. In the pouring rain, a white-haired Xian Xuanzi, wearing a light blue Taoist robe, holding a horsetail whisk in one hand and an umbrella in the other, walked quietly on the road to the top of Mount Dong. Mount Dong was known as the back garden of the whole Huading. There were many mansions and scenic spots, so the road was extremely smooth. However, it was a rainy day and it was late at night. The smooth mountain road was still slippery. Xian Xuanzi walked very slowly, but his footsteps were extremely firm. It was raining heavily. In a blue Taoist robe and a black umbrella, he walked alone in the dark night because of the heavy rain. His figure was like an inconspicuous black spot. There were many mansions on Mount Dong. However, Xian Xuanzi did not go to any mansion, but went straight to the top of the mountain. The mountain road looked more and more serene in the heavy rain. The top of the mountain looked distant and cold. Xian Xuanzi walked forward unhurriedly. He did not walk fast, but his pace was the same and never slowed down. The top of the mountain lit up with a vague and hazy light in the heavy rain. The light illuminated a small, ancient and solemn building. Xian Xuanzi's calm face looked a little weird in the night. He knew what the building was illuminated by the light. The building, with a history of hundreds of years, could be regarded as the holy land of the southeast coast for some people with faith. Xian Xuanzi also had faith, but he believed in the three pure ones. And the top of the mountain, it was a church. The most famous Zhongshan Cathedral on the top of Mount Dong. The place illuminated by the light was the destination of Xian Xuanzi's trip. Xian Xuanzi walked closer and closer. The light swayed in the wind and rain, illuminating the bell tower of the church in the heavy rain. Xian Xuanzi stood calmly in front of the church. The European-style church, the sage-like Taoist priest, the black umbrella in the rain and the light on the bell tower. The rain poured down and the wind blew past. In the darkness of the night, this scene looked strange yet harmonious. Xian Xuanzi took a deep breath, pushed open the half-closed door and walked in. He put the black umbrella at the door casually, and the water stain soaked the ground that had not been hit by the rain. The space inside the bell tower was very small. The cross was placed in the center of the bell tower. The lights in the bell tower were on, illuminating everything inside. Xian Xuanzi entered the church and the bell tower. The white horsetail whisk hung in his hands, and his Taoist robe was neat and tidy. As he stood in the bell tower, the atmosphere became increasingly strange. But what was even stranger was that there wasn't a Taoist priest in this Catholic church. In front of the cross, there was even a monk dressed in a monk's robe. Bald head, Buddhist beads, monk robes, all these were even more conspicuous than Xian Xuanzi's outfit. The two of them stared at each other across the cross. The scene was incongruous to the extreme. It's been 3 years, but the Heavenly King's demeanor is still the same as before. Congratulations. The monk looked at Xian Xuanzi with a meaningful smile, without the tranquility and peace of a monk. Xian Xuanzi suddenly raised his eyebrows. Heavenly King. That was how Xian Xuanzi addressed him, not as a Taoist priest. In terms of seniority, he was of the same generation as Xian Xuanzi's master. In this situation, although Buddhism and Taoism were different, Xian Xuanzi deserved to be called martial uncle. But Xian Xuanzi called him Heavenly King. He was indeed a Heavenly King now, the 13th Heavenly King of Samsara Palace that few people knew. Your master and I are of the same generation. Xian Xuanzi narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, My master is gone, so you are no longer an elder. Is it wrong for me to call you Heavenly King? The monk's eyes were sharp, with clear aggression. Yes. Xian Xuanzi was silent for a while before he said calmly, Are you Ruzhen or Rui? He knew that Great Master Wu Wei had 2 disciples, and he had even seen them more than once, but he had never seriously remembered their Buddhist names before. I'm Ruzhen. The monk put his palms together and saluted. Are you here tonight for revenge? Xian Xuanzi's eyes were a little strange with self-mockery. 3 years ago, I stabbed the horsetail whisk into Wu Wei's heart with my own hands. Are you here for this cause and effect? Heavenly King, you misunderstood me. Ruzhen insisted on calling Xian Xuanzi with a smile, impeccable. Xian Xuanzi smiled and looked at the rain through the window of the bell tower. The winter mountain under the rain was full of vitality. He narrowed his eyes and said softly, How do you know my contact information? I can contact the military counselor. Ruzhen said lightly, You are now the Heavenly King of Samsara. I can contact the military counselor so I can find you. Xian Xuanzi said casually, Who is the military counselor? Ruzhen was silent as expected and reasonable. Xian Xuanzi said coldly, Since you don't believe me, why do you come to me? Heavenly King owes my Qingyun temple a cause and effect. Ruzhen's tone also became cold. 3 years ago, Xian Xuanzi went to Qingyun temple to visit Great Master Wu Wei and directly stabbed the horsetail whisk in his hand into Great Master Wu Wei's heart. Great Master Wu Wei died to fulfill Li Tianlan's wish. But Xian Xuanzi's original actions could be regarded as the cause of a series of events. In the end, you just want revenge, don't you? Xian Xuanzi laughed sarcastically. If you want revenge, you can't live until now. Ruzhen said unceremoniously, I'm looking for you today just to ask you to return a cause and effect to Qingyun Temple. Just say it. Xian Xuanzi said expressionlessly. Ruzhen hesitated and said calmly, Heavenly King, please extend a person's life. Oh. Xian Xuanzi asked. Qin Weibai. My little junior sister, your current boss. Ruzhen told the truth. She will die? Xian Xuanzi suddenly raised his voice. The reason why he joined the Samsara Palace was that Qin Weibai promised him that she would return his daughter's freedom when Kunlun City was destroyed. But now Qin Weibai was going to die? Xian Xuanzi suddenly felt a little angry. He didn't know what he was angry about. If you are willing to help, she won't die. Ruzhen said calmly. Xian Xuanzi was so angry that he laughed. He snorted heavily and said in a gloomy tone, I can't even see her destiny. Extend her life? Oh, will you teach me? Ruzhen was silent. Facing Xian Xuanzi's cold eyes, he slowly took out a Buddha bead. This bead is called death substitution. Ruzhen said calmly, with it, Heavenly King can help. Death substitution. In Lin, and Ruzhen also gave Qin Weibai a Buddha bead and told her that it was called death substitution. But there was no doubt that this one was the real death substitution bead. And the one he gave Qin Weibai was called mortal fate. Ruzhen didn't even need to speculate anything. He could be completely sure that at this time, the mortal fate was already with Li Tianlan. Qin Weibai thought that it was a chance to die for her. With how much she cherished and valued Li Tianlan, how could she be willing to use such a precious opportunity herself? She must give it to Li Tianlan. Only with Li Tianlan could Qin Weibai's mortal fate not be destroyed. In this way he could extend Qin Weibai's life with the real death substitution bead. That was possible. Death substitution? Xian Xuanzi muttered to himself and his eyes narrowed. Is it the Buddha's relic of that senior? It's the Grand Master's relic. Ruzhen nodded and handed the Buddha bead to Xian Xuanzi. I didn't expect there to be such a thing. Xian Xuanzi sighed with some disbelief and then said with some doubt, if there was this thing, Wu Wei wouldn't have died at all. Why? Master said 3 years ago that he could live but he had to die. There was finally a trace of sadness in Ruzhen's eyes. Great Master Wu Wei might be the only one who knew Qin Weibai's origin, and because of this he could see the future. Before he left death substitution and mortal fate. He seemed to have arranged everything today quietly. He could not die because of the death substitution bead. He had to die. In addition to fulfilling Li Tianlan's wish, it was more to leave Qin Weibai the last glimmer of life. Another fool who actively seeks death. Xian Xuanzi thought of great master Wu Wei and muttered to himself. Ruzhen didn't speak. Is it worth it? Xian Xuanzi asked. Is it worth it for an adopted daughter who is not your biological daughter? Ruzhen looked silent. What is Qin Weibai's origin? Xian Xuanzi looked at Ruzhen and said, Wu Wei erased all traces for her. As for her origin, it was also well hidden. The Wang family of Beihai, Kunlun City, and Zhongzhou State have investigated, but they found nothing. Do you know? She came from a small mountain village in the southwest. Xian Xuanzi said flatly, when Master met my junior sister, I was there. That year there was a blizzard in the southwest and junior sister was lying in the snow. She looked to be about 6 or 7 years old, and her body was covered in blood. Both her internal and external injuries were fatal, but she was very conscious. When we discovered her, she also discovered us. He paused and said strangely, she just looked at her. You couldn't imagine her injuries at that time. Her internal organs were all severely damaged, and it was as if someone had crushed her bones and torn her muscles. It was as if the person who wanted to kill her wanted to torture her in the cruelest way possible, and then casually threw her into the snow to freeze her to death. But she didn't have any fear or pain in that kind of injury and situation. When we found her, she just looked at us calmly, and it could even be said that she was examining us. He shook his head in disbelief. Later, Master took my junior sister back and took good care of her for more than a year. Then she slowly got better. But you still tell me that she came from a small mountain village in the southwest? Xian Xuanzi asked. We did pick up my junior sister in a mountainous area in the southwest. I don't know her origin. Only Master and my junior sister know it. Ruzhen shook his head and said, but it doesn't matter. You don't need to know this to prolong her life. Prolong her life? Xian Xuanzi's tone was complicated. What if I don't agree? Ruzhen didn't answer this question but said calmly, this place is very important in the intelligence of Samsara Palace. It is said that several private priests are secret pawns of Kunlun City. It's a good place. It's surrounded by rich people. Maybe some secrets can be exposed when someone prays. Even if there are no secrets, it's a good place to build a stronghold here. Ruzhen looked at Xian Xuanzi, whose expression changed a little, and said slowly, I asked you to meet and you asked me to wait for you here. I'm afraid you don't just want to see me, do you? I heard that Gu Xingyun came to Huading with his daughter and Gu Qianchuan. Xian Xuanzi's face was completely gloomy. I won't do anything. If you don't agree, I won't leave. It's you who will have a hard time, and it has nothing to do with me. If you die, you'll pay back the karma. Ruzhen's smile was a little cold. But the problem is, as the only metaphysics grandmaster left in Zhongzhou State, are you willing to die? Xian Xuanzi's lips trembled fiercely. Of course he was unwilling to die. Not for the so-called status and reputation but for his daughter and granddaughter. Even if I'm willing to take action, it's too late today. There's not enough time. Xian Xuanzi took a deep breath and clenched the death scapegoat bead in his hand. Enough time. Ruzhen said calmly, just right. Not enough time. Xian Xuanzi was a little irritable. The death scapegoat bead also needs someone to die for it. Where is the person? To die for Qin Weibai, it must be someone who has something to do with her. If the person is not here, then other arrangements are needed. There's not enough time. There's no need for other arrangements. Ruzhen said softly. All of Xian Xuanzi's words suddenly stopped. He looked straight at Ruzhen. Ruzhen laughed. She's my little junior sister. I have something to do with her, right? In Lin and Qin Weibai asked him about his future plans. He said that everything was up to fate. Tonight, in the bell tower of this church, this was his fate. Xian Xuanzi then understood why Ruzhen, who had been out of this world, was so unworldly tonight. Ruzhen slowly sat on the ground. I have nothing to worry about. He said, come on. I want to serve my master as soon as possible. The storm outside the bell tower did not stop at all. A fire lit up in the bell tower. The fire flickered and flickered, flickering. Time passed slowly. The mountain road in the heavy rain in winter mountain lit up. A row of Mercedes cars passed through the heavy rain at night and slowly stopped in front of the church. Gu Xingyun got out of the car alone, looked up at the light of the bell tower, and turned to look at the girl who got out of another car. You go up with me. Gu Xingyun glanced at the girl and said calmly. The light in the bell tower seemed to dim a little. Xian Xuanzi sat alone in the bell tower, and his face was a little pale. The death scapegoat bead in his hand had completely disappeared. Ruzhen. It also disappeared. Only some dust was floating in the air and finally fell to the ground. It was blown away by the wind outside the window and disappeared. Xian Xuanzi Wuwei. In addition, Ruzhen, a real eminent monk, finally used a death scapegoat bead to exchange for a trace of Qin Weibai's earthly fate. Another fool. Xian Xuanzi whispered. There were footsteps outside the bell tower. The door of the attic was pushed open. Gu Xingyun's figure appeared at the door. Behind him was a girl who was about 20 years old. A picturesque young girl with a beauty that could topple cities. The girl was tall and slender, and her face was delicate and beautiful. She wore a light green dress, and her eyes were bright and beautiful. Her long hair fluttered in the wind, and every move she made was filled with the liveliness and charm of youth. She was very obedient and gentle. She stood there casually, but for a moment she seemed to suppress the light. Vaguely, she had a kind of charm that could steal people's souls. Gu Xingyun stared at the girl, and the corners of his mouth were trembling. Unconsciously, his face was already covered with tears. Qingqing, this is Grandpa. Gu Xingyun looked at Xian Xuanzi and said calmly. Chapter 353. As the heir of the Wang family of Beihai and one of the most eye-catching protagonists of the maneuver of the two academies, Wang Xingxiao knew the content of the maneuver even faster than Dongqing Wudi. The special warfare system in the Dark World had always been absolutely fair and absolutely unfair. In this field where strength was respected and all rules were primitive and rough, absolute privileges also had the capital to be more unimpeded and even unscrupulous than in other fields. What Wang Xingxiao got was not an official document, but a temporarily printed fax. The pale gold city representing the emblem of Kunlun City on the fax was still clear, looking majestic and solemn. The frenzied torrential rain pounded the whole city. In the luxury suite on the top floor of the Huading chief mansion, Wang Xingxiao, who had just taken a bath and was wearing a bathrobe, looked at the pale gold city on the fax with cold and sarcastic eyes. There was only the emblem of Kunlun City on the fax, without the signatures of the office of the president and the cabinet. It could be seen that as soon as this information was sent out of Kunlun City, it was immediately sent to Huading, even at the same speed as it was sent to the office of the president and the cabinet. When countless big shots in Jianghu state, including the presidents of the two academies, did not know the rules and content of the final maneuver, Wang Xingxiao had read the information twice. The information approved by Kunlun City was not complicated, and the content was relatively simple. It was about the content and rules of the final maneuver of the two academies. The content was almost the same as the rules of every previous maneuver. The only change was just a few words, and they were concentrated on the first line of the first page. But the change of just a few words was enough to make the final maneuver extraordinary. Wang Xingxiao threw the information in his hand aside, his face indifferent. The subtle changes in the information were undoubtedly extremely beneficial to him, but there was no joy in his expression, only a trace of subtle but real sarcasm. It's superfluous. I have a guilty conscience. He glanced at the information on the table and whispered to himself. What's superfluous? A hoarse but extremely sexy voice sounded behind Wang Xingxiao. Song Ci, who was also in a bathrobe, came over, tilted her head, and wiped her long hair with a towel. Wang Xingxiao moved his body. Song Ci sat in Wang Xingxiao's arms and handed him the towel. You help me. Kunlun City has already set the rules for the final maneuver of the two academies. It's ridiculous. Wang Xingxiao carefully wiped Song Ci's long hair and said in a calm tone. From his angle, Song Ci's slender neck and beautiful side face were clearly visible. After the passion faded, there was still a flush on her face, which made her lonely and indifferent aura dissipate a lot, making her look charming and languid. Song Ci picked up the document and glanced at it. She suddenly raised her eyebrows and chuckled. So exaggerated? She saw the first detailed rule at first glance. The minute changes that were enough to affect the overall situation were all in the first one. I really don't know how nervous Kunlun City is to come up with such a rule. Song Ci didn't continue to read. She threw the materials aside, sat in Wang Xingxiao's arms, and put her arms around his neck. They can't afford to lose. Wang Xingxiao put his arms around Song Ci's slender waist without any excess fat and shook his head. The short rise time is still the most obvious weakness of Kunlun City. If Gu Hanshan loses to Li Tianlan in the final maneuver, the reputation of Kunlun City is bound to be greatly affected. The key is that Li Tianlan's identity is too sensitive. He's the heir of the Li family. If Gu Hanshan loses, it's tantamount to telling everyone that even if the Gu family overthrew the Li family and became the war god clan of Jianghu state, they will never catch up with the Li family. But what Kunlun City is doing now may not be very glorious, and they even dragged you into it. Why did Uncle Wang agree? Song Xi was a little confused. She looked at Wang Xingxiao, whose face was a little ugly, and twisted her body subtly in his arms. Feeling the change of his face, Song Xi laughed. It was not coquettish, but with a kind of indescribable wildness. Behave yourself. Wang Xingxiao slapped Song Xi's plump buttocks, shook his head and said, I think my father should be tired of continuing to entangle with the Li family. Kunlun City wants to drag me into this, but they are the masterminds after all. This time the impact on the Wang family of Beihai is not big. And the impact mainly depends on the result. If we lose, Kunlun City's action this time is because they have a guilty conscience. But if we win and guide them well this time, the cooperation between Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai will be like a lion fighting a rabbit, and the impact may not be so bad. Song Xi casually played with a strand of her black hair, thinking without saying a word. When thinking about problems, Song Xi was like an unsheathed sword, shining brightly. Even in front of Wang Xingxiao, her elegance was still not reduced. I can get this information, so Gu Hanshan must have gotten it earlier than me. Wang Xingxiao put his arms around Song Xi and said calmly, he should be here soon. So soon? Song Xi was a little surprised. Kunlun City is so nervous, so Gu Hanshan must be more nervous. What's the rainstorm outside the window? If we can nail Li Tianlan this time, even if it's a knife outside, he will come here as soon as possible. Wang Xingxiao said in a sarcastic tone. Song Xi looked at Wang Xingxiao. She sensed his emotions. You don't like this rule? Song Xi asked. I just don't think it's necessary. Wang Xingxiao shook his head. It's superfluous. Gu Hanshan doesn't deserve to join hands with me. This sentence Wang Xingxiao said straightforwardly. His face was calm, but his eyebrows were full of loftiness. Song Xi looked at Wang Xingxiao quietly, her eyes soft and a little surprised. Before Li Tianlan appeared, Gu Hanshan was the only one of the younger generation who could be compared with Wang Xingxiao. The wind and thunder veins and the heavenly king heart had their own advantages and disadvantages. Song Xi never thought that Wang Xingxiao would look down on Gu Hanshan so much. What do you think of Gu Hanshan? Song Xi asked softly. The Gu family's heritage is actually not shallow, but its foundation is not deep. Its inheritance is top-notch but slightly mediocre. Gu Hanshan is too obsessed and narrow-minded. He has the heavenly king heart, but it's difficult for him to exert his potential. He's far inferior to me. Wang Xingxiao said without thinking. What about Li Tianlan? Song Xi asked softly. Wang Xingxiao looked hesitant. Amazing talent. In any era, Li Tianlan can be said to be the kind of person with unparalleled talent. There are too many fetters ahead of him. It's not easy to rebuild the Li family. He wants too much. Although the Li family is making a comeback, Li Tianlan's road has not really begun. Since he entered the secular world, he has been dormant for 3 years after the final battle of Heaven Capital. What does he want in his style of doing? Now he has no chance to show it at all, and I don't know. If he can win the final maneuver, he will have a little chance to exert his revenge. Wang Xingxiao said slowly, speaking of Li Tianlan himself, he is a very pure person, and his boldness in martial arts is beyond the reach of ordinary people. If I were him, I would be inferior to him and he would be inferior to me. Song Xi looked at Wang Xingxiao with a smile in her eyes and eyebrows. She liked this kind of Wang Xingxiao who commented on his future enemies in a straightforward and confident manner. He never overestimated others or despised his opponents. When he talked about others, he was always measuring himself. That was a kind of boldness and broad-mindedness that could look at the whole world. He might not be as pure as Li Tianlan. But this kind of Wang Xingxiao was what the Wang family of Beihai needed most. Otherwise he would not have said that if their roles were reversed he would be inferior to Li Tianlan, and Li Tianlan would be inferior to him. The doorbell rang. Look, it's coming. Wang Xingxiao said with a chuckle. Song Xi stood up in Wang Xingxiao's arms and stretched lazily. I'm going back to my room to sleep. Wang Xingxiao also stood up and nodded casually. Song Xi returned to the room in a bathrobe. Wang Xingxiao, who was also in a bathrobe, opened the door. Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City, stood outside with a light smile. Compared to my disturbance tonight, I think the news we just received is the most important. Of course. Wang Xingxiao laughed. Facing Gu Hanshan, he was no longer as unhappy as when he had just received the news. This is a good thing, he said with an extremely sincere expression. Gu Hanshan also held a piece of information that was exactly the same as Wang Xingxiao's. When he heard Wang Xingxiao's statement, he seemed to be slightly relieved. He walked into the suite, sat on the luxurious sofa in the living room and went straight to the point. So let's join hands? I totally agree. Wang Xingxiao smiled, but he sighed softly in his heart. In fact, putting aside the past of the Wang family of Beihai and the Li family, he did not have a bad impression of Li Tianlan. If it were Li Tianlan sitting here tonight, he might be happier. But in Jianghu, who could do whatever he wanted? It was all involuntary. I've watched many videos of Li Tianlan's moves. Jiang Shangyu and I have analyzed it and finally come to a conclusion. Gu Hanshan sat on the sofa and said in a calm tone. Wang Xingxiao listened attentively. The swordsmanship of the Li family is broad and profound, and the 24 moves of sword are all-encompassing. So, in our current realm, we can hardly see any weakness in Li Tianlan's sword intent. Gu Hanshan said slowly, Li Tianlan's weakness is his body. After the Battle of Heaven Capital, he started from scratch. In 3 years he has today's combat capability. Not to mention whether his realm is stable or not, at least his body can't bear his progress. So if I'm right, Li Tianlan's wind and thunder veins should not exist. His current sword intent is extremely fierce and pure, but it's too hard and easy to break. His attack is powerful, but his defense must be extremely weak, even beyond imagination. This is Li Tianlan's weakness, the most fatal weakness. Wang Xingxiao nodded thoughtfully, but he did not speak. Gu Hanshan waited for a long time and finally couldn't help but ask, "What do you think?" "I agree with your speculation." Wang Xingxiao said calmly, "In terms of sword intent, I'm not as good as him, but in terms of physical strength, he's not as good as me." He pointed to the information brought by Gu Hanshan and said with a chuckle, "So in this final maneuver, he won't have any chance." Gu Hanshan also laughed, carefree and wantonly. When Gu Hanshan arrived at the chief mansion and conspired with Wang Xingxiao, in the East Emperor Palace, Li Tianlan, who was about to rest with Dongqing Rushi, also received a call from Zhuang Huayang, the dean of the Sky Academy. "Tianlan, are you asleep?" On the phone, Zhuang Huayang's voice was a little drowsy, as if he had just woken up from a dream. "I'm about to sleep." Li Tianlan smiled, but his hand slid down Dongqing Rushi's neckline and held her soft and plump breasts, which were like mutton fat warm jade. Dongqing Rushi's little face was red. She leaned against Li Tianlan and pressed her head against his chest, her body trembling slightly. "I received a message here, but the specific documents haven't been sent yet. I think it's necessary to tell you." Zhuang Huayang smiled and said in a serious tone. Li Tianlan had almost never heard Zhuang Huayang speak in this tone. He frowned, reached out his hand from Dongqing Rushi's collar and said calmly, "Principal, go ahead." Zhuang Huayang did not speak for a while. Dongqing Rushi, who was leaning on him, was still pressing her head against Li Tianlan. From the moment Li Tianlan put his claws in, she had been pushing against it. Now that he pulled his claws out, the daughter of the Dongqing clan was still pushing against it, even harder and harder. Li Tianlan didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He got out of bed. Dongqing Rushi, whose hair was a little messy, raised her head and stared at Li Tianlan with hazy eyes. "It's like this." Zhuang Huayang finally said, "The rules of the final maneuver have been determined, as well as the sequence of the maneuver." Li Tianlan seemed to realize something and narrowed his eyes. "What is the content of the first drill?" He took the initiative to ask. This time, Zhuang Huayang was silent for a long time before he slowly said, "It's a tactical drill, teamwork, and reconnaissance." His voice was very soft, but the meaning behind it was extremely rich. Li Tianlan finally sneered. Kunlun City is really bold. Tactical drills, reconnaissance, and camouflage were all very normal drill subjects. The first item, which was also the initial content of the maneuver of the two academies, focused on teamwork. The focus of teamwork was on teamwork. Teamwork was the finale of the final maneuver of the two academies in any session. It was extremely important. It was a collision of teams. Li Tianlan had almost no team now. When Li Beidian and the others were seriously injured, he only had Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin by his side. What he was going to face was the phantom world of Wang Xingxiao and Song Xiai. It was the 3000 world of Gu Hanshan and Jiang Shangyu. There were also many teams attached to the phantom world and the 3000 world. Simply speaking, on the first day of the maneuver, Li Tianlan would face the cooperation of several super teams. "I got it." Li Tianlan took a deep breath and said blandly. Zhuang Huayang wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, he silently hung up the phone. He knew very well what the main purpose of the office of the president agreeing to this plan was. Li Tianlan was an ally of the academics. After all, not all allies were completely close. Li Tianlan hung up the phone and did not speak for a long time. Dongqing Rushi, who quietly took off her pajamas and hid her body in the quilt, said softly, "What's wrong?" "Nothing." Li Tianlan laughed. For the first time since he came back from the polar region, his eyes became so sharp and brilliant. "I just suddenly decided on one thing." "What?" Dongqing Rushi asked. "You can join the East Emperor Palace. But on the day of the final maneuver, I hope you and Du Hanin can abstain." Li Tianlan said slowly, word by word. His eyes changed like a messy rainstorm, like a blazing wildfire. Wind, frost, rain, snow, the scorching sun and stars alternated repeatedly in his eyes, and finally turned into determination. The final maneuver was his first step to the stage of Jianghu state. Now Li Honghe had fallen from the invincible realm. Qin Weibai and Situ Cangyue went to snow country. Outside the maneuver, the only one he could rely on was Lin Fengting. But in the maneuver, no matter what he had to face. Chapter 354. For nearly a decade in Jianghu state, there had always been a saying in the military that was unpresentable but taken for granted. The Border Praetorian Corps, known as the most elite super-large comprehensive corps in Jianghu state, could even be said to be the private army of the Dongqing clan. In the beginning, Jianghu state had secretly called it the Dongqing Corps, but after receiving different degrees of warnings, everyone realized how powerful it was. So the saying of the Dongqing Corps gradually disappeared and was replaced by another name, the God of Massacre Corps. This was tantamount to saying that the Border Control Corps was Dongqing Wudi's own corps. But after some meaningful and clear remarks were missing, this name was finally acquiesced by all parties. It was true, at least infinitely close. The Border Control Corps was known as the small military headquarters of Jianghu state. After the first commander Li Guangtu committed treason, the Border Control Corps naturally began to change from the original small-scale special warfare agency to a military force, and eventually formed a behemoth with a total number of nearly 600,000 troops today. There were 5 trump card armies in the Border Control Corps, namely Thunderbolt, Pegasus, Bloodbath, Wild Sand and Black Dragon, which were stationed in Nanyun, 3 provinces in the east, Tibet and Beijiang. They had great influence. In addition, there were 4 independent airborne divisions, 2 special investigation brigades, nearly 20 flying formations, 1 intelligence department, and 6 special warfare brigades. All the institutions were in order. With such strength, even in the whole dark world, it could be called a giant. This was also the capital for Dongqing Wudi to be domineering in Jianghu state. For the entire Border Control Corps, Dongqing Wudi, who was not in the invincible realm, was like a god, sacred and majestic. He was the spiritual symbol of the whole corps. The 4 commanders promoted by Dongqing Wudi, Wang Wannian of the Bloodbath Battalion, Shi Hanbing of the Wild Sand Battalion, Xiao Dongzhan of the Pegasus Battalion, and Cheng Huaining of the Black Dragon Battalion, were the pillars of the Border Control Corps. The middle and high-level officers were the foundation of the pillar, and the elite soldiers were the cornerstone of the corps. This was an unbreakable and great whole. It was famous for 2 iron rules, which had now almost become the soul of the Border Control Corps. The first rule was that as long as the Border Control Corps could still fight, the officers must be at the forefront when charging without destroying their own formation. The officers must be at the end when retreating. The marshal was at the forefront, followed by the general, followed by the colonel, and then the lieutenant. The second rule was that under no circumstances would the Border Control Corps keep any captives. Dongqing Wudi once said something that shocked the whole Jianghu state: "My soldiers are fighting, not King staying behind to look after children." That's what he said, and that's what he did. Dongqing Wudi had been in charge of the Border Control Corps for more than 20 years. There had been countless border conflicts with the superpowers in the Dark World, India, Snow Country, Annan State and Gaoshan. No one who made an enemy out of him would survive. Every time they charged, he, dressed in the marshal's uniform, would take the lead and be the last to retreat. With such a marshal, every time the Border Control Corps fought, hundreds of thousands of troops in the Border Control Corps would follow Dongqing Wudi's sword. For more than 20 years, he had forged the fiercest and strongest military soul in the entire Jianghu state with the name of God of Massacre. He was invincible and invincible for Jianghu state. For decades, Dongqing Wudi was definitely the best commander. A soldier who could make an army of 600,000 die for him. The word great was enough to describe it. Because of his greatness, Dongqing Wudi had a heavier responsibility. Heavier responsibility meant more weighing and thinking. Therefore, Dongqing Wudi was under a lot of pressure, as heavy as a mountain. A few hours had passed since the call with Ning Ziyuan, and Dongqing Wudi still hadn't left the building of the army headquarters. The night in Yuzhou was quiet and solemn. He pushed open the window of the office, and the sultry wind blew in, sweeping away a lot of pungent smoke. Dongqing Wudi squinted at the night sky and remained silent. Bai Qingzhao, the deputy secretary general of the army headquarters, still stayed in the office, accompanying Dongqing Wudi in silence. "Minister, have you thought it through?" In the long silence, Bai Qingzhao suddenly asked. The office was very quiet. So his voice was hoarse, which even he found harsh. Dongqing Wudi's body seemed to shake. Bai Qingzhao was his brother-in-law. Even though he and Bai Qingqian had been in a cold war for many years, they were still close friends. Most of the time, Bai Qingzhao would not call him by his title but by his name. Now he called him minister. It could be seen how important Dongqing Wudi's next decision was, especially for the relationship between the Bai family and the Dongqing clan. The document of Kunlun City with the seals of the office of the president and the cabinet was still on the desk. The content of the first maneuver in the document was extremely dazzling. Teamwork. Without thinking at all, Dongqing Wudi knew what Li Tianlan would face in the final maneuver. He would face Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, Jiang Shangyu, Song Xiai and others plus their team. Most of the main forces of the East Emperor Palace were seriously injured. Even if the East Emperor Palace was in its heyday with Li Tianlan, it would be difficult to face such a lineup. Li Tianlan seemed to be doomed. Whether he could survive the final maneuver and make a comeback, the Li family, which was still alone, could not decide. Sai City, which had lost its strength, and the murderous weapon-setting sun, could not decide. Samsara Palace, which was out of reach, could not decide. Only the giant group and Dongqing Wudi had the power and strength to intervene in the final maneuver. As for the academics and the office of the president, they agreed to the document and were waiting for Dongqing Wudi's decision. Bai Qingzhao looked at Dongqing Wudi's back. His eyes were extremely complicated. At the beginning of the month, his father, Bai Zhanfeng, and his sister, Bai Qingqian, went to Zhongyuan together. As one of the core members of the Bai family, Bai Qingzhao naturally knew the reason. Li Tianlan's life and death now seemed to be decided in the final maneuver, but in fact, it was in the hands of Dongqing Wudi. No one would doubt that the Dongqing clan did not have this power. As long as Dongqing Wudi was willing to pay the price, not to mention a few young people, even if Gu Xingyun recovered from his injury and joined hands with Wang Tianzong, Li Tianlan would not die. But Dongqing Wudi's willingness or unwillingness was a swing between family and country. "I'm still waiting for news from Ziyuan," Dongqing Wudi said slowly. "Does it make sense?" Bai Qingzhao said in a low voice. Ning Ziyuan has a deep foundation in the Eastern Theater of Operations, but if he leaves that position, it will be difficult for him to control this maneuver. He will make efforts, but his strength is definitely not enough to turn the tide. You know this. Dongqing Wudi smiled bitterly. Between family and country, he muttered to himself, and his smile was full of bitterness. Anyone who broke the rules would have to pay the price. Kunlun City changed the order of the final maneuver and increased the casualty rate. But all of this was within the scope of Kunlun City's power, that was, within the scope permitted by the rules. If Dongqing Wudi wanted to intervene in the final maneuver, it was tantamount to breaking the rules, so he must pay the price. Just like Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai failed to attack Li Honghe and could only watch the Li family make a comeback, whether they were willing or not. Some things had to be done and they had to bear the consequences. And the price Dongqing Wudi needed to pay could only come from the Border Control Corps. He was now the executive minister of the army headquarters of Zhongzhou State and still the commander of the Border Control Corps. This part-time job must be given away, but giving up this position did not mean that the Dongqing clan was willing to give up the dominance of the Border Control Corps. With Dongqing Wudi's foundation and prestige in the Border Control Corps, in a short time, even if all the 4 commanders of the Border Control Corps were removed, the new commander could not quickly establish his own team. By the time the new commander established his authority, Dongqing Wudi had already established his own order in the military. The Wang family of Beihai was extremely enthusiastic about the position of the Border Control Corps. If the Dongqing clan made a deal with the Wang family of Beihai, under normal circumstances, it would not be a one-off deal at all. At least for a few years, it would involve many subtle balances and compromises. That was under normal circumstances. But if Dongqing Wudi risked universal condemnation and broke the rules, The price he had to pay might be the control of the entire Border Control Corps, or at least most of it. What he gave up was more than most of the control. There were also nearly 600,000 soldiers who worshipped him like a god. If the morale of the Border Control Corps was unstable, it would become a national affair. And from the bottom of his heart, Dongqing Wudi did not want to experience the guilt and entanglement of giving up nearly 600,000 troops. Give up? How could he? But if he didn't give up, would he watch Li Tianlan be besieged in the final maneuver? If Li Tianlan died in the final maneuver, not to mention what would happen to Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai, the relationship between him and Bai Qingqian would come to an end. At that time, the poor woman who had made Dongqing Wudi feel guilty for many years would definitely take revenge on the Dongqing clan at all costs. The Bai family and the Dongqing clan parted ways, the giant group split, and the family was separated. This was a family affair. How could there be absolute fairness and justice between families and countries? Dongqing Wudi was lost in thought. This was a choice between family and country, and it was also the entanglement between the responsibility of a husband and the vocation of a soldier. If you had known this, why did you do it? Bai Qingzhao suddenly said. Her tone was light, without sarcasm, anger, or any emotion, as if she were saying a fact similar to 1 + 1 = 2. He really didn't mean to mock the Dongqing clan. The Dongqing clan was not the only one who tried to change. That year, when all the plans started, Dongqing Hongguang and Dongqing Wudi were present. His father, Bai Zhanfeng, was present, and so was Bai Qingzhao himself. They were all in the game. It was just that this game of chess had been played for more than 20 years. For the Li family it was just the beginning, but for them, it had already entered the end stage. From the middle stage to the end stage, the final maneuver was the key of the key. But all the people in the game did not expect that Dongqing Wudi, who was extremely determined because of his responsibility, would become so hesitant at this time because of his responsibility. It was not wrong to choose the Li family back then. Dongqing Wudi said calmly, "We chose the Li family because it was the best choice and the only choice. It was the same more than 20 years ago, and it is still the same today more than 20 years later." Your decision? Bai Qingzhao didn't go to Dongqing Wudi to discuss right and wrong, but just asked with a poker face. Dongqing Wudi fell silent again. His expression kept changing. Under the light of the office, it was clear that he was in pain and entanglement. "No matter what decision you make, I will understand you," Bai Qingzhao said softly. Bai Qingzhao said softly. These were words from the bottom of his heart and he could understand. But it is limited to understanding. Understanding did not mean approval. Understanding was rational analysis after putting aside one's standpoint. Acknowledging him was a rather callous choice from his own standpoint. If one did not agree, one would be an enemy. The Bai family made a choice back then. Today they would make the same choice. There was no reason just because of that year. "What do you suggest?" Dongqing Wudi suddenly asked. "Just abandon it," Bai Qingzhao said without hesitation. "It's easy for you to say. Just abandon the 600,000 troops?" Dongqing Wudi looked displeased. "I know it's not easy," Bai Qingzhao said softly, "but are you willing to give up Li Tianlan?" Dongqing Wudi was even more displeased. If he was willing, why should he be entangled now? He put Li Tianlan on the same level as the 600,000 troops, which showed that he cared about Li Tianlan. "Since you are unwilling, then abandon it." Bai Qingzhao stood up, threw a cigarette to Dongqing Wudi and said softly, "Don't forget our original intention. At that time, you, me and Uncle Zhou sought change. Our ultimate goal was to get rid of the loose alliance of the giant group. It was destined to be a process of giving up and gaining. Wudi, you have your 600,000 troops, and the Bai family and the Zhou family also have their own concerns and responsibilities. But if we can pick it up, we can put it down. When the change we want appears, we'll just take back what we put down." He patted Dongqing Wudi on the shoulder. "This is your second year. You have at least 8 years. Why can't you afford to wait? If you abandon the Border Control Corps, you will still be the executive minister of the army headquarters of Jianghu State." Dongqing Wudi's body shook violently, and he didn't speak for a long time. The moon outside the window was rising. The army headquarters building was dark, and the sky was full of stars. After a long time, Dongqing Wudi picked up his mobile phone. Ning Ziyuan hadn't replied to him yet. He had left the Eastern Theater of Operations. It would take time for many things to work, at least overnight. "Get the car ready," Dongqing Wudi said in a low voice. "Go to the Hidden Dragon Sea. I want to meet the president in person." Bai Qingzhao's body relaxed quietly, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Dongqing Wudi walked out of the office, took out his mobile phone, and dialed the phone number of General Wang Wantian, the former commander of the Blood Battalion of the Border Control Corps and the current commander of the Eastern Theater of Operations. Marshal. The phone was quickly connected. Wang Wantian's steady voice sounded extremely powerful. Wantian, prepare according to plan number 2. Inform Huaining. Time is pressing. You have to hurry. Dongqing Wudi rubbed his temples and his tone was a little tired. There was a moment of silence on the other end of the phone. Wang Wantian's deep voice sounded again. Marshal, have you really decided? Dongqing Wudi smiled, a little self-deprecating. Go ahead. He gave the order in a calm tone. Wang Wantian took a deep breath, said yes and then hung up the phone. Dongqing Wudi put down his mobile phone, walked out of the army headquarters building, and looked at the starry sky above. Between family and country. In his decades, someone had told him that when the country was about to fall, how could the family survive? Someone had also told him that the bounden duty of a soldier was to protect the family and defend the country. But no one had ever told him how to choose between family and country. So the choice he made tonight was his own. The country was not broken. The family was about to fall. Chapter 355. There is a chapter called Between Families and Countries before this. It's very important. Don't miss it. If the order of the final maneuver of the 2 academies was adjusted to target Li Tianlan, then another change after the order adjustment made everyone smell the smell of blood. Strictly speaking, this was the only change. The order of the content of the maneuver was disrupted, but it was not too much or too little. It was not considered a change. What Kunlun City changed this time was just a number. In the first round of the final maneuver of the 2 academies, the predicted casualty rate of the teamwork combat was 55%. Compared with the 30% in the last session, the extra 25% was destined to be a bloody fight to the death. Allowing more than half of the casualty rate was tantamount to Kunlun City telling everyone that they could be ruthless in teamwork combat without worrying about everything. It also foreshadowed Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan to be ruthless to Li Tianlan. The heavenly son of Zhongzhou State, the heir of the Li family, the first person of the young generation. In the maneuver, if they were unlucky, they might become part of the 55% casualty rate. Li Tianlan could clearly feel the gloomy smell of blood and killing intent behind the fluctuation of this index. Because of this, he asked Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin to abstain and chose to face everyone by himself. Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi could no longer talk about implicating each other. But there was no doubt that if she really accompanied Li Tianlan to the battlefield, Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan would definitely kill her. A daughter of the Dongqing clan who had no position was worth winning over by anyone, but once she took a clear side, she would be an enemy. In the maneuver that seemed to be absolutely fair, there was no need to talk nonsense in the face of the enemy. Li Tianlan didn't think he would lose in the maneuver. But at the critical moment, it was really difficult for him to guarantee that he could take care of the people around him. Whether it was for Dongqing Rushi herself or because of his relationship with the Dongqing clan, Li Tianlan didn't want any accident to happen to Dongqing Rushi. It was late at night when he persuaded Dongqing Rushi, which was the early morning of July 23rd. That afternoon, Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi appeared in the Sky Academy. Before preparing to attend the symposium held by Gu Xingyun, Li Tianlan went to the ward of Li Beidian and others. Li Beidian, Su Chu and Ning Qianqing. The 3 of them were real brothers in hardship. They lay side by side on the bed looking gloomy. Du Hanin, Yu Qingyan and Yi Huayu stood in the ward helplessly. The atmosphere was so oppressive that it almost froze. When Li Tianlan and Dongqing Rushi walked in, they just looked at him. The atmosphere became even more oppressive. What happened? Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows. Ning Qianqing, who was closest to the door, glanced at him and shook his head with a bitter smile. He did not speak. Li Tianlan glanced around and fixed his eyes on Du Hanin. Du Hanin calmly waved a document in her hand. It was information about the contents of the maneuver. The symposium held by Gu Xingyun would officially begin in less than 2 hours. At noon, all the people who were eligible to be invited received this information. The corner of Li Tianlan's mouth moved and he was about to speak. Damn. Li Beidian suddenly said, I'm participating in the team battle in the maneuver. Su Chu and Ning Qianqing raised their eyebrows. Just when they were about to say that they would go regardless of the consequences, Li Tianlan interrupted them with a smile. It's useful for you to go with your current injury. At least you can get rid of a few cannon fodders. Then I'll drag you away and finally lose without knowing why. Is this the result you want? Li Beidian gritted his teeth. He should not have been so seriously injured in the battle with Gu Yulan. If it weren't for Gu Yunxia's sudden sneak attack, he would definitely be the real core combat force standing next to Li Tianlan today. The Great Void Sword was unsheathed. He could not defeat Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao, but at least he could share a lot of pressure for Li Tianlan. No one is allowed to go, Li Tianlan said calmly. He glanced at Du Hanyin and was silent for a while. Suddenly he said, "You and Rushi will abstain in the afternoon." Dongqing Rushi held Li Tianlan's hand, and there was nothing unusual on her face. Today she was wearing a pair of black shorts, a white t-shirt and a cute bun hairstyle. Standing beside Li Tianlan, she was quiet like a blade of grass. Abstain? Du Hanyin looked up in astonishment. Everyone's eyes were focused on Li Tianlan. Abstain. Li Tianlan nodded. Young governor, I'm not afraid of death. Du Hanyin bit her lip and said in a determined tone. She joined Sai City 3 years ago in Heaven Capital and had been regarded as a member of Sai City for the past 3 years. During these 3 years, Du Hanyin's realm had not made much progress and she barely entered the thunder-shocking realm. But her mutant wind vein was becoming mature. It didn't take time at all for her to be regarded as a capable assassin in Sai City. She had the wind vein, a mutant one at that. In the whole Sai City and even the whole Dark World, Tribulation, who was known as the King of Shadow and had dual wind veins, could be said to be her best teacher. Under the protection of Sai City, she blended herself perfectly into the shadow. In the darkness, she got her long-lost dignity. What about before? After her family was destroyed and before she entered Sai City, she was still sleeping with different men in the Sky Academy, just for a few pitiful credits. Du Hanyin was willing to die for Sai City and the young governor of Sai City just for the small but significant changes in the past 3 years. I don't doubt your determination, Li Tianlan said softly, but it's meaningless. The opponent's lineup this time looks really luxurious. We don't have such a lineup, so we have to admit that we can't compete with them. It's not shameful to abstain temporarily. You'll have nothing if you die. You won't play a role here in the future. I alone am enough for the maneuver here. He paused and continued, if you follow me, I'm afraid that I won't be able to take care of you and will be distracted. This was the reason to persuade Dongqing Rushi. It would not be a problem to persuade the people of East Emperor Palace. I was thinking that when you came back, East Emperor Palace would make a killing in the final maneuver, and our brothers would be in the limelight. Now, Ning Qianqing laughed self-deprecatingly and bitterly. Our future is not in the Sky Academy. Li Tianlan laughed. This is just a starting point. The sky of our future is in the south. He looked at Ning Qianqing meaningfully. The south? Everyone was a little surprised. At this time in Jianghu State, most people would think that Li Tianlan would develop in the north or in Jianghu after graduation. Situ Tsangyue, the governor of Sai City, used the national weapon-setting sun to seriously injure Gu Xingyun. Under the anger of the higher-ups, Sai City suffered heavy losses. Liaodong and Longjiang province had now fallen into the hands of Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai respectively. But in Guangdong, Sai City still had the final say. As the young governor of Sai City, it was natural for Li Tianlan to go to Guangdong. Jianghu was the place where the Li family made a comeback, and the political wealth left by Wu Jingmin was enough to make Li Tianlan go smoothly. These two places were the most suitable for Li Tianlan. Who could imagine that he was going to the south? The south? Li Baiqian's eyes lit up quietly. Where? Tianan. Li Tianlan took a deep look at Li Baiqian and then at Ning Qianqing. Tianan was outside the territory of Jianghu State, within the sphere of influence of Jianghu State, and outside the constraints of rules. It was not until this moment, facing Li Baiqian and Ning Qianqing, that Li Tianlan clearly realized what it meant for him to go to Tianan. Many arrangements, intentionally or unintentionally, had been made a long time ago, and it was not until today that they showed their great value. In Tianan, the current commander of the Tianan Freedom Corps, which actually belonged to Jianghu State under the banner of the rebel army of Annan State, was Ning Ziyuan. He was Ning Qianqing's father. When East Emperor Palace went to Tianan, Ning Qianqing could invisibly play the role of Li Tianlan's spokesperson in Tianan. In Jianghu State, Tianan was located in the southwest. Some things in the special warfare system of Tianan would frequently connect with the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters. Who was the current minister of the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters? It was Wei Kunlun, the Nirvana Sword Master of Mount Shu. He was Li Baiqian's first senior brother. If Ning Qianqing was Li Tianlan's spokesperson in Tianan, Li Baidian was the bridge between Tiannan and the special warfare system of Jianghu State. Between Tiannan and Jianghu State, the biggest force was the Blood Battalion of the Border Control Corps of Jianghu State. Wang Wantian, the commander of the Blood Battalion, was transferred to the Eastern Theater of Operations as the commander. But now the core of the Dongqing clan was still the commander of the Blood Battalion. Thunder God. Dongqing Rushi's godfather. He was also the uncle who took Li Tianlan to the desert from the border. In a trance, there seemed to be a golden path in front of him. Until now, Li Tianlan vaguely had a feeling of sudden enlightenment. Ning Chenqing, Li Baidian, Dongqing Rushi, Thunder God, Ning Ziyuan, they were like chess pieces scattered on a misty chessboard. All of them were vague and had no connection with each other. But now, with the placement of Li Tianlan, the biggest chess piece, the fog dissipated and everything became clear. Li Tianlan took a deep breath. He saw the chessboard of Tiannan with all the pieces placed. He also saw in Tiannan his way to get rid of the fate of being a chess piece and become a chess player. That was where the real beginning began. It's Tiannan. Li Tianlan muttered to himself. Tiannan? An old voice rang out at the door of the ward. Zhuang Huayang, the principal of the Sky Academy, came in accompanied by Qin Ku, the deputy director of the teaching office. He looked at Li Tianlan, who looked calm, with undisguised complexity and realization in his eyes. He was also a player in the game. So, like others, he saw Li Tianlan's future with a gloomy fog. But it was not until he heard Li Tianlan mention the word Tiannan that he suddenly realized what a wonderful move the hand that had pushed Li Tianlan behind the scenes had made in Tiannan. Tiannan. For Zhuang Huayang it was like a thunder. Everything seemed so obvious. But Ning Ziyuan went to Tiannan because the Wang family of Beihai was siding with the same faction and fighting against the different faction. Thunder God of the Blood Battalion was the prelude to Dongqing Wudi's trade with the Border Control Corps after Wang Wantian left. Mount Shu became the Southwest Special Warfare Headquarters, which was expected by the public and supported by the Prince Group. All the forces acted unintentionally, but in the end, they operated a situation that was like heaven for Li Tianlan. Zhuang Huayang did not believe that it was all unintentional. He would rather believe that there was a hand behind all this that had reached into the inside of the major groups and was carefully and quietly controlling the situation. This was truly unfathomable. He just did not know who this hand, who could be called a national master, was. Was it Li Honghe? Was it the Dongqing clan? Or Qin Weibai? No matter who it was too late when the people in the game realized it. The Li family, a big dragon that had been trapped on the chessboard for more than 20 years, had been completely revived in silence. Zhuang Huayang sighed and shook his head, thinking of the call with the chief last night. Before that, he understood the chief's approach, but today when he heard the words Tiannan, he realized that he had to remind the chief's means. Chapter 356. Li Tianlan glanced at Zhuang Huayang. His eyes were calm, so calm that there was some politeness in them. It's Tiannan, he said softly. Zhuang Huayang was speechless for a while. It was too late to say anything now. The Special Warfare Headquarters was established, Ning Ziyuan was transferred, and the Blood Legion completed the handover. Under such circumstances, Li Tianlan's trip to Tiannan was really like turning into a dragon when encountering a storm. Zhuang Huayang was convinced, and he even had some awe for the person behind the scenes. To gather the general trend of Jianghu State in Tiannan, such a technique was truly grand and exquisite to the extreme. When the storm in Jianghu State was unstable, he calmly placed a chess piece in Tiannan. It seemed a little unreasonable, but he suddenly revitalized the whole chessboard. What convinced Zhuang Huayang the most was that there was no sign of any deliberate action at all. Naturally, several major forces operated at the same time, and they had inadvertently created such a situation that no one had expected. After the Yuzhou conference, the Li family made a comeback. Everyone's eyes were focused on the northeast and southeast. Some people were guarding against the Li family and some were counting their gains. The situation in Tiannan was obvious, but because everything seemed so natural, no one had realized it yet. The easiest to overlook was often the most obvious. For example, the sunlight during the day. For example, the starry night sky. Zhuang Huayang didn't know how much preparation the person behind the scenes had made for such a wonderful technique. But if this person hadn't been clear about the situation in Jianghu State, there would have been no such effect as today's thunder and silence. When did all of this start? Zhuang Huayang pondered silently. The general trend of Tiannan and the changes of several sensitive positions were the result of the internal operations of the Wang family of Beihai, the Prince Group and the Giant Group. The Yuzhou conference, Lin, and the Northeast had indeed attracted everyone's attention. Thus, for the time being, no one had noticed Tiannan. This didn't seem hard to understand, but it was also hard to understand. After all, Li Tianlan was here. He was a rare martial arts genius in Jianghu state for decades. Li Tianlan could be said to be the most central figure in all these changes. How could he be ignored? To anyone ignoring such a martial arts genius, ignore? Ignore. Zhuang Huayang's brain suddenly became a little sluggish. He looked at Li Tianlan's calm face. While thinking, Zhuang Huayang's back was covered in cold sweat. Ignore Li Tianlan? No one would be so stupid. Even if there were in the past, there wouldn't be a second time after their return. Zhuang Huayang had never ignored Li Tianlan. He was a martial arts prodigy, but it was not until this moment that he suddenly realized that Li Tianlan was only a martial arts genius in his mind. That was the only impression he had. Li Tianlan had done a lot, but he seemed to have done nothing. With his strength and status, there was nothing he could do now. In the final battle of Heaven Capital, he was a pawn of Jianghu state. In the process of the Li family returning to the peak, he was like a pawn of the Li family. He was so pure, so clear-headed, and had always been silently improving his strength. He really didn't consider anything, or at least he didn't show it. Why did the Li family suddenly collapse back then? Did the Wang family of Beihai do something secretly? What resources did Kunlun City use in the plan back then? Would these resources be clues? What was the truth behind Li Guangtu's treason? From the beginning to the end, Li Tianlan didn't even care about this series of questions that he had to consider in his position. He knew nothing about the past and didn't explore it. Instead, he focused purely on improving his strength, waiting for the opportunity to take the first step. He was too obvious. So much so that it even became his label in people's eyes. Zhuang Huayang finally knew why the powerful Wang family of Beihai and the delicate Kunlun city ignored Tiannan. Their eyes were indeed on the northeast and Jianghu, but also on Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan showed that he just wanted to improve his strength. And what they paid attention to was Li Tianlan himself. So that in the end, Tiannan, such a huge omission was formed. Zhuang Huayang's heart was a little cold. He didn't know whether Li Tianlan did all this intentionally or unintentionally. If the answer was intentional, he was willing to use himself as a chess piece and use the purest way to attract everyone's attention. How scheming was he to be so dormant? The corners of Zhuang Huayang's mouth kept trembling. At this moment he wanted to say a lot, but he didn't know why he couldn't say anything. It's almost time. Li Tianlan looked down at his watch. It was 2:20 in the afternoon. Gu Xingyun's symposium was held at 3 o'clock in the conference room of the Sky Academy, about 15 minutes away from here. He nodded to Zhuang Huayang, then looked at Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin and said calmly, "Let's go." Tianlan. Zhuang Huayang took a deep breath and suddenly shouted. Li Tianlan turned to look at him. "What's your plan?" When he asked this, Zhuang Huayang's tone was a little bitter. The final maneuver of the two academies was a grand event of the special warfare system of Jianghu state. Kunlun City had the greatest dominance. But as the current ruling group of Jianghu state, if the academics insisted on standing as an ally, even if it couldn't change the order of the maneuver, it could at least fight for more living space for Li Tianlan and let him see the sincerity of the academics. But the chief didn't do so. Instead, he chose silence and acquiescence. Li Tianlan was still an ally of the academics. But this subtle change began after Li Tianlan established a closer relationship with the giant group. The academics hoped that Li Tianlan had something to do with the giant group, but they didn't want their relationship to be too close. Li Tianlan, who largely depended on the academics to survive, was far more in line with the interests of the academics than Li Tianlan, who was at ease in the two groups. But Zhou Yuanshan's trip to Jianghu was tantamount to the giant group clearly announcing to the outside world that they would create their core team with Li Tianlan as the core for the next few decades. The academics could only take this opportunity to pressure Li Tianlan and the giant group. In such a state, Li Tianlan was an ally of the academics, but he was more like a pawn used by the academics to ask for benefits from the giant group. The most important thing was that Li Tianlan was willing to be a pawn of the Li family, but he might not be willing to be a pawn of the academics. Now the situation in Tiannan was gradually clear, and Li Tianlan's future was predictable. He was the strongest ally in the future, but in the next final maneuver he would face an extremely embarrassing situation. Zhuang Huayang really wanted to know what Li Tianlan's plan was. Rushi and Hanin will abstain. Li Tianlan said calmly, "I will participate in the final maneuver myself and participate in their so-called team battle." "By yourself?" Zhuang Huayang's face changed dramatically. I won't lose, Li Tianlan said blandly. Zhuang Huayang smiled bitterly again. The academics had made their own moves. The key was whether Dongqing Wudi was willing to break the rules for Li Tianlan. If Dongqing Rushi did not abstain, Dongqing Wudi was undoubtedly more likely to take action for his daughter. But if Dongqing Rushi abstained, on one side was the responsibility of the Border Control Corps, and on the other side was the weight of Li Tianlan. How would Dongqing Wudi choose? If he chose to give up, this maneuver would be a dead end for Li Tianlan. If he lost, Li Tianlan would die. If he won, Li Tianlan would still die. Li Tianlan could win with such a lineup. Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai would definitely kill this threat at all costs. This might be an opportunity for the academics? But if the giant group gave up, would the big shots of the academics really offend the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City for Li Tianlan? Who was willing to bear that kind of pressure? Zhuang Huayang had a splitting headache. He took a deep breath, patted Li Tianlan on the shoulder and said in a deep voice, I'll call the leading cadre right away. Li Tianlan smiled, turned and walked out of the ward. The conference room of the Sky Academy was very large. The environment was pale white, simple and spacious. When Li Tianlan walked into the conference room with Dongqing Rushi and Du Hanin 15 minutes in advance, Gu Xingyun was already sitting in the main seat of the conference room. Gu Qianchuan, who used to serve as a real marshal in Jianghu state and now became a nominal title with the disbandment of the Snowdance Corps, stood quietly beside Gu Xingyun with an indifferent expression. The fresh sunshine after the rain gently sprinkled into the main seat of the conference room. The two invincible realm experts of Jianghu state stood and bathed in the sunshine, as if they were wearing a layer of golden clothes. There were already many figures in the conference room. Gu Xingyun's symposium was held by the top young people in the two academies. To be exact, they were high-level people who had a clear team and served as the core figures in their respective teams, or the individual immortals with great personal strength. Li Tianlan had read the information. This time there were about 30 forces in the two academies, and the total number of people was about 750. Under normal circumstances, this should be the total number of people in the team cooperation maneuver. There were lunatics who participated in the team maneuver to save their lives, but there were not many in previous years. In the final maneuver, where the casualty rate was at least 30%, an individual facing a team was tantamount to courting death, or it was tantamount to giving credits to others. According to the rules of the two academies, the final maneuver of the two academies was important, but credits were more important. Therefore, the maneuver seemed to be a contest of force, but the tricks in it also tested a person's mind. Every student would consider how to make use of their strengths to make up for their weaknesses and strive for the most credits to improve their ranking. As soon as Li Tianlan and the other two walked into the conference room, almost everyone's eyes were focused on them. Most people's eyes were a little strange. Wang Xingxiao and Song Xiai sat in the middle. Seeing Li Tianlan come in, Wang Xingxiao waved his hand with a smile as a greeting, looking very friendly. Gu Hanshan, the young master of Kunlun City, and Gu Yulan, the last disciple of Gu Qianchuan, sat together. They were almost next to Wang Xingxiao and Song Xiai. Gu Yulan, whose face was still a little pale, was still wearing a mask. She snuggled up to Gu Hanshan like a little bird. Jiang Shangyu sat on the other side of Gu Hanshan. Before Li Tianlan came in, several super experts of the young generation of Jianghu state had been whispering together. What they said did not matter at all. What mattered was that the signal they gave was clear enough, and that was enough. Li Tianlan was expressionless. He picked a chair at random and sat down, quietly waiting for the meeting to begin. Time passed slowly. At 3 o'clock sharp, the bell rang in the office. Gu Xingyun, who had been sitting in the main seat with his eyes closed, opened his eyes. He glanced around and a smile bloomed on his elegant face. Everyone is here. Gu Xingyun said, let's have a meeting. Li Tianlan froze and subconsciously narrowed his eyes. Everyone is here? Sitting next to him, Du Hanin and Dongqing Rushi were celebrities of the two academies respectively. Before the meeting began, they had introduced the main figures present to Li Tianlan. The conference room was large and there were many people sitting, but it was far from complete. There were about 30 forces of the two academies that had not been disbanded after 3 years. But Du Hanin and Dongqing Rushi introduced too few. 5 from the Sky Academy. 7 from the Deep Sea Academy. This also included East Emperor Palace, 3000 World, Phantom Palace and Jilei Mountain. That was to say, half of the young forces of the two academies were not present at this time. but Gu Xingyun said that everyone was here. Li Tianlan did not think that Gu Xingyun would make mistakes in this kind of thing. Then it could only prove one thing. In this team maneuver, more than half of the forces in the two academies chose to abstain for various reasons. Abstaining was allowed in the maneuver of the two academies. But abstaining was not without a price. Some credits would be deducted. So abstaining was not so easy to determine. But even so, more than half of the forces chose to abstain. What did this mean? Li Tianlan observed everyone in the conference room calmly. Of the 12 forces present at this time, in addition to East Emperor Palace, Phantom Palace, 3000 World, and Jilei Mountain, there were 8 other forces. There was no doubt that these were the forces led by Wang Xingxiao and Gu Hanshan. The rules set by Kunlun City seemed to be ordinary except for increasing the casualty rate. But in fact, the team maneuver, which used to be placed in the middle or at the end, had become the simplest and most brutal encirclement and suppression with the adjustment of the order. Li Tianlan was the target of everyone's encirclement and suppression. Could even be said that he was the only target. Kunlun City and the Wang family of Beihai made it clear that they wanted to give Li Tianlan a little chance. Li Tianlan looked at Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan. Gu Xingyun did not look at him. But Gu Qianchuan's eyes were always on Li Tianlan. His eyes were ferocious and vicious, with awe-inspiring killing intent. Seeing Li Tianlan's gaze, Gu Qianchuan raised the corner of his mouth and showed a disdainful sneer. Li Tianlan lowered his head again and remained calm. Gu Xingyun smiled again. His injury was indeed very serious and his breath was short and heavy. Even if he tried to hide it, he could not hide it perfectly. Li Tianlan glanced at him and lowered his head again. Some teams finally applied to give up this team maneuver for various reasons. I personally agreed with their abstention. So the team combat on the first day of the maneuver is probably everyone here in your team. Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and continued, this year's team maneuver is special. After careful consideration, Kunlun City decided to increase the casualty rate of this maneuver. But correspondingly, the credits obtained will also increase accordingly. The casualty rate will increase by 20%, and the credits will be increased by 50% according to the previous standard. Such a result is destined to make the competition between you very fierce. I'll ask you again formally. Is there anyone here who wants to withdraw from the maneuver? There was silence. In the silence, a clear voice sounded. I abstain. What? There was an uproar. Everyone turned to look at Dongqing Rushi, their eyes full of incredible emotions. Dongqing Rushi, Li Tianlan's fiancé, abstained. Did Li Tianlan fall out with the giant group? Gu Xingyun was also stunned, and he didn't even hide the surprise in his eyes. Dongqing Rushi's withdrawal meant that the giant group was less likely to intervene in this maneuver. He had no reason not to be surprised. Dongqing, are you sure? Gu Xingyun asked, trying to make his voice soft. Dongqing Rushi glanced at Gu Xingyun, nodded, stood up and walked out directly. It seemed that she came here to announce the news. I abstain. Du Hanin also stood up and followed Dongqing Rushi out of the conference room. Everyone's brains were buzzing, and they couldn't fully understand what was going on for a while. Diagonally across from Li Tianlan, Wang Xingxiao narrowed his eyes and turned to look at Song Ci. Song Ci didn't look at Wang Xingxiao, just lowered her head. Wang Xingxiao's eyes were still gentle, but the light gradually became stern. In an absolute disadvantage, Li Tianlan didn't want to implicate his woman, so he sent Dongqing Rushi out of the maneuver. Wang Xingxiao had an absolute advantage. Why would he let his woman take the risk? He looked at Song Ci without blinking. Thus, while everyone was still in a state of shock, another unexpected voice rang out. I abstain. Song Ci gritted her teeth and her voice was a little helpless. She glared at Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao smiled and touched Song Ci's hair. This was a man's war. Li Tianlan didn't want his woman to take the risk. As the heir of the Wang family of Beihai, he naturally had no reason to lose to Li Tianlan in this kind of courage. Everyone's eyes began to shift and finally fell on Gu Hanshan. This team maneuver was destined to be a life-and-death fight. Both Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao sent their women out of the maneuver to give them safety. What about Gu Hanshan? The muscles on Gu Hanshan's face twitched fiercely. He was expressionless and said nothing. Gu Yulan meant Gu Hanshan, so she also said nothing. In the silence, Li Tianlan and Wang Xingxiao's eyes seemed to meet for a moment, intentionally or unintentionally. Both of them saw a trace of mockery in each other's eyes. Anyone else wants to quit? Gu Xingyun asked. No one spoke. This time everyone chose to stay. Gu Xingyun looked at Gu Hanshan, and an obscure light flashed in his eyes. His tone was still calm. Very well, since you accept the maneuver, I will introduce the rules. I will tell you the specific tasks of the maneuver the day before the maneuver. Everyone, although your competition is very fierce, I still hope that if possible, you will try to be merciful to your opponents because they are not enemies. This is just a maneuver. From his standpoint, this was what he had to say for the sake of the situation. The sake of the situation was nonsense. It also included the so-called rules that Gu Xingyun explained. In fact, today Gu Hanshan and Wang Xingxiao sat together, which was the most important practical content. The actual content didn't need to be said. It was already here. This was to put pressure on Li Tianlan, and it was also to strengthen the confidence of other young forces that followed the Wang family of Beihai in Kunlun City. This was the real meaning. Li Tianlan quietly listened to Gu Xingyun's nonsense. He felt a little bored. The nonsense was unexpectedly long. The meeting started at 3 o'clock, and Gu Xingyun talked until 4:30. No one had a problem with such maneuver rules. So Gu Xingyun announced the end of the meeting. The young elites who participated in the meeting left one after another. Before leaving, everyone glanced at Li Tianlan with meaningful eyes. Li Tianlan sat in his seat alone. He was truly a loner. He was surrounded by bone-chilling hostility from all directions. He suddenly smiled and glanced at Gu Xingyun again. Then he got up and was about to leave. Stop. A voice suddenly sounded behind him, calm and confident, almost like an order. Li Tianlan calmly turned around. What's the matter? He asked, narrowing his eyes. Gu Hanshan, who had never communicated with Li Tianlan, walked to Li Tianlan. He looked at Li Tianlan's eyes carefully. The two looked at each other. What do you think is more important, survival or glory? Gu Hanshan suddenly said, if it were you, which one do you value most? No one could think that Gu Hanshan's first sentence was to ask such a profound and simple question. Li Tianlan remained calm. He could feel that the eyes of the two invincible realm experts of Kunlun City were focused on him at this time. He suddenly smiled and said calmly, the most important thing is the enemy. I think the master and the servant are the most important. There was a faint but extremely dangerous smile on Gu Hanshan's face. His face was ordinary, but at this time, it had an indescribable strength. I'm willing to give you a chance. You be my dog and I can give you the right to survive and the opportunity to gnaw on bones. How about that? Gu Hanshan's tone was very generous and generous. Don't be ungrateful. He whispered unhurriedly, if you want to live, this is your last chance. If you don't want the face I'm giving you, I promise you will regret it. Only those who knew the past of the Li family in Kunlun City understood what Gu Hanshan meant. The Gu family had a long history. But more than 20 years ago, there was no special warfare group in Jianghu state. At that time there were only 5 groups in Jianghu state. At that time, the Gu family was regarded by many as a running dog at the feet of the Li family, or a running dog of the Southeast group, which could not be shown in public. Gu Hanshan was undoubtedly proud. He didn't want to admit the dark history of the Gu family, but he wanted the heir of the Li family to crawl at his feet and be his dog. Wang Xingxiao heard this sentence. The corners of his mouth twitched slightly. He wanted to say something, but he forced himself to hold back. Let Li Tianlan be a dog? Perhaps in the whole dark world, only Gu Hanshan had this courage. Perhaps even Gu Xingyun didn't have this idea. Wang Xingxiao knew very well that even his father, Wang Tianzong, had tried to rope in Li Tianlan. As long as Li Tianlan agreed to join the Wang family of Beihai in the future, Li Tianlan's weight in the territory of the Wang family of Beihai was no less than that of him, the heir of the Wang family of Beihai. This was not only sincerity, but also respect for Li Tianlan's potential. But now Gu Hanshan asked Li Tianlan to be his dog. Such courage was really cute. Li Tianlan's expression did not change. He looked at Gu Hanshan and directly said what Wang Xingxiao wanted to say. Are you an idiot? He looked at Gu Hanshan and asked very seriously. What did you say? Gu Hanshan's face was cold. I said you're an idiot. Li Tianlan chuckled. Is the young master of Kunlun City that great? Do you really think you're a big shot? You're courting death by offending me like this. Gu Hanshan laughed gloomily and his eyes were cold. I really don't think you're a big shot. Li Tianlan said blandly, in a dangerous situation I will keep my woman away from danger, and Wang Xingxiao will also keep his woman away from danger. What about you? He looked at Gu Yulan and said mockingly, in a dangerous situation in your eyes, your woman may just be a character who can create traps for the enemy. She hasn't recovered yet, right? Based on this alone, you're far inferior to me and Wang Xingxiao. When we climb the martial arts, we cultivate the sword energy and condense the sword intent. We're born as human beings with no breadth of mind and bearing. So what if you have 10 heavenly king hearts? You're just a useless person. Gu Hanshan's face did not change at all, but his tone became colder. Very good, very good. Li Tianlan smiled. What he said was actually the truth. When he entered the secular world 3 years ago, he valued Gu Hanshan, who had the heavenly king heart, because the other party's realm was much higher than his. But in terms of martial arts, he really didn't think much of the heir of Kunlun City. The Gu family used to be a low-key dog. After overthrowing the Li family, it became the war god clan of Jianghu state. Its rise and fall of honor and disgrace were straight up and down. In terms of foundation, it was a real upstart. Gu Hanshan's status was very high, but he didn't want to forget the shame of being a dog of the Li family, at least not far enough for him to forget. In such a state, he had the heavenly king heart, but there must be something wrong with his state of mind. In Li Tianlan's eyes, if he had to count his future opponents among the young generation of Jianghu state, even Jiang Shangyu ranked ahead of Gu Hanshan, not to mention Wang Xingxiao. It's not a good thing for young people to be arrogant. Gu Xingyun's voice suddenly sounded. He walked over slowly and looked at Li Tianlan with a faint smile. Tianlan, no one will doubt your potential. But potential is not equal to combat capability. I've seen many geniuses with amazing potential but died young. Li Tianlan said calmly, Your Highness is experienced and knowledgeable. No wonder you can cultivate such an excellent heir. I admire you. Gu Xingyun was not angry at all. His smile became more elegant and warm. Hanshan is young and has many shortcomings, but it doesn't matter. But he's right about one thing. It's really important to know how to adapt to circumstances and appreciate favors. In this respect, you're not good enough. Do I have to be a dog for him if I do well? Li Tianlan laughed. He suddenly thought of something. I heard that a strong man once killed an invincible realm expert of Kunlun City for a dog? I don't know if it's true. Gu Xingyun's smile slowly faded. He looked at Li Tianlan and said expressionlessly, Tianlan, are you humiliating Kunlun City? I don't dare. Li Tianlan laughed. I just asked casually. I don't need you to remind me of anything in a strange way. Gu Xingyun said indifferently, the Gu family did live under someone else's roof, but it was just a necessary forbearance. The final winner was us. As for the Li family, no matter how glorious it was destroyed. He took a step closer to Li Tianlan and chuckled, but his voice was extremely cold. I can tell you clearly. As long as I'm alive, the Li family can't rise again. You don't want to be a dog? Very well, then be a nonentity for a lifetime. He paused, his voice getting lower and lower, and he chuckled. How is the old dog Li Honghe now? If Situ Tsangyue hadn't stopped me, your grandfather would have died long ago. Ah, but it doesn't matter. Last time I let him fall from the invincible realm, which is equivalent to knocking out his dog teeth. When I recover, I'll go to Lin and again and break his dog legs. It's not difficult to kill him. Li Tianlan looked at Gu Xingyun quietly. There was no anger, no panic. There was only pure emotion in his eyes. I won't let it go. He suddenly laughed. In front of Gu Xingyun, he bent down and took off his shoes and socks. Chapter 357. Many people knew that Gu Xingyun had a mansion beyond many people's imagination on Winter Mountain, called the Purple Gold Pavilion, which was jokingly called the Huading branch of Kunlun City. There was no branch in Kunlun City. The name didn't sound official at all. In fact, it was the highest power center of the Special Warfare Agency of Jianghu State. The Special Warfare Headquarters in various regions of Jianghu State, the Special Operations Bureaus in various provinces, and the various secret service agencies that had no clear scope of responsibility but always played their role were all directly under Kunlun City. Therefore, Kunlun City didn't need the so-called branch. If there was a branch, it would be the Huading Special Operations Bureau. However, it was also well known that Gu Xingyun preferred the Purple Gold Pavilion. The Purple Gold Pavilion was located on the mountainside of Winter Mountain, covering an area of nearly 300 acres. There were only a few dozen villas built by famous masters scattered on the edge, surrounding the 6-story Purple Gold Pavilion in the center. In terms of feng shui, it was a standard blessed land for hiding wind, water, and gathering qi. The layers were clear and natural. Coupled with the artificial layout, it seemed that this place could enjoy the luck of Winter Mountain. Gu Xingyun believed in fate, so every time he came to Huading, he would live in the Purple Gold Pavilion. Even when he held meetings and issued orders to the Southeast Special Warfare Agency, if he was in Huading, he would also set the meeting place here. This place was different from the turbulent Yuzhou and the snowy Kunlun. Standing here and looking at Huading, there was only an infinite expanse. Therefore, Gu Xingyun had always regarded the Purple Gold Pavilion as his own blessed land. It was already 10 o'clock in the evening when Gu Xingyun returned to the Purple Gold Pavilion from the Sky Academy. The Sky Academy held a banquet that was neither serious nor relaxing. After the banquet ended, Gu Xingyun went straight back to the Purple Gold Pavilion. Li Qingqing was sitting in the hall playing chess with herself. The soft crystal lamp in the hall was on. Under the light, the girl staring at the chessboard attentively was picturesque. Her beauty was like a spring rain. She wasn't violent or abrupt. She was natural, elegant, and gentle. She was usually imprinted in the depths of a person's soul without making a sound. Seeing Gu Xingyun coming in, Li Qingqing raised her head and subconsciously stood up and called, "Dad. Make 2 cups of tea." Gu Xingyun ordered calmly and casually sat on the sofa. Li Qingqing nodded meekly and turned to leave. Gu Qianchuan sat opposite to Gu Xingyun. He looked down at Li Qingqing's self-entertaining chess game and said with a smile, "Qingqing is very smart. In the next few years when you recuperate, carve it carefully. After a few years, it may not be worse than today's Song Ci. It should be promising in the future." Gu Xingyun was also looking at the chess game in front of him, but his mind was completely elsewhere. Kunlun City did not have the almost extravagant and endless resources of the Wang family of Beihai, so everyone in Kunlun City was working hard to enhance their strength. Moreover, Li Qingqing was not as favored as Wang Yuetong in the Wang family of Beihai, so her martial arts practice was very hard. Now, at the age of 20, she had entered the stabilization period of the fire-flaming realm with a solid foundation. With her talent, although she did not have the wind and thunder veins and the heavenly king heart, she still had a chance to enter the thunder-shocking realm within 3 or 4 years if she cultivated diligently. A master of the thunder-shocking realm at the age of 24 or 25, and a young and stunning woman at that, if not unparalleled, was at least rare. "We'll see." Gu Xingyun thought for a while and said indifferently, "It's a pity to waste such a talent." Gu Qianchuan insisted intentionally or unintentionally, not stingy with his evaluation of Li Qingqing. Gu Xingyun lowered his head and his eyes were a little complicated. Seeing such an excellent daughter, there was no relief in his eyes, only complexity. This was the daughter he and Li Shi gave birth to. Gu Xingyun was convinced that this was his biological daughter. But he did not like her at all. Every time he saw the mother and daughter, Gu Xingyun would always think of some old things that he did not want to remember at all. "You don't like her?" Gu Qianchuan asked a nonsense question. Gu Xingyun glanced at him and did not speak. Gu Qianchuan smiled and whispered, "If you really don't like her, it's better to leave her in Huading Purple Gold Pavilion. It's okay to give her to Qingqing as a dowry." "What do you mean?" Gu Xingyun reached out to tidy up the chessboard. His tone was a little colder, but it was not aimed at Gu Qianchuan. Gu Qianchuan was also tidying up the chessboard. He clearly held the white chess piece, but he violated the rules by putting a piece on the chessboard first. He said flatly, "Whatever you want to mean, it means what it means. There was Li Shi in those years. Why can't there be Qingqing today? Our Phoenix Pavilion is prepared for Qingqing, isn't it? What are you hesitating for?" He chuckled, playing with the chess piece in his hand, and continued, "History will repeat and the past will be reincarnated. Throughout history, there are many examples of people losing their country because of women. Who can tell whether it is because of the sword or because of women that our Kunlun City can have today?" Snap. Gu Xingyun crushed several chess pieces in his hand without expression. His face was cold. Gu Qianchuan smiled. His relationship with Gu Xingyun had not been harmonious. Naturally, he did not care about Gu Xingyun's feelings. Moreover, Gu Xingyun was seriously injured, so he was not afraid that Gu Xingyun would suddenly attack him. The chess pieces slipped from Gu Xingyun's hand. Gu Qianchuan said flatly, "Just take it that you let me have a few glances." Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and slowly placed a chess piece. He said indifferently, "What's the use of Qingqing staying in Huading? Li Tianlan? Li Tianlan can't survive this maneuver." Gu Qianchuan shook his head. "We don't have to waste resources on him. He is really amazing. Under normal circumstances, Qingqing is the most suitable for him. But now the general trend has been formed, and he is just an ant that will be crushed by the general trend. If Qingqing really wants to get close to him, I won't let her stay in Huading, but go to Jianghu or Guangdong. He raised his head, looked at Gu Xingyun, who was thoughtful, and said with a smile, Huading means a lot to the Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai. The Wang family of Beihai. Gu Xingyun raised his eyelids. Wang Xingxiao. Wang Xingxiao. The hall suddenly quieted down. The silence was a little depressing. Gu Xingyun seemed to be hesitating and thinking. After a long time he placed a chess piece and slowly said, It's not the right time. Let's wait for a few years. Gu Qianchuan slightly raised his eyebrows and did not understand Gu Xingyun's meaning for a while. He thought for a while, then his face changed and he slowly said, You don't think Wang Tianzong and Wang Xingxiao are good? A few years was a delicate period which suddenly made him think of a lot. Before Gu Xingyun spoke, Gu Qianchuan had said quickly, Is it because of Wang Qinglei? The internal problems of the Wang family of Beihai have been exposed more and more in recent years, mostly because of Wang Qinglei. Wang Qinglei does have a chance in the next session. Even if the Southeast group knows something, it is hard to get off. It can only push Wang Qinglei. Even Wang Tianzong does not dare to make fun of the foundation of the Southeast group, but... He hesitated and finally said, But even if Wang Qinglei is in that position, will Wang Tianzong lose? Who knows? Gu Xingyun said indifferently, At present the Wang family of Beihai has only exposed some problems, but it has not formed the sharpest opposition. There are just signs of things. Who can see it clearly? 3 years later, everything will probably become clear. Gu Qianchuan was silent. The Wang family of Beihai seemed to be still powerful in recent years, but some internal contradictions accumulated were showing more and more obvious signs of losing control. The biggest reason was naturally Wang Qinglei. Wang Qinglei was now one of the members of the decision-making committee of Zhongzhou State and the top leader of Wuyue Province. In the early years he was the governor of Wuyue Province. After it was determined that he would serve as the top leader and enter the decision-making committee, some contradictions gradually began to surface. But no one knew whether Wang Tianzong was too confident, or the Southeast group trusted Wang Tianzong too much, or their own resources were a little tight. When these signs appeared, the Southeast group did not take it seriously and continued to push Wang Qinglei into the decision-making committee. In the general election 3 years later, it was almost a certainty that Wang Qinglei would take a step forward. He was young and could really attack or retreat. If he made up his mind to be well prepared, even if he could not take a step forward, it was not a big problem for him to enter the center from Wuyue. At that time, the two giants of the Southeast group who had a close relationship with Wang Tianzong would step down. If Wang Qinglei went further, he would become the new flag of the Southeast group. And he would be a very high-ranking flag figure. Even if the Southeast group was not optimistic about Wang Qinglei, he could not be replaced in that position. Even if they had to bite the bullet for the foundation of the group, they could only choose to support Wang Qinglei. At that time, the real game between the powerful Wang Tianzong and the powerful Wang Qinglei would begin. One controlled Beihai province and the other controlled Southeast group. That was a game of power and force. Only at that time, the final result of the Wang family of Beihai could be seen. Gu Xingyun did not allow Li Qingqing to get close to Wang Xingxiao now, not because he was not optimistic about Wang Tianzong and his son, but because he did not know what Wang Tianzong would do in the past 3 years. It was not a good thing to get involved when everything was confusing. The internal problem of the Wang family of Beihai is one aspect. Gu Xingyun said, On the other hand, I am injured and Qingqing must be by my side. You leave her alone in Huading? You are really bold. If Qingqing is out of control, aren't you afraid that the woman will go crazy and kill you? Gu Qianchuan's face changed and he smiled bitterly without concealing it. Gu Qianchuan smiled bitterly. On the top of Winter Mountain. Under the starry sky, Li Tianlan, who had been sitting here watching the scenery for a long time, also hung up the phone in his hand. I can be sure. Li Tianlan whispered, The motorcade that just went in is Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan. Have you really decided? Lin Yuxian sat next to Li Tianlan. Even though he knew Li Tianlan's purpose, he still felt a little strange. It's not a decision. Li Tianlan smiled and said, I told Gu Xingyun that I would not let go of what happened last time. I don't know whether he listened to me or not. Lin Yuxian's mouth twitched and he said with difficulty, I guess he would never expect that you would be here now. I didn't expect it myself. Li Tianlan laughed and whispered, Since I came back, many people have asked me how strong I am now. It's hard for me to answer this question, Li Tianlan chuckled and said, Because I don't know myself. Tonight is an opportunity to see how strong I am. I might as well try. He pointed to the foot of the mountain. The purple-gold pavilion at the foot of the mountain was dimly lit. I'll go and have a look, he said. Lin Yuxian did not speak or stop him. Li Tianlan slowly went down the mountain alone. He was dressed in white and stepped on the ground barefooted. Behind him was the starry view of the entire winter mountain. In the night, the man in white moved straight ahead. In Lin Yuxian's sight, Li Tianlan's figure became more and more illusory, but his footsteps became more and more powerful. The top of Winter Mountain was full of starry sky. Lin Yuxian watched quietly, and his eyes gradually became dignified. Under the starry sky on the top of the mountain, Li Tianlan's figure became completely illusory in his sight. His whole person seemed to be completely integrated into the starry sky, as if he had completely disappeared, but also as if he was everywhere. Between reality and illusory, only his footsteps were still firm and steady. Chapter 358. The more important a thing is, the more you can't make a decision in a hurry. It's not a bad thing to be steady and slow down. Gu Xingyun played with the chess piece in his hand and said thoughtfully. He was not a talkative person, especially a person who did not like to preach. In the eyes of Jianghu state people, Gu Xingyun had always been an elegant and wise character. He was silent most of the time, but as long as he spoke, others often had no room to refute. Such silence was undoubtedly more powerful and more awe-inspiring than the so-called torrent of words. But it seemed that this injury had changed Gu Xingyun's mind. Recently he had been with Gu Qianchuan. When they chatted, Gu Xingyun talked more and more. Gu Qianchuan knew what this meant. He also knew that Gu Xingyun did not like him, but he knew that Gu Xingyun could only trust himself now. He liked Li Shi. But he did not dare to trust Li Shi. In the entire Kunlun city, he was the only one with great strength and the same position as him in the general direction. Gu Xingyun did not want to see Kunlun city decline. Gu Qianchuan did not want to either. This was the bottom line. All contradictions were insignificant in the face of the bottom line. Therefore, Gu Xingyun talked so much in the past few days, which was equivalent to teaching him how to take charge of Kunlun city in a very gentle way. Gu Qianchuan did not dislike this. For the sensitivity of power, Gu Xingyun was indeed much better than him. He nodded and waited for Gu Xingyun to go on. The internal crisis of the Wang family of Beihai is great, and it is an opportunity for everyone. At present, the major groups in Zhongzhou state seem to be quiet, but they must have made preparations in secret. Kunlun city is not suitable to move, but it is not suitable to stay still. For us, the Li family is the fat meat in our mouth. After the final maneuver is over and Li Tianlan dies, I must rest and recuperate. During this period of recuperation, it is a good opportunity for Kunlun city. Gu Xingyun slowly put down a chess piece on the chessboard. His eyes flickered under the light, with the brilliance of countless conspiracies and thoughts. What should I do? Gu Qianchuan asked for advice seriously. Li Qingqing came over with 2 cups of tea. She placed the tea in front of the two of them. She sat in front of the coffee table and watched the two of them play chess. Her eyes were lively, but her temperament was quiet and gentle. Gu Xingyun glanced at her and said softly, "There is a change in Snow Country." Gu Qianchuan raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "It's more than a change. It's a great change." The internal strife of the Polar Ground Alliance had lasted for 3 years, and now it was completely out of control. In the past 2 months, 3 powerful families in Eastern Europe had been destroyed, all of which were the backbone of the Polar Ground Alliance. 2 of them came from Snow Country. In the Dark World, which was already in chaos, all the major forces were like sharks that had smelled the smell of blood. They were all concentrating their strength on Snow Country. If there were no accidents, when the Polar Ground Alliance completely collapsed, Snow Country would also become the decisive battlefield of all the major dark forces. All he lacked now was an opportunity. The matters of the Snow Empire have nothing to do with you. Gu Xingyun said flatly, the final battle is unlikely to happen in these days. At least it will happen after the final maneuver. When Li Tianlan dies, the Li family is bound to fall into chaos. The Samsara Palace would also be affected. No one knew what Qin Weibai would do, but this might become an opportunity for the final battle. At that time, when everyone's attention is diverted, you can go to Wuxia to contact Wang Qinglei, show some attitude, and take the opportunity to completely destroy the Li family. He took a sip of tea and said softly, Jianghu is an area beyond his power. As long as we support him, he is likely to use Jianghu as a favor. Battle of Snow Kingdom too far, too big, let them fight. I only want to take into account the immediate benefits. As long as we successfully take down Jianghu, we will make a profit no matter what. Jiangsu and Zhujiang, Gu Qianchuan pondered and said, "It is not difficult to destroy the Li family, but it is not so easy to take Jianghu. Wu Jingmin has great influence and Zhou Yuanshan has entered Jianghu. The giant group. The giant group is nothing to worry about." Gu Xingyun shook his head. The military has agreed to the final maneuver plan. Dongqing Rushi has officially abstained today, which is clear enough. This is... Gu Qianchuan raised his eyebrows. You mean Dongqing Wudi has given up on Li Tianlan? Is it surprising? Gu Xingyun's tone was a little surprised. If the military wants to forcibly interfere with the final maneuver of the Sky Academy, the price they need to pay is likely to be the control of the Border Control Corps. Hundreds of thousands of troops for Li Tianlan? Is Li Tianlan so valuable? What? Gu Qianchuan's eyes lit up, getting brighter and brighter. If Dongqing Wudi gave up on Li Tianlan, the Li family would be destroyed, and Jianghu was not necessary for Zhou Yuanshan to stay. Vaguely, it seemed that the situation was really good. What if Dongqing Wudi didn't give up on Li Tianlan? Or Li Tianlan won the final maneuver? Li Qingqing suddenly said. Her voice was very light and tender. She was definitely a girl who could make anyone feel comfortable. She was light, delicate, charming and youthful, but there was no sharpness or aggressiveness. Gu Xingyun was stunned. Then he shook his head and said calmly, "It doesn't make sense. Not to mention that he can't win. Even if he can go against the natural order in the end, he can't walk out of the Sky Academy." His eyes were a little playful. "Qianchuan, even if you don't take action, Wang Tianzong will kill him. In Zhongzhou State, no one can really stop the Wang family of Beihai. Just like in this era, no one can stop Wang Tianzong. Wang Tianzong will kill Li Tianlan? What?" Li Qingqing seemed a little curious. "Because he is too strong, so he has to die. If he dies in the final maneuver, it is because he is not strong enough, so he also has to die." Gu Xingyun's tone was indifferent. Li Qingqing was silent for a while, then whispered, "The chosen one is really bitter." Gu Xingyun smiled and felt that his daughter's words were really right. All living beings were bitter, and so were the chosen one. Arrogant, domineering, and scrupulous, condescending, and insufferably arrogant. Even if he was invincible in the world and had power over the court, so what? The human world had never been really relaxed and complacent. As amazing as Li Tianlan was, he also had to struggle for survival and the future of the Li family. As powerful as Wang Xingxiao was, he also had to face the next fierce game of the Wang family of Beihai. As calm as Gu Hanshan was, he was bound to be targeted by Gu Qianchuan during the time he had to recuperate. His life would not be much better. As low-key as Jiang Shangyu, didn't he also endure and stay dormant, planning and fighting for the Jiang family to go to a higher level? The more dazzling, the lonelier, the more bitter. What a pity. Gu Xingyun whispered to himself. If Li Tianlan is really willing to bow his head, Kunlun City may give him a way to live, provided that he is really willing to bow his head. He glanced at Li Qingqing. With Li Tianlan's aptitude, if he was really willing to bow his head to Kunlun City, he was even willing to marry his daughter, who was destined to have infinite glory in the future. Such a talent was definitely worth any force to win over at a high price. Gu Qianchuan sneered, and a trace of disgust flashed in his eyes. I think he is really confident to think that he is invincible among the young generation. In the team maneuver, he actually wants to go alone. He is arrogant and ignorant. Does he really think he can win? It should be. Gu Xingyun nodded and said, his confidence is not fake. Gu Qianchuan was even more unhappy. He frowned and said gloomily, since he wants to die, we don't have to be polite. The Li family is doomed. If we don't kill him, aren't we going against the natural order? Gu Xingyun did not speak. He suddenly thought of the end of today's symposium. When Li Tianlan left the conference room, he bent over and took off his shoes. At that time, Gu Xingyun felt that this action was absurd. Now that he thought about it, he still felt that it was absurd. What did he mean by taking off his shoes when he left today? Gu Qianchuan shook his head. He did not care about that young nonentity at all. Hans Han and Wang Xingxiao have analyzed that Li Tianlan's current strength should be extremely powerful, but his body is also extremely fragile. He is so fragile that he can't even bear a full blow from them. What do you think? Gu Xingyun nodded and said, it should be right. The time for him to recultivate is too short. If he wants to reach this level in 3 years, it must be the most extreme way. Giving up defense and pursuing absolute combat power is the only feasible way. Only he has wind and thunder veins can bear this way. Gu Qianchuan said yes and reached for the teacup. Pa! There was a soft sound next to the chessboard. Gu Qianchuan's hand had not touched the teacup, but the teacup was torn by an invisible force. The cracks spread from the bottom of the cup, and the tea overflowed and soaked the chessboard. Everyone was stunned. Gu Xingyun, who had been calm, suddenly narrowed his eyes and reached out to stop Gu Qianchuan from speaking. His attention was completely focused in an instant. A subtle sound sounded outside the purple gold pavilion. It was very small, but in Gu Xingyun's ears, it was so huge. The sound of thumping sounded rhythmically. It was very slow but extremely powerful. That was the sound of heartbeat. Everyone could hear this loud yet soft heartbeat. The heartbeat was neither fast nor slow. It was getting closer and closer, but from beginning to end the frequency did not change at all. Another soft sound sounded with the heartbeat. That sound seemed to come from a very far place. It was as if someone was walking lightly across the grass. It was very soft, but the soft footsteps reverberated throughout the entire world. It directly passed through the impregnable purple gold pavilion and fell into the ears of the few of them. Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan looked at each other and saw the seriousness in each other's eyes. The footsteps and the heartbeat sounded at the same time, getting closer and closer. Li Qingqing's face was pale and then it became pale. Unconsciously, her heartbeat seemed to be completely synchronized with the heartbeat outside the door. It pulsed at the same time. The heartbeat was slow and powerful, but it was extremely depressed. Li Qingqing even felt that her breathing became difficult in the heartbeat. A mouthful of blood sprayed from her mouth. She looked at Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan in panic, her eyes full of fear. Gu Qianchuan's body slowly tightened. The light of the purple gold pavilion was extinguished in a flash. The void appeared silently and enveloped him, Gu Xingyun and Li Qingqing. However, the heartbeat outside the door continued to sound in the void where there should be no sound. It was slow and rhythmic. The voice had become very weak, but in the void where no sound should exist, it was like a clap of thunder. Gu Qianchuan's face suddenly changed. Bang! After the heartbeat, light and gentle footsteps stepped on the ground. The footsteps, which were usually ignored by everyone, filled the world. As the foot landed outside the door, the sturdy six-story building of the purple gold pavilion trembled. This was not the sword intent. It was not the momentum. It was the absolute power that was as majestic as the sea, enough to tear mountains and rivers and break the void. Go and see, Gu Xingyun suddenly said. His strength was greatly reduced. In the void around Gu Qianchuan, his voice was hard and hurried. Gu Qianchuan stood up and walked to the door with Gu Xingyun. At this time he did not dare to let Gu Xingyun leave his side. He put his hand on the door handle, pressed the button, and slowly pushed open the alloy door of the capital pavilion, which was nearly 2 meters thick and 5 or 6 meters high. The night sky outside the purple gold pavilion was dimly illuminated by the lights. The sound of water flowing in the huge pool in front of the door was gentle, but the rockery in the water was slightly shaking with the never-ending footsteps. Gu Xingyun raised his head and looked into the distance. In the distant night sky, about 100 meters away, a thin but tall figure was walking over unhurriedly. His figure was getting closer and closer. Gu Xingyun saw that he wore an expressionless metal mask on his face. He was dressed in white and walked barefoot. But the heaven and earth of the purple gold pavilion seemed to tremble as he moved forward. The loud heartbeat kept ringing, and the power was like a wild wolf, sweeping in all directions. Gu Xingyun's pupils suddenly contracted, and he looked ridiculous. The metal mask obviously could not cover anything. The other party obviously did not intend to use this mask to cover anything. Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan, who they thought could only play hard with the young generation and probably could not beat them, appeared alone in the blink of an eye in front of the two invincible realm experts of Kunlun. Gu Xingyun's heart was in turmoil, but he forced himself to calm down and said coldly, "What are you doing here?" Li Tianlan wore a mask. Gu Xingyun did not call out his identity. For Kunlun City this was definitely an opportunity. "I'm here to see how many dog teeth and legs you have." Li Tianlan's voice was soft, but the eyes behind the mask were full of evil and dangerous light. He did not tell Gu Xingyun. Only when he stepped on the ground with his bare feet could he completely feel the heavy power that belonged to this world. Bang! The heartbeat sounded again. Then it completely disappeared. There was no more nonsense. Li Tianlan lowered his body slightly. He strode forward. A white line suddenly appeared in the deep night sky, cutting through the darkness. The white line turned into a curtain in an instant. Li Tianlan stomped hard on the ground. An unimaginably violent and majestic power was poured into the ground, causing it to boil. The 6-story purple-gold pavilion shook violently. The huge rockery in front of the door, tens of meters high, flew directly into the sky in the surging power and broke into countless stones. The water in the pool rushed out in an overturned manner, turning into white waves and water curtains. Trample through mountains and rivers. Li Tianlan's body rose into the air and directly pounced on Gu Xingyun. A young man less than 22 years old took the initiative to attack the war god of Jianghu state. At this moment, the night, the water waves, the void, the white clothes, everything seemed to be frozen. There was only madness between heaven and earth. Close the door. Gu Xingyun took a step back and shouted. Li Tianlan was very strong. But Gu Xingyun believed that no matter how strong he was no match for Gu Qianquan. But the problem was that deep in his heart he could not completely trust Gu Qianquan. Bang! Gu Qianquan took a step back. The alloy gate, which was more than 2 meters thick, was closed. But his own domain shrank in the hall and became extremely heavy. Boom! The next moment the entire purple-gold pavilion seemed to fly completely. The alloy gate, which weighed several tons, suddenly broke. Li Tianlan's figure, like the hardest weapon, hit the gate. Alloy fragments flew everywhere. Li Tianlan's figure directly crashed in. Huge alloy fragments floated in the void. Li Tianlan's figure fell directly to the ground in the void without being affected at all. The huge stairs of the purple-gold pavilion shook wildly. An inconceivably tyrannical power filled every corner of the void. The silent void melted and collapsed in an instant. The light reappeared in the hall. Trample through the void. Chapter 359. The absolute darkness of the void collapsed and disappeared. The light shone in the hall again. But it seemed that the darkness before was so beautiful that the light that everyone could adapt to was extremely dazzling at this time. The huge alloy fragments hit the ground hard, and the fine dust rose in the hall. The light gently flowed on the white clothes made of cloud silk. Li Tianlan stood there, but it seemed that all the light suddenly gathered. Gu Qianquan stood in front of Gu Xingyun and Li Qingqing. His eyes were fixed on Li Tianlan, with unconcealable astonishment and rage. Li Tianlan had grown into a figure worthy of everyone's attention. No one would deny this. Gu Qianquan also attached great importance to him. But he only valued Li Tianlan's potential. He was an invincible realm expert. 3 years ago the Divine List and the Holy List were re-ranked. Gu Qianquan successfully took the last train and ranked last on the Holy List. Although Li Tianlan was now 9th on the Divine List, everyone knew that it was a special case. Gu Qianquan could be sure that Li Tianlan's future would be terrible, but the future was the future. At least now, Li Tianlan, who was not in the invincible realm, was just an ant in his eyes. He did not expect that Li Tianlan would appear here tonight. Gu Xingyun did not expect it either. They were just discussing Li Tianlan's life and death. When they felt that the general trend was settled, Li Tianlan came to them alone. The loud beating of the heart and the soft footsteps had completely disappeared. Li Tianlan stood in front of them. In Gu Qianquan's perception, Li Tianlan had become a ball of light that tore his own domain. He was so real but illusory and unpredictable. Are you in the invincible realm? Gu Qianquan's voice was hoarse and insidious. His heart kept sinking and falling to the bottom. The invincible realm was above the 4 realms of martial arts. In the dark world it was still a mysterious domain. Even an invincible realm expert could hardly guide others on how to break through this realm. Too many people were stuck in the half-step invincible realm and could not move forward. To enter the domain of the invincible realm, in addition to talent, luck was needed. At present, the most reliable saying was that the peak of the thunder-shocking realm in the 4 realms of martial arts was basically infinitely close to the physical limit of the human body. Half-step invincible realm was the real limit. If one wanted to surpass the limit and enter the invincible realm, he needed to temper his essence, chi, and spirit to the peak at the peak of his body. Only when the limit was sublimated would one be invincible. But even if they were invincible, there was still a difference in strength. As strong as Wang Tianzong was, he entered the invincible realm 3 years later than Li Guangtu. But as soon as he entered the invincible realm, his combat capability was close to the peak of the Divine List. As for Gu Qianquan, even though he entered the invincible realm by luck and practiced hard for several years, he barely entered the Holy List. If one's physique, potential, willpower, and talent could be compensated in the 4 realms of martial arts, then once one entered the invincible realm, the gap in these aspects would be large enough to make one desperate. It was like the gap between Wang Tianzong, who ranked first on the divine list, and Gu Qianchuan, who ranked last on the holy list. No one doubted his potential. If he entered the invincible realm with his potential, Gu Qianchuan would not even bother to escape. Not to mention him, even Gu Xingyun at his peak was not necessarily his opponent. But if he was really in the invincible realm, why did he have to endure until today? Gu Qianchuan stared at Li Tianlan without blinking. His body gradually tensed up, and the thick darkness and silence once again gathered around him. But the light in the hall was always shining. The void and the light merged with each other, and the whole hall seemed to become pure black and white. The world became an illusory background of black and white. Li Tianlan's figure was incomparably vivid and real. Yes and no. Li Tianlan answered Gu Qianchuan's question. He was telling the truth. After the great breakthrough, he had the dragon vein and the majestic fate. This time, Li Tianlan recultivated the martial arts that was completely different from the four realms of martial arts. But no matter how different it was, his goal was still the invincible realm. His body, willpower, and sword intent, in terms of condensation, had completely surpassed the half-step invincible realm and could be compared with the invincible realm. But there was still a big gap between his overall combat capability and the real invincible realm. In short, the quality of his martial arts had officially entered the gate of the invincible realm, but the quantity was still far from it. So now he could be regarded as invincible, but he was not really invincible. Gu Qianchuan was a little relieved. Li Tianlan had shifted his gaze and stared at Gu Xingyun. There was undisguised killing intent in his eyes. At today's forum, Li Tianlan carefully felt Gu Xingyun's injury several times. He confirmed that Gu Xingyun's injury was extremely serious, which was the main reason why he came tonight. Gu Qianchuan was extremely strong, but only extremely strong. Li Tianlan was sure that Gu Xingyun's injury was his best chance to kill Gu Xingyun in the next few years. If he could succeed tonight, the special warfare group would be leaderless and in a mess, and the rise of the Li family would be right around the corner. Tianlan, are you courting death? Gu Xingyun looked at Li Tianlan with sharp eyes. His voice was still gentle, and even his address was very intimate. Li Tianlan smiled and nodded gently. Yes. This was his third sentence tonight. It was also the last sentence. The almost frozen black and white color in the hall suddenly broke in an instant. Li Tianlan took a step forward. A large number of shadows suddenly appeared in the huge and luxurious hall. Li Tianlan was barehanded, but his whole body was like an invincible divine weapon. He clenched one hand and punched Gu Qianchuan. The light on his body suddenly became extremely dazzling, and his hard arm tore the space. Wherever Li Tianlan passed, darkness and light alternated. The vast power drove his arm and his body. He seemed to be pulled by a violent force and appeared in front of Gu Qianchuan in an instant. A storm appeared out of thin air in the hall. The luxurious handmade sofa, the sturdy white marble tea table, the precious sandalwood tables and chairs, and the scarlet carpet were all broken into ashes in the crazy storm. The entire purple gold pavilion was disappearing. Only Li Tianlan was left in Gu Qianchuan's sight. The wind was biting cold. He narrowed his eyes tightly. The moment the white clothes appeared in front of him, Gu Qianchuan suddenly raised his palm. Bang! A wave of air visible to the naked eye suddenly appeared in the hall. Li Tianlan smashed his fist into Gu Qianchuan's palm. When their fists and palms collided, a large area of twisted space was completely shattered. The turbulent airwaves rushed straight into the sky. In the deafening roar, the ceiling of the purple gold pavilion, which was tens of meters high, suddenly broke. Dust flew up and down and broken stones fell down. Li Tianlan's fist trembled slightly, but he did not stop moving at all. Smooth, swift, and natural, but with a kind of hearty violence. He withdrew his fist and lifted his knee. Li Tianlan raised one leg and hit Gu Qianchuan's abdomen with his knee. Gu Qianchuan suddenly roared and pressed his hands down with all his strength, holding down Li Tianlan's blow. His body rose into the sky with Li Tianlan's incredible strength. Gu Qianchuan's eyes were in a trance, and his arms were also trembling slightly. It seemed that a few minutes ago, he had discussed with Gu Xingyun that Li Tianlan's biggest weakness should be his body. Now in retrospect, Gu Qianchuan only felt that he had just said a joke. Li Tianlan's current body was completely unimaginable. His rapid speed and extreme strength were vividly displayed in him. But obviously, Li Tianlan showed no sign of being unable to bear it. At the moment when the fist and palm met, as an invincible realm expert, he had a close fight with the junior of the Li family with all his strength. But the opponent's body was still not overloaded. Gu Qianchuan's body flew higher and higher along with Li Tianlan's strength. Li Tianlan raised his head. Gu Qianchuan raised his hand without expression. In the storm of power, countless densely packed sword intents suddenly burst out. The sword intents condensed around Gu Qianchuan. The sword energy whistled and one after another like real giant swords formed around him. Gu Qianchuan suddenly clenched his fist and punched Li Tianlan in the air. 10 skills of true martial arts, destruction of 5 elements. Boom. Several giant swords condensed around Gu Qianchuan fell at the same time. The ceiling stones were also falling. The sword energy soared into the sky. Li Tianlan's figure suddenly jumped up. Under the metal mask, his expression was completely hidden. Only a pair of eyes were ferocious and cold. He reached out. He clenched his fist. Boom. The falling boulders from the ceiling were smashed by his fist. The sword intents condensed in the air kept trembling under the absolute power. Li Tianlan kept punching. The condensed sword shadows and the falling stones kept breaking as he went up. The torn sword intents spread everywhere in the pavilion. The stairs burst into dust and the solid walls began to crack. The huge pavilion was shaky in the intertwining of power and sword intents. Gu Qianchuan's figure rose again. The sword intents of Kunlun City were like a waterfall. Li Tianlan rose in the air. He punched and stepped in the air. Everything in his way, whether boulders or sword intents, burst into pieces. In this state, Li Tianlan only gave people the impression of madness. Gu Xingyun pulled Li Qingqing and quickly retreated out of the crumbling pavilion. Boom. The deafening noise reverberated on Mount Dong under the night sky. As soon as the father and daughter left the purple gold pavilion, the famous 6-story mansion in Jianghu State had been smashed into ruins by the fight between Gu Qianchuan and Li Tianlan. Li Qingqing subconsciously turned her head to look back. In the smoke and dust, Li Tianlan and Gu Qianchuan were still fighting. They would not stop until one of them died. Was this Li Tianlan? Li Qingqing was in a daze. She had always heard that her elder brother was also a young heavenly son in Jianghu State. But it seemed that until tonight she really saw the power of the so-called heavenly son. But she did not understand. The Li family in Jianghu State was famous for its sword intents in the dark world. The 24 moves of sword were unparalleled in the world. Chapter 360. It wasn't just Li Qingqing who was thinking about this. Gu Xingyun and even Gu Qianchuan who was fighting were confused. Why didn't Li Tianlan draw his sword? The Li family's 24 moves of sword was unparalleled in the world. 400s of years in the dark world in terms of martial arts, the Wang family of Beihai was the well-deserved number 1. In terms of swordsmanship, Zhuanyuantai really outshone others. Kendo could be said to be the soul of the Li family. Whether the successor of the Li family had a sword in his hand or not was a completely different concept and state. After realizing this problem, Gu Xingyun suddenly remembered that Li Tianlan had never drawn his sword at all since he returned after disappearing for 3 years. To severely injure Gu Yulan, he imitated the great void sword intent. It was the even more incredible sword of Emperor Path that killed Gu Yunxia. The method of defeating Song Ci was very similar to the myriad Tao collection of the Purgatory of Heaven capital. But what was his true sword intent? Or the 24 moves of sword? Then why not? Gu Xingyun brought Li Qingqing out of the purple gold pavilion. It was also a mess outside the purple gold pavilion. The clear pond became muddy, and the huge rockery was broken in the grass. Gu Xingyun hid behind a cracked rock. He looked indifferent, but his eyes were cold and gloomy. No one could understand the anger and killing intent in his heart at this moment. After becoming the war god of Jianghu State for more than 20 years, this was the first time that he was forced to flee and even needed protection. The power of the murderous weapon's frontal attack was completely incredible. Even if he used the improved version of Immortality potion of Jianghu State to stabilize his injury, his body's various functions had declined to the bottom. Unless he was willing to risk his life, otherwise in his current state if he was alone, even an ordinary thundershocking realm expert could completely kill him. If it weren't for the rumors that he was seriously injured and needed a long time to recuperate, and that he needed to stand up to stabilize the morale of the army, he wouldn't have shown up at all in the final maneuver of the 2 academies. Now he forced himself to come to Huading just to go through the motions. No one thought there was a problem. But just when no one thought there was a problem arose. Li Tianlan, the surviving member of the Li family, actually came to them above board. What did he take Kunlun City for? Gu Xingyun's mind was buzzing. He knew very well what the consequences of tonight's attack would be. For Li Tianlan, as long as he was alive, there would be no consequences. Gu Xingyun was the war god of Jianghu state, and Gu Qianchuan was also an invincible realm expert on the holy list. Moreover, he was the helmsman of Kunlun city that Gu Xingyun promoted during his recovery. If they couldn't keep Li Tianlan here tonight, Kunlun city would never disclose this matter. Once the news was leaked, it would prove that Gu Xingyun was seriously injured and Gu Qianchuan was not strong enough. At that time, where would the dignity of Kunlun city be? If Li Tianlan escaped unscathed tonight, it would be a slap on his and Gu Qianchuan's faces. Not only could they not say anything, but they had to endure it. The most important thing was that if they couldn't keep Li Tianlan tonight and something unexpected happened in the final maneuver, how powerful would Li Tianlan be when he recovered from his injury a few years later? Would he really become an invincible realm expert? The purple gold pavilion shook violently in front of Gu Xingyun and Li Qingqing. Countless cracks appeared on the sturdy walls from the inside to the outside. It looked extremely ugly, as if the beauty had been broken. After controlling Kunlun city for more than 20 years, Gu Xingyun felt genuine fear for the first time. Qianchuan, kill him. At any cost. Gu Xingyun suddenly stood up and roared in a voice that was close to a roar. Boom! The entire purple gold pavilion was blasted into pieces by the tremendous power and the majestic sword intent. The roof, the foundation, and the stairs of the 6-story luxurious building seemed to explode at the same time. Rubble flew everywhere, smoke and dust filled the sky, and the surging sword intent swept across the night sky. Storms, frost, flames and thunderbolts filled every inch of the space. It was the killing intent that spread out after the domain formed by the 10th unique domain was torn apart with indomitable determination. The deep night turned into a world of light in an instant. Wind, frost, lightning and fire surged everywhere, destroying everything like a storm. In the center of the storm, a mournful blood light rose. The red color was extremely brilliant in the chaotic and trance light. The snow-like white clothes fell from mid-air like a meteor, completely out of control and smashed into the pool. The waves splashed. The waves on the surface of the water shook for a moment and then suddenly calmed down. Li Tianlan emerged from the water, getting higher and higher. He stepped on the water and straightened his body. His white clothes made of cloud silk had countless folds, and his waist was completely cut open. Blood flowed down his waist and soon dyed his thighs red. Li Tianlan moved his neck, expressionless, and walked on the water. Gu Qianchuan's figure reappeared in front of Gu Xingyun. Wind, frost, lightning and fire flickered around him. But this time, instead of forming a domain, they all turned into gloomy and sharp sword intent all over the sky. He held a black dagger in his hand and blood was dripping from the blade. He looked at Li Tianlan quietly, his eyes full of indifference. You go first. Gu Qianchuan said calmly. He had already tried his best. The sword just now seemed to hurt Li Tianlan, but he did not dare to be careless. Because Li Tianlan had never drawn his sword. In the short fight just now, Gu Qianchuan had roughly figured out Li Tianlan's strength. The essence of Li Tianlan's strength was the real invincible realm, but his own accumulation was far from enough. He had enough quality but not enough quantity. By the standard of the ordinary invincible realm, Li Tianlan was at most equivalent to half or even 1/3 of the ordinary invincible realm. But 1/3 of the invincible realm was also the invincible realm. In this state, Li Tianlan's short-term outbreak was definitely not inferior to the weakest invincible realm. He was not invincible realm, but he already had the quality of the invincible realm. There were few such examples in the dark world, but there were always some amazing figures who could do it. In the past 3 years in the dark world, there were 3 people who could do it and all of them were from Jianghu state. Such figures could not be called invincible realm experts for the time being, but they had paved the way to enter the invincible realm, so they were called the combat capability of the invincible realm. Tribulation 3 years ago. Jianghu of the Wang family of Beihai in the past 3 years. And Li Tianlan who returned 3 years later. It was all the same. Gu Qianchuan suddenly felt lucky that 3 years had passed. If he had not entered the holy list 3 years ago, he might have been defeated by Li Tianlan today. In Li Tianlan's current state, Gu Qianchuan was confident that he could firmly suppress him. The sword stroke just now was proof. But if such a figure went crazy, Gu Qianchuan also had concerns. At least he could not be sure that he could absolutely guarantee Gu Xingyun's safety. Because Li Tianlan had never drawn his sword. After 3 years, Li Tianlan had never shown his own sword intent. Gu Qianchuan was almost sure. Li Tianlan's sword intent was no longer the 24 moves of sword. Although the 24 moves of sword was strong, it was not worth hiding. There was no doubt that he hid his sword to deal with Gu Xingyun at the most critical moment. As long as Gu Xingyun left first, he could really kill Gu Qianchuan freely. Are you sure? Gu Xingyun asked. Gu Qianchuan thought, how could I be sure? I still don't know how strong the sword intent of this little monster is. The waves in the pool fell down and calmed down in an instant. Li Tianlan began to speed up. His white clothes were stained with blood, but his speed did not slow down. He was extremely fast and light. In a trance he was like a breeze. 30%. The corner of Gu Qianchuan's mouth twitched. As soon as he finished speaking, the wind, frost, lightning, and fire around him surged again. The sword intent all over the sky with countless brilliance completely shrouded Li Tianlan like a sky curtain. Li Tianlan roared and rushed forward. He stepped out of the water and rushed to the sky. His figure was like a white rainbow crashing into the sky curtain. The sky curtain full of violent sword intent was directly torn by his body. Li Tianlan's movements were getting faster and faster. Wherever his white clothes passed, all he brought was the simplest speed and strength. It was a kind of bravery and fearlessness that caused one's mind to tremble. Gu Xingyun took a look at Li Qingqing and turned to leave without hesitation. The elites of Kunlun City stationed in the Purple Gold Pavilion finally reacted. Several specially modified black Mercedes-Benz quickly drove over. Dozens of elites rushed to the Purple Gold Pavilion from all directions. Some of them rushed to Li Tianlan. The other part escorted Gu Xingyun to leave Winter Mountain. Gu Xingyun got into a Mercedes-Benz. Several Mercedes-Benz formed a motorcade and left the Purple Gold Pavilion at full speed. The Purple Gold Pavilion had become a ruin. The smoke and dust had not yet dissipated. The sword intent around Gu Qianchuan had suddenly condensed to the limit. The white clothes that tore the sky curtain came to Gu Qianchuan. It was still a punch that was not flashy but filled with extreme violence. Gu Qianchuan grinned and did not retreat at all. He punched with surging sword intent. The piercingly cold wind was silent. The cold and hot alternated in the wind. The fire and frost completely disappeared. Only the extremely cold and hot wind were turbulent. Gu Qianchuan's whole body lit up. A touch of blue appeared in the whistling wind. The blue light flickered slightly and then bloomed under the starry sky in the most ferocious manner. All the frost, lightning, and fire were condensed in the blue light arc. Every ray of light was sword intent and power. Thousands of sword intents broke out at the same time, like a mountain flood. This was the most balanced and perfect unique technique of Kunlun City, 10 skills of true martial arts. This was the peak use of 10 skills of true martial arts by Gu Qianchuan. It was the integration of several unique techniques at the same time. It was his strongest move. The 8th Supreme Sword Dance and the 5 Elements Extermination were in full bloom in the 10th unique domain. The brilliant sword light completely took away the brilliance of the night sky. The surging and endless light swallowed Li Tianlan in an instant. Where Gu Qianchuan's fist wind went, all the sword light seemed to be guided and burst out. The punch with the ultimate sword intent collided with Li Tianlan's fist. A natural air wave suddenly appeared in the ruins of the Purple Gold Pavilion. Wherever the air wave passed, the ruins of the Purple Gold Pavilion completely turned into smoke and dust. Li Tianlan's white clothes were completely broken, and he was covered in blood. The surging sword light completely wrapped him. His body was completely out of balance and he was blasted into the distance. Gu Qianchuan's figure staggered and took a deep breath. He was unable to chase in a short time. He did not look upset but only a sneer. The place where Li Tianlan landed was where the elites of Kunlun City gathered in the Purple Gold Pavilion. There were nearly 20 people. 1 was in the Thundershocking realm, 5 were in the Fire-Flaming realm, and the others were at least in the Ice-Condensing realm. This kind of strength was indeed ordinary. But the most desirable place of Kunlun City's martial arts was the sword formation. The unique technique could form a sword formation. The 20 elites could naturally form a formation. Li Tianlan's figure fell, and the place where the elites of Kunlun City gathered lit up with fire. Gu Qianchuan took a deep breath and rushed over without hesitation. Li Tianlan wanted to kill Gu Xingyun. Tonight was an opportunity. Kunlun City wanted to kill Li Tianlan. In this situation it was also an opportunity. The best opportunity. The 20 elites of Kunlun City gathered in one place. Frost and flames shone above Li Tianlan. The thunder-shocking realm expert at the forefront was all blue. The blue electric arc blended into the fire and disappeared in an instant. All the icicles and coldness merged into the fire and disappeared in an instant. In the crowd, only the fire was fiercely moving and burning the sky. All the sword intent of Gu Qianchuan completely disappeared after the outbreak. Li Qianlan's figure fell into the fire. The fire burned and twisted the air. His figure became a little blurred. Gu Qianchuan's cold eyes showed a hint of a smile, and the sword intent rose again. No matter how exquisite the sword formation formed by 20 elites was, it was difficult to threaten Li Tianlan, even if he was seriously injured. But the sword body formed by 20 elite cannon fodder was enough to make Li Tianlan's injury more serious. Gu Qianchuan could be sure that with such a serious injury, Li Tianlan would die tonight. Li Tianlan's body completely fell into the fire. Crack! There was a slight crisp sound in the night. It was like the sound of metal colliding. It was also like the long sword was unsheathed. The sound was very light, but it was so slight. In a trance, Gu Qianchuan heard Li Tianlan's gentle, weak but extremely loud heartbeat. The long sword was unsheathed. The smile on his face suddenly froze. The sword light in the purple gold pavilion dissipated, the starry sky dimmed, and the fire disappeared. Everything happened in the blink of an eye, without any strange phenomenon. Gu Qianchuan did not react at all. Not far away, the sword formation formed by the elites of Kunlun City had suddenly dissipated without a trace. There was really no trace. Along with the fire, the 20 elites of Kunlun City also dissipated. There was no blood, no screams, and even no dust. The fire, the crowd, and everything seemed to have never existed. In an instant they became complete nothingness. The ruins suddenly became incomparably quiet. The world was quiet. Gu Qianchuan stood stiffly in place. He looked at the scene in front of him incredulously and even blinked. This feeling was like a dream. The fire that symbolized Li Tianlan's death disappeared. The elites of Kunlun City disappeared and Li Tianlan also disappeared. What sword intent was this? Was it sword intent? Gu Qianchuan was suddenly shocked. It was not until this time that he realized something. Li Tianlan disappeared. He was not here and he was not dead. Where could he go? Gu Qianchuan's scalp was completely numb in an instant. His heart was cold and numb. He was definitely stronger than Li Tianlan. But when he had the upper hand, he did not watch Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan got rid of him and disappeared. How could Gu Xingyun survive? He was crazy, stupid, and panicked. Gu Qianchuan's mind was in a mess for a moment, and he was even at a loss. Gu Xingyun must not die. At the very least he could not die now. That was why he and Gu Xingyun could trust each other. Gu Xingyun, who was seriously injured, still ranked 5th on the divine list. He had enough strength to match the title of the war god of Zhongzhou state. It was extremely important for Kunlun City. If Gu Xingyun died, Gu Qianchuan could not defend Kunlun City at all. He must not die. Gu Qianchuan, who was extremely confused, suddenly turned around and was about to rush in the direction of Gu Xingyun's retreat at all costs. A drop of blood fell in front of him. Gu Qianchuan was stunned and a little confused. Another drop of blood fell. I am injured? He thought blankly, why don't I remember? In a mess he saw the third drop of blood. Gu Qianchuan's body shook violently and he completely reacted. He did not know that he was injured, so he was naturally not injured. This blood was not his. Li Tianlan. Li Tianlan. Gu Qianchuan suddenly raised his head. A silver light suddenly appeared in the starry night sky. It was the most brilliant silver that Gu Qianchuan had ever seen in his life. It was gorgeous, vivid, dreamy, but with indescribable fierceness. The silver light sprinkled down like stars falling one after another. There was a hand with a silver bracelet above Gu Qianchuan. The silver bracelet had completely unfolded at this time and turned into a long sword. Falling stars. The bloody palm held the hilt of the long sword. The silver light was so brilliant and so illusory. The moment Gu Qianchuan raised his head, the falling star sword suddenly stabbed down. There was no wind, thunder, lightning, or fire. Even the air did not have the slightest change. The silver light gathered. The falling star stabbed straight. A sword was a sword. A pure sword, a real sword, an illusory sword. A sword was a sword without any superfluous meaning. Wherever the swift and fierce sword light passed, there was no sound. There was only destruction left. This sword was so perfect. Gu Qianchuan, who was anxious and confused, did not have the slightest defense. The silver sword light was getting closer and closer. Gu Qianchuan suddenly let out the most miserable scream in his life. The silent and empty void domain instantly rose. The next second, The silver light almost pierced the void without any stagnation and continued to fall silently. The bloody light in the sky rose, solidified, and floated in the torn void. In the crazy scream, the power of the invincible realm on Mount Dong broke out completely. The endless light covered everything. An arm flew directly into the sky in the bloody rain. Blood spilled. Gu Qianchuan no longer cared about Gu Xingyun. Without hesitation, he fled in the opposite direction of Gu Xingyun. His arm rushed for a distance in the air and then floated in the broken void. The silver sword light slowly converged. The sword intent swept over and the void disappeared. Gu Qianchuan's arm also disappeared completely, as if it had never existed. The white shadow full of blood flashed in the air. Without hesitation, it directly rushed in the direction of Gu Xingyun's departure. Li Tianlan did not know how strong he was, but he knew very well that if it was a life-and-death fight, he would not be Gu Qianchuan's opponent. Even if Gu Qianchuan was the last on the holy list, he could not win. This was a very obvious matter. So he did not hide anything at all and directly told Lin Yuxian his thoughts. After 3 years of great achievements and returning to Jianghu state, Li Tianlan's biggest trump card was the sword intent that he had never shown to the world. The most intangible sword intent. This was also the core of this plan. When Gu Xingyun came to Huading, he took Gu Qianchuan with him, which was equivalent to taking the core protection force of Kunlun City. Li Tianlan wanted to kill Gu Xingyun. He was not Gu Qianchuan's opponent, but he thought that he was not far from Gu Qianchuan. So he and Lin Yuxian appeared on Mount Dong. The plan was actually very simple. Li Tianlan was sure that as long as he gave Gu Qianchuan enough pressure, Gu Xingyun would definitely retreat alone according to his character. This was not only because of Gu Xingyun's caution. At the same time, it was also because Li Tianlan was absolutely sure of his value. The more powerful he was, the more Kunlun City wanted to kill him. As long as he vaguely showed the strength to compete with Gu Qianchuan, Gu Xingyun would definitely let Gu Qianchuan attack him at all costs. He retreated first, not only for the sake of safety, but also for the finishing work after his death. So Li Tianlan never drew his sword from beginning to end, even if he was seriously injured. He wanted Gu Xingyun to retreat alone when he showed his strength. At the same time, he was reluctant to give up this opportunity to leave Gu Qianchuan to kill him. As soon as Gu Xingyun left, he began to draw his sword. Li Tianlan's plan was to use the intangible sword intent to temporarily get rid of Gu Qianchuan's sight and take advantage of Gu Qianchuan's confusion to launch a sneak attack and severely injure or even kill Gu Qianchuan. As for Gu Xingyun would feel that no one in Jianghu state dared to kill him. And it would not take too long for Gu Qianchuan to return to him. So he withdrew easily and decisively. He was right. No one in Jianghu state dared to kill Gu Xingyun, even the Wang family of Beihai. But there was an heir of the Lin clan beside Li Tianlan. On the top of Mount Dong. When Lin Yuxian saw the black Mercedes-Benz leave Purple Gold Pavilion, he already knew that Li Tianlan's plan had succeeded. And it was very successful. He did not know whether Li Tianlan could use his sword intent to severely injure Gu Qianchuan. But to do this, Lin Yuxian had to carry out his task. In the plan, after Li Tianlan severely injured or killed Gu Qianchuan, he would meet him as soon as possible. The two of them would join hands to kill the war god of Jianghu state. The plan was halfway through. Lin Yuxian had no reason to retreat. He did not want to make trouble, but he was never afraid of it. The Mercedes-Benz went down the mountain road and was getting closer to the road under his feet. Lin Yuxian stood up and silently adjusted the machine gun beside him. Or, it was something like a machine gun. This was a weapon fixed on the top of the mountain. Its shape was similar to a multi-barrel machine gun, but its caliber was 6 or 7 times larger than that of an ordinary machine gun. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was a machine gun. A large string of bullets hung on the weapon. This kind of bullets, together with a machine gun, had never been in service in any country's army in the world. The code name was Rainstorm, and the bullets were all small armor-piercing shells. This was a surprise for Gu Xingyun. The Mercedes-Benz team was getting closer and closer. Lin Yuxian grinned and held the body of Rainstorm. "It's really exciting," he whispered to himself and aimed the muzzle at the motorcade on the road down the mountain. At a distance of nearly 800 meters, he fired directly. There was a sudden thunder on the top of Mount Dong. The dazzling and horrible nightmare-like tongue of fire swallowed wildly. Hundreds of small armor-piercing shells rushed out of the muzzle and poured out almost crazily. Rainstorm fired at the top of the mountain. For a time, the violent gunshots almost filled the entire Mount Dong. Da-da-da. The specially modified Mercedes-Benz motorcade was completely in chaos. The bodies, roofs, and windows were broken under the pouring of the armor-piercing shells. 2 Mercedes-Benz rolled down the mountain at the first time. After the explosion, they turned into a towering fire wave. The Mercedes-Benz in the middle lit up at the first time. The fire lit up inside the Mercedes-Benz, but it quietly filled the space outside and wrapped the entire car body. Rainstorm was still pouring wildly. Countless bullets were melted by the fire, and a small number of bullets hit the specially modified Mercedes-Benz. The Mercedes-Benz was bumpy, but it still accelerated forward. "It's a little interesting," Lin Yuxian said with a smile and smashed the rainstorm in his hand, which was about to run out of bullets. He began to stride along the top of the mountain. 1 car and 1 person were completely parallel on the top of the mountain and the road. The Mercedes-Benz was getting faster and faster. Lin Yuxian stretched his body and took a step forward. Then he jumped directly from the top of the mountain, which was hundreds of meters high. The Mercedes-Benz was surrounded by fire. Lin Yuxian's body lit up with lightning. His figure jumped from the top of the mountain and landed directly on the roof of the car with a bang. The body of the Mercedes-Benz was almost completely deformed under the impact of the distance, but it still rushed forward without stopping. Lin Yuxian sneered and directly pulled out a soft sword from his waist. The soft sword was completely straight as steel in the trembling. Lin Yuxian inserted the sword into the roof of the car. Vaguely, a woman's scream came from the car below. Lin Yuxian inserted the sword into the roof of the car to fix his position. He leaned forward and smashed the thick bulletproof glass with a bang. His hand went straight down from the windshield and held the steering wheel. Art. Crack. The Mercedes-Benz continued to rush forward at a speed of more than 120 km per hour, but Lin Yuxian directly pulled the steering wheel off. The car tilted on the mountain road and hit the car next to it at a super high speed. The whole car exploded in the violent collision. In the fire, Gu Xingyun, who was covered in blood, escaped from the Mercedes-Benz with Li Qingqing. Lin Yuxian quietly floated above the 2 people, expressionless. The software in his hand shook gently and then became straight again. A dim yellow color spread to the sword edge. Suddenly, the sword intent around Lin Yuxian soared into the sky. 9th blade to dusk. There was no hesitation. No hesitation. The dim yellow sword light swept across the valley. Lin Yuxian and the sword united and rushed straight to Gu Xingyun. Gu Xingyun's eyes were cold and angry. As soon as his body moved, Li Qingqing beside him suddenly screamed, "No!" She directly stood in front of Gu Xingyun and opened her hands. "No!" Gu Xingyun suddenly roared recklessly. Lin Yuxian instinctively withdrew the sword, but it was completely too late. Chapter 361. There was a big chapter at 12 o'clock last night. Don't miss it. That chapter was yesterday. The wreckage of the car explosion was still burning. The blazing flame and the dim sword intent merged perfectly. The night faded away in the sword intent, and the mountain road became clear. Time seemed to slow down all of a sudden. Gu Xingyun's roar was lengthened countless times, and all the sounds seemed to emerge bit by bit, messy and broken. The sharp sword gradually moved forward in the dim light. Li Qingqing's mind was full of all the fragments of her life that had just begun. From small to large, from far to near, it became clearer and clearer. She knew that her father didn't like her when she was very young. She was the only daughter of Gu Xingyun, the god of war in Jianghu state. She had a noble identity, but she had almost never received the favor she should have enjoyed. In her childhood memory, in addition to the indifference between her parents, all her impressions were the never-ending snow outside Kunlun City. Her mother often sat in her room motionless. Everyone in the Gu family looked at her with complicated eyes. Her half-brother seemed to always dislike her, and her father, who was closest to her, was also lukewarm to her. In Li Qingqing's memory, her father seemed to have only held her a few times since she was a child. When she called him, he would nod, smile when he was in a good mood, and touch her head when he was in a better mood. Sometimes he would ask her what she wanted. This happened very rarely, so Li Qingqing asked for a lot every time. Gu Xingyun also agreed indifferently, and then brought her all the things she wanted every time. On her birthday when she was 8 years old, Gu Xingyun asked her again what she wanted. She thought for a long time and then carefully said that she wanted to practice martial arts. So after that day she had a few super famous teachers even in the whole dark world, and she began to get in touch with Kunlun City's 10 skills of true martial arts. Gu Xingyun never refused her request. That kind of silent promise was deep and gentle. But most of the time his performance had been calm and indifferent. Li Qingqing could always sense the huge gap between her and her father. All the care and doting from him were hesitant and tangled. Even the occasional tenderness seemed so unfamiliar. It was not that Li Qingqing had never been wronged, but as she grew older she became more and more indifferent to this matter. There might be many stories between her parents, but no matter whether those stories were happy or sad, gratitude or hatred, no matter how distant the relationship between father and daughter was, as a father, he had given his daughter everything she wanted since she was young. He had never been stingy. The long sword with the dim yellow sword intent moved forward with an indomitable will. Countless scenes flashed in Li Qingqing's mind, from the beginning to the end, and from the beginning to the end. Li Qingqing suddenly laughed. She suddenly remembered her birthday when she was 9. On that day her eldest brother, who had always disliked her since she was a child, directly threw the birthday cake prepared for her by Kunlun City on the ground. At the same time he tore a plush toy given to her by her mother. Seeing this scene her father did not say a word. Instead he slapped her eldest brother and sent him flying. The reason why Li Qingqing remembered this scene was not because of the joy she felt when she saw her elder brother being beaten, but because her father said something very calmly while waiting for her elder brother who was bleeding from the corner of his mouth. "No matter what, she is still your sister." Li Qingqing wanted to look back at Gu Xingyun. But her thinking was too fast and her movements were too slow. She had no time to turn her head, so naturally she could not see Gu Xingyun's expression. This man, who had been worthy of Jianghu State and Kunlun City for many years, might have many mistakes and even sins. But from the standpoint of Kunlun City, no one was qualified to say that Gu Xingyun was a bad person. No matter what, he was also her father. So when the sword light fell she pounced on it. Without hesitation. The long sword penetrated her chest. The 9th blade, dusk. But dusk was not warm. Instead it was bitterly cold. The fragmented syllables in Gu Xingyun's throat finally converged into a word. No. It seemed that it was not until the moment when Li Qingqing rushed up to stand in front of him that Gu Xingyun really realized how important this daughter was in his heart. He also liked Li Qingqing before, but it was a kind of restrained and reserved love. This kind of love did not affect him to exchange Li Qingqing for the benefits that Kunlun City needed. Because she was Li Shi's daughter. Gu Xingyun also liked Li Shi. But he felt that Li Shi was dirty. Gu Xingyun would not hesitate to exchange her daughter for some things. But it was not until this delicate figure stood in front of him that he completely understood that Li Qingqing was not only Li Shi's daughter but also his own blood. And this time what Li Qingqing exchanged for was his life. It was best to be alive. So he made a profit. But why was his heart so painful? Gu Xingyun's voice was loud and hoarse. This word was shouted so hastily and mournfully that his throat was hurt when he spoke, making a bloody taste in his throat. Gu Xingyun stood up straight. At the moment when Lin Yuxian intended to withdraw his sword but instinctively stabbed forward, Gu Xingyun pulled Li Qingqing and took a step back. A sea of rage suddenly appeared on the burning mountain road. Before all the sword intent at dusk could take effect in Li Qingqing's body, it was shattered by the sea of rage that suddenly appeared. The sea of rage roared, and the majestic and incredible sword intent surged and gathered in an instant. Gu Xingyun's face was pale, but the sea of rage that gathered in the sky in an instant had unparalleled anger and majesty. This was Gu Xingyun's sword intent. In a desperate situation, Gu Xingyun almost desperately restored part of his strength. The sword intent all over the sky became extremely solid and sticky. The sea of rage composed of sword intent covered the night sky, as if the whole world was oppressing Lin Yuxian's living space. Gu Xingyun held his daughter and took a step forward. The sea of rage in the air suddenly surged. Under the night sky, there seemed to be the undulating sound of the tide rising and falling on Winter Mountain. In front of Lin Yuxian, huge waves hundreds of meters high with cold killing intent hit Lin Yuxian mercilessly. This was the riot of the whole sea of rage, with suffocating despair and oppression. Under the huge waves, Lin Yuxian's long sword pierced straight into the sky. For the first time, there was a touch of ruthlessness in his eyes that did not match his gentle appearance. The huge waves with infinite sword intent hit down extremely quickly and violently. Lin Yuxian roared. In the sea of rage, thunder suddenly rose. The overwhelming thunder erupted hysterically with Lin Yuxian as the center in an instant. The endless sword intent filled the air and turned into a sea. The sea was turbulent, bringing up wild waves composed of sword intent. Lin Yuxian stood in the middle of the sea of rage and stabbed upward with his sword. The blue light that rose into the sky was sharp and condensed. For a moment, The whole sea of rage seemed to be dyed blue by Lin Youxian's sword light alone. Gu Xingyun's face suddenly changed. He thought that this young man was just a temporary helper that Li Tianlan found, but he did not expect that the other party would be so powerful. Who was this? With this sword move alone, the other party was enough to be ranked among the young heavenly sons in Jianghu state. The sword intent of this sword move was abundant and overbearing. In Gu Xingyun's view, it even surpassed that of his son, Gu Hanshan. 24 moves of sword? Was there such a figure in the Li family besides Li Tianlan? The infinite thunder light went straight up in the deep sea. The strong and resolute sword light stirred the sea of rage full of sword intent and moved forward. Gu Xingyun's face became paler and paler. But he insisted on taking another step forward. The surging sea of rage was completely crazy. The sea water condensed by sword intent smashed toward Lin Youxian overwhelmingly. Lin Youxian's blue sword light finally rushed out of the blockade and confinement of the sea of rage and went straight into the sky. The shocking thunder in the ninth heaven. The blue sword light turned into a dangerous pale in an instant. The sound of thunder surged. Wherever the sword energy passed, the dense lightning suddenly covered the night sky. Countless lightning began to gather in one place. Below the sky, above the sea of rage, the lightning that gathered turned into beams of light connecting the sky and the earth. The amazing light rushed directly into the sea of rage with the crazy and broken sword energy. The sea was completely boiling. Gu Xingyun finally recognized this sword move. This was the absolute sword in the 24 moves of sword. 22nd blade, break of the sky. Gu Xingyun suddenly turned his head. In the middle of the sea of rage, the young man who evaporated half of his sword energy was already covered with blood, but he stood straight and did not step back. He was so unyielding. Gu Xingyun's eyes were in a trance, but his killing intent became more determined. Li Tianlan alone had already put pressure on Kunlun City. With this young man, if they grew up, how could Kunlun City survive in the future? The boiling sea of rage shrank in the beam of light that penetrated the sky and the earth. The majestic sea continued to shrink and gather. So the sea became a condensed river, but the sword intent became more and more powerful. Gu Xingyun was desperately trying to improve his strength. He took the third step forward. The raging long river was like a waterfall, rushing directly to Lin Youxian, who was covered with blood. It was mighty and powerful. It was a fatal blow. Lin Youxian stared at the long river in the air. Death was approaching, but there was no weakness in his eyes, only high fighting intent. The raging long river boiled and rolled. The sword intent continued to condense and white waves emerged. The long river poured into the earth from the sky. Lin Youxian raised the sword in his hand. The sword light did not light up. Gu Xingyun froze for a moment. He suddenly found that his long river of sword intent had completely stopped in the air. How was this possible? Gu Xingyun's brain was in a mess. The long white river was surging, but it no longer moved forward. Gu Xingyun, whose eyes were already in a trance, finally saw the end of the long river. There was a white dot there. It was small and illusory, almost completely integrated with the long white river. That was Bai Li Tianlan. Gu Xingyun's somewhat confused eyes instantly became focused and deep. Li Tianlan, who appeared on the battlefield silently, stood in front of Lin Youxian. His body floated slightly in the air. There was no violent sword intent. He just stretched out a hand. A finger moved forward. With just one finger he directly blocked the whole mighty long river. For the first time, there was a look of horror in Lin Youxian's eyes. He was not shocked by Li Tianlan's ease. He was very close to Li Tianlan, so he knew the power of Li Tianlan's finger. His movement was very simple, but the power of his whole body seemed to be completely condensed in that finger so that he could block the whole long river. Lin Youxian could clearly feel that the endless power was consumed in Li Tianlan's body with this stalemate. The speed was getting faster and faster and it did not stop. But Li Tianlan seemed to be unaware of it. His power had no end at all, and it seemed that he could support any form of consumption. This was not something that could be explained by the wind and thunder veins. Such power was almost far beyond the foundation that the wind and thunder veins brought to the body. Li Tianlan stretched out his finger. The huge consumption of power suddenly began to increase exponentially. At the end of the river, the waves rolled and turned into a huge whirlpool in an instant. Li Tianlan looked at the whirlpool in front of him with a calm expression. He suddenly smiled and whispered, "Break. Break." It was not shattering. It was not breaking. It was breaking the sea. Sea breaking move. This was the sword intent that had never appeared in the dark world. It was based on the 24 moves of sword, but it was beyond them. This was Li Tianlan's own sword intent. One finger broke the sea. A breeze rose in the night sky. The wind was not fierce, but it was extremely cold. The breeze blew through the river. In an instant, the whole turbulent long river exploded in the wind. The splashes condensed by the sword intent were flying everywhere in the night. The river was scattered in the air. Under the night sky there were sword intent and splashes everywhere. The long river was divided into two into four into 8, thousands of them, and finally scattered quietly in the night sky. Gu Xingyun stared at Li Tianlan as if he had seen a ghost. One sword broke the sea. But from beginning to end, Gu Xingyun did not see Li Tianlan's sword intent clearly. Illusory, shapeless and formless. What the hell was this? Li Tianlan looked at Gu Xingyun quietly. Without the obstruction of the long river of sword intent, Gu Xingyun's figure became extremely clear. He strode through the air soundlessly and without any aura. However, he carried with him an extreme sense of danger. Li Tianlan, how dare you kill me? Gu Xingyun took a deep breath and suddenly shouted angrily, have you ever thought about the consequences? Li Tianlan didn't bother to talk at all and just moved forward. He came to kill. Since he could fight, why did he make a fuss? You are forcing me. You are forcing me. Gu Xingyun suddenly became furious. How dare you force me? The quiet night suddenly froze. All the light disappeared completely in an instant. The space within a radius of 100 meters fell into absolute silence in an instant. In the darkness, the violent sword intent surged up and down with tyrannical power, as if to destroy everything. Gu Xingyun finally condensed his domain by force. This was his 10th unique domain. It was also the most authentic 10th unique domain in the whole dark world today. Even if he couldn't exert all his strength now, it was still the most authentic one. Li Tianlan's footsteps finally stopped in the 10th unique domain. It was dark in the domain. But his figure was still hovering freely instead of floating out of control. The tyrannical sword intent that pervaded the domain strangled him madly. This was like a real unique domain of its own, without the slightest vitality. In the darkness, Li Tianlan raised his arm. In the domain and sword intent that were colder than the surging momentum, Li Tianlan's palm suddenly burst out a pure light. The dazzling light was released to the extreme in his hand, illuminating the void. His blood-stained broken white clothes became extremely real in an instant in the 10th unique domain. Illusory domain, illusory sword intent. Only he was real. Only light. In an instant, Li Tianlan's aura began to rise wildly, rushed out of the domain, crossed the sky and reached the starry sky. At this moment, Li Tianlan was still in the domain. But the so-called domain, the so-called winter mountain, and the so-called night all became fake. Only his figure was real. Because it was real. So it looked extremely huge. It was as if the whole world was under his feet. Finally, sword intent appeared in Li Tianlan's hand. He raised his arm. His movement was neither fast nor slow, but it seemed as if it was natural for him to stretch his arm. All the light in his hand turned into sword intent, which could really tear the sky. The sword was a killing weapon. It could kill people, break the sea, and naturally it could cut the sky. Cutting the sky. Only his own sword intent was the most suitable for him. The most suitable and the strongest. The dazzling light completely bloomed in Li Tianlan's hand. One finger broke the sea. One sword cut the sky. The 10th unique domain began to shake fiercely. The darkness receded, and the whole domain completely melted where the light spread. Gu Xingyun's eyes lit up. It was a battle of life and death, but his eyes were intoxicated. He finally saw Li Tianlan's sword intent. Even if it was only one move, it caused an extremely violent impact on his heart. This was the road of the chosen one. This was the sword of the chosen one. Martial arts, martial arts. If ordinary people's martial arts were still in the category of martial arts, the so-called road of the chosen one was equivalent to entering the domain of Tao. The gorgeous and dangerous light was still blooming. Gu Xingyun seemed to see a real new world. Vaguely, he saw a more powerful road, and he really saw the gap between him and a few people like Wang Tianzong. This was what he had been dreaming of. Gu Xingyun breathed quickly. He was sure that if he could survive tonight and had a few years to recover, he could definitely make further progress within 10 years. Even if he could not surpass Wang Tianzong, he could almost reach the level of that god. The 10th unique domain was still shaking. Gu Xingyun's desire to win was stronger than ever. He spat out a mouthful of blood, held his daughter in his arms tightly, and suddenly roared. In the domain that was on the verge of collapse, countless sword intents suddenly exploded. No matter how highly Tianlan's swordsmanship and sword intent were, absolute quantity could still make up for the lack of quality. The light blooming in Li Tianlan's hand was suppressed again. Gu Xingyun kept moving and the 10th unique domain, which had been almost destroyed, expanded again. In the darkness, the extreme light lit up again with a cold snort from Li Tianlan. The light that was enough to tear the sky suddenly radiated and soared. The expanded 10th unique domain and the light completely blended. There was a sudden silence in the night. The darkness and the light completely blended together, collapsing and shrinking silently. Then there was a loud noise that resounded through the whole Winter Mountain. After the loud noise, the domain and the sword light dissipated at the same time. Li Tianlan, who was covered in blood, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and slowly stood up straight. The field became quiet again. Lin Yuxian sat alone on the ground and his face was pale. However, Gu Xingyun had already taken Li Qingqing away at top speed after the final outbreak. Li Tianlan narrowed his eyes, clenched his fists tightly and did not speak. The sirens and flashing lights at the foot of the mountain lit up at the same time. The garrison of Huading and the police arrived at Winter Mountain almost at the same time. Chapter 362. Second update. After midnight, when Li Tianlan carried Lin Yuxian, who was seriously injured and weak, into the Silver Lake Villa in Winter Mountain, the police station and garrison of Huading had almost surrounded the entire Winter Mountain. Warning lights flashed all over the mountain, and a large number of troops occupied every passage up and down the mountain. The atmosphere was grim and dignified. Li Tianlan entered the villa, closed the door and put Lin Yuxian on the sofa. "Tianlan, is this the property of the Li family?" Lin Yuxian leaned stiffly on the sofa, and his arms trembled unconsciously. It was crazy enough to fight against the god of war of Jianghu State with the strength close to the peak of the thunder-shocking realm, even if the god of war of Jianghu State was seriously injured and his strength was greatly reduced. The reason why the 22nd blade was called one of the 24 moves of sword was that the sword energy was extremely strong, but it also meant the greatest consumption. In Lin Yuxian's current realm, such a sword move was absolutely forced. Once the 22nd blade was used, Gu Xingyun would be seriously injured by his own sword intent even if he didn't do anything. Lin Yuxian's body almost collapsed when he was caught between Gu Xingyun and his own sword intent. If Li Tianlan arrived a few seconds later, the young heavenly son of the Lin clan might really die on the spot tonight. "It's my first time here." Li Tianlan rummaged out a medicine box and said flatly, "The nominal owner of the villa belongs to a Germanic businessman. Clip Jason Andres. Seems to be this name. A Germanic businessman with no special background. His real identity is the super master in Samsara Palace, second only to military counselor and saint. His code name is General." In other words, this was Qin Weibai's property. Qin Weibai had 9 properties in Huading, and there were 2 mansions on Winter Mountain that cost more than 9 figures. The villa in Silver Lake was one of them. When Qin Weibai first appeared around him 3 years ago, she collected his fingerprints. With his fingerprints, Li Tianlan could enter and exit all her properties at will. When the army surrounded Winter Mountain, the Silver Lake Villa area, where the rich gathered and the great hidden power, was the best hiding place. "Oh, General, I've heard of it." Lin Yuxian whistled, but his smile was already a little forced. His face was pale. Because of excessive blood loss, his body became extremely cold, and his teeth began to tremble uncontrollably. Li Tianlan frowned and waved his hand. Silently, Lin Fengting's broken clothes disappeared without a trace. "F*ck me." Lin Yuxian's face changed. He took a deep breath and said in shock, "What are you doing?" "F*ck your sister, apply the medicine." Li Tianlan's mouth twitched. "Lie down. If you don't stop bleeding, you won't be able to see the sun tomorrow." "Damn you, my sister is only 17 this year." Lin Yuxian gnashed his teeth. "Don't even think about it. Get lost." Li Tianlan laughed and scolded him. He applied some extremely expensive hemostatic medicine with a special formula to Lin Yuxian's badly mutilated back and then threw the medicine directly to him. "If you can move, get up and apply the medicine by yourself." Lin Yuxian, who had goosebumps all over his body, hummed and climbed up, and applied the ointment with trembling hands. Li Tianlan rummaged through the medicine box again and threw 2 bottles of internal healing potions at her. "You should also have healing potions, right? It's all destroyed." Lin Yuxian said angrily, Damn it. Even if it is not destroyed, everything will be gone when you wave your hand just now. Li Tianlan smiled, took off his severely damaged white clothes and moved his body. I'll stay here for the next few days. I don't have Zhongzhou state nationality. Even if I did, I couldn't go to the final maneuver to help you. Lin Yuxian was silent for a while and suddenly said, All right. Li Tianlan put the white clothes in his hand on the sofa beside him and sat down. The bloodstains on his body slowly stopped, and intense pain began to spread from every corner of his body. Lin Yuxian's face was a little pale, but he was relieved. He could feel anything even if it was pain. It was much better than being numb. He quietly recalled the collision of his sword with Gu Xingyun tonight. The sea in the 10th unique domain. The light after shattering the heavens. The light and the sea intertwined and surged. The entire scene was constantly being broken down. The sea became sword intent, and the light also became sword intent. The scene became clearer and clearer. Every time the sword intent trembled, it was like a spiritual light that attacked his soul. Lin Yuxian was in a trance. The sword intent kept replaying in his mind. The clear sword intent once again became the sea and the light. He suddenly remembered a saying. The mountain was a mountain and the water was water. The mountain was not a mountain and the water was not water. The mountain was still a mountain and the water was still water. In the sword intent that had become the light and the sea again, the white clothes suddenly appeared in the middle of the light and the sea. He himself was like the sword intent but also like nothingness. He gently pointed one finger to break the sea. Lin Yuxian was suddenly shocked, and his closed eyes opened again. It was not until he recalled that moment in his mind that he suddenly found that Li Tianlan's state at that moment was so deep and vast. He suddenly appeared in the sword intent of shattering the heavens and the 10th unique domain silently. Existence had form. But Lin Yuxian couldn't tell the form of Li Tianlan's existence at that moment. He was nothingness like a sword intent but also like the air. He clearly existed but there was no trace. Lin Yuxian took a deep breath. From the stabilization phase of the thunder-shocking realm to the peak, he had been stuck for 2 years. Tonight there seemed to be an extremely huge opportunity. He hesitated for a moment but still asked, Tianlan. What realm are you in now? I don't know. Li Tianlan shook his head. It can be regarded as the invincible realm, but it can also be regarded as no realm. My path is different from yours, so it's hard to give me an accurate position in the chi-controlling realm, the ice-condensing realm, the fire-flaming realm, the thunder-shocking realm, the half-step invincible realm, and even the invincible realm. The realm is fake and it's good that my combat capability is there. A completely different path. Lin Yuxian froze for a moment. He knew that Li Tianlan's path was different from today's martial arts, but the so-called different and completely different were two different concepts. All of Lin Yuxian's words were stuck in his throat. How precious was a completely different path of martial arts. It seemed that the relationship between him and Li Tianlan was not enough to share such a secret. Li Tianlan didn't mind this. The Lin clan and the Li family were of the same origin, and they stood together this time. When Lin Yuxian needed to answer questions, he didn't mind saying more. Since he made basic level of martial arts, there were really few young people who were qualified to discuss martial arts with him. The most tragic thing was that they were all enemies. Lin Yuxian was undoubtedly the best topic. What is martial arts? Li Tianlan looked at Lin Yuxian and asked seriously. Martial arts is the sword. Lin Yuxian answered without hesitation. Li Tianlan smiled and his eyes were warm. There was no doubt that this was the Lin clan's martial arts philosophy. Because they were of the same origin, this was also the Li family's martial arts philosophy. In the hearts of the Li family and the Lin clan, the so-called martial arts were swords. This is our internal statement. In the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City, there are also different opinions among them. Li Tianlan smiled and said, in the Wang family of Beihai, martial arts is about breaking out. In Kunlun City, martial arts is the formation, which is the essence of our unique skills. In the eyes of many people who don't have powerful legacies, the so-called martial arts is the rise of realms. What's wrong with that? Lin Yuxian wondered. That's right. Li Tianlan nodded. We just have different ideas. In my opinion, the so-called martial Tao is invincibility. Only invincibility. The martial way was invincible. Lin Yuxian shuddered all over. Sword chi, explosiveness, sword formations, and the pursuit of a higher level. They are all correct, but they are all fake. Isn't our ultimate goal of practicing martial arts to be invincible in the world? If we don't even have this goal with such courage, even if we practice martial arts, we can only be non-entities. So martial arts is the combat capability, invincibility. We pursue sword intent, the Wang family of Beihai pursues explosiveness, and Kunlun City pursues sword formations. Our absolute arts all have their own essence. Unlike most people who only pursue realms, our battle prowess can far surpass others of the same realm. We have enough confidence to laugh at them because they only care about pursuing realms and don't seriously temper themselves. This is putting the cart before the horse. Li Tianlan said calmly, in fact it's quite ridiculous. When we laughed at them before, why didn't we reflect on ourselves? Sword intent is the essence of the Li family and the Lin clan. It is the key to the road to invincibility left by the patriarch. The so-called inheritance is just the key. We practice martial arts to be invincible in the world. When we laugh at others for not paying attention to honing themselves, how many people have thought about whether we have forgotten our original intention? Sword intent is our essence, but we've always pursued pure sword intent and we've limited ourselves. Is the martial arts we pursue sword intent? Ridiculous. It is invincibility. From the beginning to the end, it should be invincibility. Sword intent is just an inheritance. It is not a goal we pursue, but a tool on the way to our pursuit of invincibility. The Lin clan and the Li family never lack talented people, and so does the Wang family of Beihai. Why haven't we had a chosen one with real absolute dominance in the dark world for hundreds of years? That's because in the process of gradually becoming stronger, they all got into a dead end and couldn't get out. Lin Youxian's face became paler. He should have been extremely cold due to excessive blood loss, but now his head was full of cold sweat. He suddenly remembered the thought that almost made him break through just now. In his memory, Gu Xingyun's 10th unique domain, his break of the sky, all of them were sword intent. Only sword intent. Martial arts. He also got into a dead end of pursuing sword intent. As his sword intent grew stronger, his martial arts seemed to be farther and farther away from him. Lin Fengting's face was completely pale. I also use a sword. Li Tianlan whispered, but in my opinion my sword is a sword. Without a sword I can use a saber. Without a saber I can kill people with my fists. There is no right or wrong in martial arts. You have a great reason, but you can't be invincible in the world. That's wrong. You don't know shit, but you will be invincible in the world in the end. That's right. In the so-called martial arts, strength is supreme. Isn't that so? What is your current kendo? Lin Youxian recalled Li Tianlan's sword intent. The Li family's sword intent was sharp and fierce, while the Wang family of Beihai's sword intent was turbulent and explosive. What about Li Tianlan? His sword intent was incomparably illusory, but it was extremely real. Heaven-cutting style. Sea-breaking style. Whether it was real or illusory in terms of conception, it seemed to be a notch higher than sharpness and explosive. What is kendo? Li Tianlan laughed and his voice was extremely firm. Kendo is kendo. That's all. From simplicity to complexity, from complexity to simplicity, returning to simplicity. The mountain was still the mountain and the water was still the water. To be specific, my path is different from yours. My path starts with the invincible realm. I was like a sudden thunder at the age of 17 and recultivated. At the age of 19, I temporarily entered the invincible realm and made great achievements. I have experienced the scenery of the 4 realms of martial arts and the invincible realm, which is also a very precious wealth. It is also the foundation of my invincible realm, so recultivation is still a realm. Li Tianlan whispered, if I really want to divide my martial arts into realms, I would like to call my 2 recultivation Nirvana realm. That is, the foundation of the invincible realm. If the foundation is solid, I need to accumulate power and pursue the momentum of the invincible realm. After the general trend is formed, it is time to ask the heart. With the heart of the invincible realm, the essence, chi, and spirit are completely condensed, and that is the final detachment. Martial arts itself depends on itself. The foundation of the invincible realm. The momentum of the invincible realm. The heart of the invincible realm. Finally, it transcended. At that time, Lin Youxian muttered to himself, at that time, can I still be in the invincible realm? Chapter 363. Lin Youxian did not deny this. Li Tianlan's martial arts were clearly in front of him. If Li Tianlan was right, when he reached the end he would be truly invincible in the world. What he wanted was the real invincibility, not the simple invincible realm. This was Li Tianlan's boldness. Lin Yuxian could not speak for a long time. Li Tianlan said a lot, but compared with martial arts it was very little, but the impact on him was unparalleled. Martial arts, sword intent, inheritance, unique skills, invincibility. All kinds of concepts were so clear that the opportunity for him to break through the peak of the thundershocking realm was right in front of him. This opportunity was even enough to affect his road to the invincible realm in the future. This was the grandest and most distant martial arts. Heaven and earth were like a cage. Even if one was invincible, it was difficult to transcend. Only the real transcendence could be called Tao. Thank you. Lin Yuxian looked at Li Tianlan and said seriously. His eyes were a little complicated and self-deprecating. There were young chosen ones in Jianghu state, and naturally there were also in Europe and America. This small circle of young and top people almost represented the top combat capability of the dark world in the next few decades. Lin Yuxian thought that he was not worse than anyone, but at this time he suddenly felt a little ridiculous. Including himself, when all of them were confident that they could become the chosen one of the generation, they did not even figure out martial arts. How ridiculous was that? Lin Yuxian vaguely seemed to see his own path, but the real chosen one had already walked on the most correct path and was far ahead of everyone else. He shook his head subconsciously with a complicated mood. Did you get something? Li Tianlan asked. Lin Yuxian nodded seriously and said, Li Tianlan laughed and was a little happy. Come on, he said. It could be foreseen that, with the relationship between the Lin clan and the Li family, Lin Yuxian would be his absolute ally when Qin Weibai controlled the Lin clan in the future. An ally with no problems in terms of combat capability, potential, family background, and position. Lin Yuxian's continuous strength was more in line with Li Tianlan's interests. So now, is the 24 moves of sword completely useless to you? Lin Yuxian asked. How is it possible? Li Tianlan smiled and said, without the 24 moves of sword, I would not have today's sword intent. This supreme art was the best path to invincibility, but it was not the path to becoming a heavenly talent. Back then our ancestral master was no weaker than a heaven's chosen. That was because this sword Dao was created by him. Since it's self-created, it's naturally the most suitable for me. My sword Dao isn't perfect yet. It only has 9 forms. Cutting the heavens and breaking the seas are among them. There are still 2 comprehensive styles. Everything has just begun. After I perfect it, I don't know whether my kendo will only have 1 style or it will surpass the 24 moves of sword in number. Lin Yuxian nodded thoughtfully. He felt that he had overlooked something, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He turned around and went upstairs. This villa built by the water had not been inhabited for a long time, so it was inevitable that some dust had accumulated in the bedroom. There was a row of men's clothes in the closet, all of which were customized according to Li Tianlan's body shape. They were so new that even the labels were not torn off. Li Tianlan wiped the blood on his body, changed his clothes, went downstairs, and threw another set to Lin Yuxian. Make do with it. When you get better, I'll buy a suitable one. Lin Yuxian took the clothes and put them on. He tidied up his cuffs, but out of the corner of his eye, he saw Li Tianlan sitting on the sofa, staring at the white clothes. What a pity. Li Tianlan said softly, his tone full of regret and regret. Cloud silk was a well-deserved treasure in the dark world. Not to mention its function of being warm in winter and cool in summer, its incredible tenacity was enough to make any master crazy. At least half of the power below the thunder-shocking realm could be resisted by cloud silk. Even in the fight with Gu Qianchuan just now, Gu Qianchuan's less than half of the power was neutralized by cloud silk. Less than half, it didn't sound much, but it was a battle of the invincible realm. Cloud silk can be repaired. In terms of the technical level of Jianghu state, the Dongqing clan can do this and it won't take too long. About a month should be enough. Lin Yuxian looked at the broken white clothes with some envy. The most precious thing about cloud silk was not its tenacious defense, but its rarity. It could only be found by chance. Jianghu state was now the world's most powerful country, with vast land and abundant resources. But there were only 4 clothes made purely of cloud silk, not counting Li Tianlan's. They were the 4 spirits armor, which was famous in the dark world. Samsara Palace had sacrificed a lot of manpower and material resources to get these cloud silk, but they gave them to Li Tianlan after getting them. Lin Yuxian was quite envious of Qin Weibai's deep love for Li Tianlan at all costs, and he admired the generosity of the master of Samsara Palace. If the master of Samsara Palace, who held the murderous weapon Blue Sky Underworld, put on this clothes, her strength could even go to a higher level. Li Tianlan nodded, put away the cloud silk and said slowly, Give it to Rushi first. Repair it as soon as possible. I guess it will be used soon. After the final maneuver, I may go to Snow Country. Snow Country. Lin Yuxian nodded instinctively, but as soon as he said it, he suddenly froze. He finally realized what he had ignored. Tonight, all this was so exciting that he ignored the final maneuver. Wang Xingxiao, Gu Hanshan, and Jiang Shangyu teamed up to deal with Li Tianlan in the final maneuver. Li Tianlan had just cut off one of Gu Qianchuan's arms. And he forced Gu Xingyun, who had recovered some strength, to flee. When they came back, Lin Yuxian could clearly see the blood all over Li Tianlan's body. In his current state, could he still participate in the final maneuver? How are your injuries? Lin Yuxian hesitated. Li Tianlan raised his eyebrows and rolled up his cuffs. There was still some dark red blood on his arm, and there was a wound that had just been torn. But at this moment, his wound was no longer bleeding, and it began to heal gradually. Lin Yuxian opened his eyes wide. My internal injury is not serious, and the external injury has begun to heal. It's not a big problem. Li Tianlan paused and continued, I'll be fine after a sleep. Lin Yuxian was silent for a long time. Then he took a deep breath and scolded with a smile. F***ck, I have seen the videos of your previous 2 moves. I thought your physical strength was your biggest weakness. Now it seems ridiculous. Weakness. Li Tianlan was stunned and did not speak. His martial arts had reached the basic level, and his sword intent had already taken shape. But it was just the beginning. His strongest point right now was his body. Lin Yuxian slowly stood up from the sofa and went upstairs alone. I should be able to break through these days. If you are not here, I will go to the East Emperor Palace to find you. Li Tianlan said. Lin Yuxian went upstairs, found a room at random and went in. Li Tianlan's interpretation of martial arts and his own understanding of martial arts constantly collided with dazzling aura and sparks in his mind. Lin Yuxian sat on the bed, closed his eyes, concentrated and calmed down. In the endless aura he gradually entered the state of meditation. At the moment when his consciousness returned to concentration and purity, Lin Yuxian suddenly thought of his sword again. That sword was not the break of the sky. It was the 9th blade, Dusk. The sword that should have pierced Gu Xingyun's body eventually pierced the girl's chest. At that time in the dim yellow sky, Lin Yuxian did not see the girl's appearance clearly. Now in retrospect he only felt that the girl's eyes were so bright and delicate. He did not know how the girl was now. The one upstairs was meditating and the one downstairs was contemplating. The lights in the hall gradually went out. Li Tianlan stood in front of the window and quietly looked at Winter Mountain outside the Silver Lake Villa. It was late at night outside the window. Lights were everywhere on Winter Mountain. It had been nearly 3 hours since Gu Xingyun was attacked, but things did not subside. Instead they became more and more intense. More and more people came to Winter Mountain. Li Tianlan watched silently, but he was calculating the gains and losses of tonight. He wanted to kill Gu Xingyun, but Gu Xingyun escaped. It was unexpected but reasonable. As an invincible realm expert who ranked 5th on the divine list, no matter how poor he was, he would have the ability to save his life at the critical moment. Li Tianlan felt a little regretful, but he was not upset. Gu Qianchuan lost an arm, which seemed to be a gain. But Li Tianlan was very clear that if he was decisive enough at that time and did not chase Gu Xingyun, Gu Qianchuan, an expert on the holy list with a broken arm, would probably die tonight. However, if he killed Gu Qianchuan and missed the time to chase, Lin Yuxian would also die. Tonight's battle seemed to be reckless, but the consequences should not be too serious. The army came to Winter Mountain, which proved that the attack on Gu Xingyun was no longer a secret. But the most important thing was whether Gu Xingyun would say that the person who attacked him was him. Once Gu Xingyun said that he attacked him, all the majesty of Kunlun City would collapse in an instant. More than 20 years ago, they worked hard to overthrow the Li family with everything they had. More than 20 years later, a descendant of the Li family who had not yet grown up, broke the arm of the second in Kunlun City and made the god of war of Jianghu state flee? This matter was a joke no matter how he looked at it. Of course Li Tianlan was also very sober. If Gu Xingyun had absolute certainty to nail him, even if the majesty of Kunlun City was gone, he would still identify him. Attacking the god of war of Jianghu state. Such a crime could be regarded as treason. If Gu Xingyun had conclusive evidence, he could absolutely use the whole Jianghu state to completely crush him and the Li family. But the problem was that he could not produce enough evidence. He wore a mask tonight. Such a ridiculous cover could play a big role at a critical moment. He did not use the 24 moves of sword of the Li family. All the sword intent returned to nothingness. Except for Lin Yuxian, no one around him knew his plan tonight. As long as he left Winter Mountain, Kunlun City could not produce any evidence. Perhaps Kunlun City would use its own power to nail him to death, but now the Li family was no longer fighting alone. The giant group would not sit idly by, and the academics would no longer have an ambiguous attitude on this kind of thing. Instead, they would clearly support him. In this way, this matter might not be too small, but in the final analysis, it was just a quarrel at the meeting of the decision-making committee. Kunlun City was even very likely not to tell him, but to secretly retaliate. But Gu Qianchuan was not to be feared. Gu Xingyun, Li Tianlan smiled. He did miss the opportunity to kill Gu Qianchuan tonight. But he also got a lot. At least, the result tonight was in line with his expectations. It was a pity that Gu Xingyun did not die, but it was not unacceptable. At the symposium, he had roughly confirmed the degree of Gu Xingyun's serious injury, so he took action tonight. After tonight, Gu Xingyun forced his seriously injured body to burst out his strength, and his injury would be more serious. Even if Gu Xingyun could not die, he could not recover in a short time. It could be foreseen that at least in the next 3 to 5 years, the threat from the absolute strength of Kunlun City that he had to face would become minimal. The pressure that the Li family and he had to face was directly reduced by half. The Wang family of Beihai was still so powerful that it made people desperate. But optimistically, the current situation was much better than the alliance between the Wang family of Beihai and Kunlun City. Without the threat of Kunlun City, the Li family could also put more energy on the Wang family of Beihai. Compared with losing the opportunity to kill Gu Qianchuan, it was more worthwhile to prolong Gu Xingyun's recovery period. Li Tianlan clenched his fists and whispered to himself, "It's worth it." Between gains and losses, whether it was worth it or not, once there was a clear result, there would be no choice. The sky gradually brightened. The morning sun leaped out of the sea and the sky was clear. The sun shone on Mount Dibing with birds chirping and flowers. The verdant and bright Mount Dibing was quiet and peaceful, just like a paradise. Wang Yuetong quietly cleaned her room. Her movements were careful and serious, and she did not miss any corner. This was a room full of the soft atmosphere of a young girl. It was large but not empty. The pale pink walls were warm and soft. The hazy gauze curtain fluttered with the fresh sea breeze blowing through the window. The wind chimes hanging in the room made a pleasant sound. The room was full of large and small plush toys. Some of them were a little old, but they were very clean. Wang Yuetong finished cleaning the room and put all the plush toys one by one. Looking at the spotless bedroom, her eyes were very sad, but there was a hint of a smile in them. A small suitcase was placed at her feet. There were only a few sets of clothes in the suitcase. In fact, there was nothing to pack. She came back this time just to have a look. This room, this palace, this mountain, and even the whole province. When she came back again, she did not know when it would be. "Tong, have you really made up your mind?" A soft and gentle voice sounded behind Wang Yuetong. Summer Solstice walked into the room and reached out to gently stroke Wang Yuetong's short hair. Her eyes were doting and complicated. "Yes." Wang Yuetong nodded hard. "Young people are so naive." Summer Solstice sighed softly and said, "I believe Li Tianlan likes you. But can you be sure whether he loves you or not? The positions between you are destined to bear unimaginable pressure and even torture when you are together in the future. Can you imagine that kind of pain?" "I know." Wang Yuetong whispered, "I have thought about these problems very seriously. But I really can't let him go. It may not be easy in the future, but if I give up on him, maybe my life will be more difficult. Mom, I have decided." Her voice lowered, "I really have decided." Summer Solstice sighed softly, took out a card and gave it to Wang Yuetong. Wang Yuetong shook her head subconsciously. This time when she returned to the Wang family of Beihai, although it was not to break off the relationship with the family, it basically meant leaving the family with nothing. This card was the wealth of the Wang family of Beihai. How could she take it? "Take it as the dowry I prepared for you," Summer Solstice said with a smile. She had said too much to persuade her, but her daughter had made it clear that she wanted to go all the way. No matter how much she said, it would not work. "Take it." Summer Solstice put the card in her daughter's hand, blinked and whispered, "This is my private money. In the future, treat yourself better when you are outside. Silly girl, no matter what happens, don't wrong yourself, especially when you get along with Li Tianlan. Don't give in unconditionally. The feelings between a man and a woman are simple and complicated. It's okay once or twice, but how can there be happiness if you feel wronged too much? If you are not happy, the couple will become a couple with resentment. I don't know what will happen to you in the future, but anyway, you have to remember that this is what you are willing to give up everything for. For a woman, such an opportunity only comes once in her life, and it is a big gamble. If you win, you will be happy. If you lose, your heart will die. Tong, no matter what will happen to you in the future, even if you can't be together and become enemies, I don't want you to hate him. I'm not optimistic about him, but I feel sorry for you. Hating a person is often harder than loving a person. Wang Yuetong blinked desperately, nodded silently, and whispered, Mom, I won't hate him and I won't regret it. Summer Solstice smiled again and whispered, Well, if you are unhappy in the future, you can come back. You are our daughter. We are a family and we don't need to apologize. If he is not good to you, tell me and I will find someone to deal with him. Wang Yuetong took a deep breath and did not speak. She bent down to pick up the suitcase on the ground and quickly walked out of the room. Summer Solstice looked at her daughter's back and sighed softly. There seemed to be a faint exclamation downstairs. Summer Solstice walked out of the room. In her sight, her daughter had reached the hall downstairs. At this time, her husband was standing quietly in front of her. Summer Solstice wanted to say something but stopped on second thought. Finally, she kept silent. Wang Yuetong looked at her father in front of her in a panic. Wang Tianzong's face was calm without the slightest emotion. His eyes swept over the suitcase in Wang Yuetong's hand. Wang Yuetong's body trembled slightly, and she subconsciously wanted to let go of her hand. But then she realized what it meant. Her face turned pale and she held the suitcase tightly. Dad. Wang Yuetong called softly. She glanced at her father and whispered, I'm leaving. Where are you going? Wang Tianzong asked. To Huading. Wang Yuetong bit her lip. Thinking of her destination and her man, she seemed to have more courage. I'm going to find Tianlan. A few hours ago, Li Tianlan attacked Gu Xingyun in Huading. Gu Qianchuan's arm was destroyed by him, and Gu Xingyun was injured again. I have to admit that I was wrong at that time. Even in my eyes, Li Tianlan is now a big shot. You have a good taste in men. Wang Tianzong showed a smile at the corner of his mouth. Not only Wang Yuetong but also Summer Solstice, who heard the news, was shocked and had an incredible expression on her face. Wang Yuetong was not surprised but panicked. She didn't think about Gu Xingyun and Gu Qianchuan at all. She just asked subconsciously, How is Tianlan? I don't know. Wang Tianzong shook his head. Wang Yuetong said nothing and was about to go out. Wang Tianzong reached out and stopped his daughter. Stay here for a few days. Wang Tianzong said calmly. Wang Yuetong's body stiffened. She looked at Wang Tianzong's expression, and her face gradually turned pale. I don't object to you going to Huading. Wang Tianzong said lightly, but that's after the final maneuver. At that time, if Li Tianlan can survive, I will respect your choice. Wang Yuetong's eyes gradually dimmed. Her father said that if Li Tianlan could survive, but in his tone Wang Yuetong only heard the killing intent. Tianlan can destroy Gu Qianchuan's arm. My brother is no match for Tianlan. Wang Yuetong bit her lip and said. He may win. Wang Tianzong said calmly, but he must not survive. If he wins the final maneuver, I will personally send him to hell. He said the last sentence resolutely and decisively, leaving no room for negotiation. Wang Yuetong's face was so pale that it seemed transparent. You stay at home. Wang Tianzong said, Everything will wait until the end of the maneuver. He turned around and walked to the gate. Wang Yuetong stared at his back in a daze. Wang Tianzong's figure walked out of the gate and disappeared into the bright sunshine outside. His figure seemed to be shining with a layer of golden light. The gate of the palace was slowly closed. Wang Yuetong suddenly screamed and seemed to use all her strength. If you kill my man, I will hate you for the rest of my life. I hate you. I hate you. Wang Tianzong's footsteps suddenly froze for a moment. His face seemed to flash with a touch of blue. Wang Yuetong's scream was still echoing. Wang Tianzong did not look back and slowly walked down the steps in front of the palace. A man in black stood at the foot of the steps. Seeing Wang Tianzong come out, he bent down and said respectfully, Your Majesty. Say it. Wang Tianzong's voice was very cold. We have confirmed the headquarters of the Samsara Palace. The black-clothed man's body trembled as he quickly spoke. His code name was Xian Ming, and he was responsible for managing all the intelligence agencies of the Wang family of Beihai. Are you sure? Wang Tianzong asked. Yes. I'm sure. Xian Ming said in a deep voice. Wang Tianzong twitched the corner of his mouth, took a deep breath and said, "Let's go now." He left the palace behind him with steady steps. In the palace, Wang Yuedong's hoarse and desperate cries were faintly heard. Wang Tianzong's eyes were complicated, but his footsteps did not stop. Wang Yuetong had a good eye. Li Tianlan was really strong. But Li Tianlan was an enemy. The stronger he was, the faster he would die. Wang Tianzong had made up his mind that if Li Tianlan really won the final maneuver, he would directly kill Li Tianlan on the spot. Even if Lin Fengting fell out with him and fought with him, he would not give in at all. In today's era, if he wanted to kill a person, no one in the whole dark world could stop him. Not Lin Fengting. Not even deity. He had made up his mind at all costs. So he would not pay attention to Li Tianlan. In the final maneuver a few days later, no matter how dazzling he was, he would just kill him with a sword. As long as he killed Li Tianlan, there would be no shadow in the future of the Wang family of Beihai. If he killed him, Wang Tianzong would only get infinite opportunities and light in the future. What he would lose would be the father-daughter relationship for more than 20 years. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.